Chapter 379. Boom. The two explosive talismans pasted on the gates of the Gao mansion exploded under the control of his transcendence energy. With a loud bang, the two gates of the Gao mansion collapsed. The gatekeeper of the Gao mansion stood in the courtyard and stared at the collapsed gates in a daze. His mind was blank. His master was a respected figure in the fairy's capital. Even if he was no longer the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, he was still the elder brother of concubine Gao, a relative of the royal family. Who would be so bold as to blow up the gates of the Gao mansion? Zhang Chun stood outside the gate and waved at the officials of the imperial clan temple. "Follow me in and arrest the guilty official." The loud noise at the gates had already alerted the people of the Gao mansion. In a split second, more than 10 maids and servants rushed out from various places. As soon as they arrived at the front courtyard, they saw the collapsed gates of the Gao mansion. The former right assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Gao Hong, rushed out of the inner court. Seeing that the main gate of his residence had been blasted open, he was enraged. He glared at Zhang Chun, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets as he snapped, "Zhang, what are you doing?" Gao Hong hated Zhang Chun to the core. Not only because Zhang Chun took his position as the assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, but also because Zhang Chun was Li Mu's #1 lackey. If you hated someone, you would naturally hate everything about that person, including his lackeys. Zhang Chun looked at Gao Hong and said calmly, "There is a case that requires you to go to the Imperial Clan Temple. However, your gatekeeper refused to cooperate, so I can only take forceful measures." The gatekeeper of the Gao mansion hid in a corner, trembling and not daring to raise his head. Gao Hong held back his anger and asked, "What case?" Zhang Chun said, "You'll know when you get there." Gao Hong said coldly, "No matter what, I'm still the royal uncle. You don't have the right to summon me. If you want to summon me, show me the official seal of the Imperial Clan Temple." Zhang Chun looked at a minor official of the Imperial Clan Temple and asked, "Is there such a thing?" The minor official nodded and said, "Lord Gao's sister is the son of the former emperor's concubine, Concubine Gao of the Western Palace. To summon a member of the royal family or a relative of the emperor, you need the seal of the Imperial Clan Temple Master. Indeed, Lord Gao does not have this authority." Zhang Chun looked at Gao Hong and said, "You want the abbot's seal, right? Wait a moment. I'll be right back." Gao Hong's face darkened as he watched Zhang Chun leave with his men. Since Zhang Chun dared to come knocking on his door, he must have gotten hold of something that could be used against him. He couldn't figure it out at the moment. A few days ago, when Li Mu overturned Li Yi's case, they were accomplices. However, they didn't receive any heavy punishment. They were only fined a few months to a year's salary. Everyone thought that it was the end. They didn't expect that it was just the beginning. Without any warning, those officials were all caught in one fell swoop overnight. Zhang Chun, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, who was also the Zongjing Temple's deputy minister, did it himself. There was no need to guess who was behind this. Zhang Chun was Li Mu's #1 henchman. He always fought for Li Mu in the imperial court. He must have been allowed to do this by Li Mu. Obviously, Li Mu didn't just want to overturn Li Yi's case. He also wanted to avenge Li Yi. As for the reason, everyone knew very well. Everyone in Fairy's capital knew that Li Yi's daughter was one of Li Mu's lovers. Not only did she live in his house, but they often walked hand in hand when they went out. They were very close. Li Mu overturned Li Yi's case because Li Yi was wronged and died. He wanted to avenge Li Yi because Li Yi was his father-in-law. Everyone's gaze shifted to where Li Mu was, only to find that there was no one there. Li Mu didn't even come to the imperial court today. Nonsense, this is simply nonsense. The left servant walked out and said in a deep voice, "What is the imperial court trying to do by arresting more than 20 officials for no reason?" Many people looked at Prince Shou in front. Prince Shou shook his head and said, "Don't look at me. I don't know anything." Some people in the imperial court shook their heads and sighed. Prince Shou was a prince and the head of the imperial court. He couldn't even control a minister. He was useless. Mr. Mei said, "Yesterday before Zhang Chun brought people to arrest them, he said that the imperial court has enough evidence." The left servant said with a dark face, "What evidence does he have to arrest more than 20 officials?" Mr. Mei said faintly, "The inner guards don't interfere with the imperial court. If you want to know, you just have to summon Zhang Chun to the imperial court." He turned to look at Shangguan Li. Shangguan Li walked to the curtain and came out after a while. She said, "Summon Zhang Chun." Crepe Myrtle Palace was only a few hundred steps away from the imperial court. He quickly walked into the imperial court in half a cup of tea's time. Mr. Mei looked at the left servant and said, "If you have any questions you can ask Lord Zhang directly." The left servant looked at Zhang Chun and asked coldly, "Assistant Minister Zhang, you arrested more than 20 officials in the middle of the night and caused chaos in the imperial court. Shouldn't you give His Majesty and the imperial court an explanation?" Zhang Chun said, "The imperial court has evidence to arrest people. May I ask what explanation you want?" The left servant said in a low voice, "What crime did the Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue Ai Tong commit that you want to arrest him?" Zhang Chun said, "The Minister-Counselor of the Ministry of Revenue Ai Tong took advantage of his position to embezzle taxes from the imperial treasury. What's wrong with me arresting him?" The left servant was shocked. He asked, "Do you have evidence?" Zhang Chun said, "The evidence is conclusive." The left servant said, "Minister of Imperial Treasury Wu Xing." Zhang Chun said, "Minister of Imperial Treasury Wu Xing used his power to threaten and sleep with young girls. The youngest of those girls was only 8 years old. Shouldn't he be arrested?" The left servant moved his lips and said, "Then the Minister of Imperial Treasury Qin Guang," Zhang Chun continued, "the Minister of Imperial Treasury Qin Guang allowed his younger brother to commit crimes and invade private residences. He bribed the Ministry of Justice to get his younger brother released and exonerated, breaking the law. What's wrong with me arresting him?" He looked at the left servant and said loudly, "There's also Wei Chong from the Taichang Temple, Wang Ning from the Taichang Temple, and Zhuo Xian from the Ceremonies Department. As officials of the Great Zhou, these people acted as a protective umbrella for criminals who trafficked women and children. Shouldn't they be arrested?" He listed the crimes of these more than 20 people one by one. The officials in the court were shocked. They had never heard of such things before. Since Zhang Chun dared to arrest them, then the Imperial Clan Temple might really have evidence of the crimes of so many officials. But how did they find out about these hidden things? Among the officials, some of them realized something. They lowered their heads and squeezed out 2 words from between their teeth, "Zhou Zhong." Chapter 380. In the Imperial Kitchen. Ever since Lu Hanyan and Li Qing opened their hearts to each other, Li Mu didn't want to go home. He didn't want to leave home. Of course, because of this, he came to the palace less often, and he hadn't been to the imperial kitchen for a long time. When it was only Lu Hanyan and the Empress, Li Mu could still take care of them. But when Lu Hanyan came to Shindu and Li Qing moved in, the number of people who needed to be with him increased from 1 to 3. Li Mu was a little busy. This made him realize that he still had a lot of shortcomings in terms of time management. Mr. Lu Sun once said that time was like water in a sponge. If he could make use of the time he spent standing in a daze in the morning court, he could at least cook a bowl of piping hot noodles for the Empress after the morning court. Mr. Mei once mentioned by accident that the Empress liked to sleep in, so she often didn't eat breakfast in the morning. After the court, it was still early before breakfast time, so she might as well eat something to fill her stomach. Li Mu knew why the Empress liked to sleep in. It was because she couldn't fall asleep at night, so she would cook conch porridge with Li Mu in the middle of the night, or enter his dreams to teach him how to cultivate. As a cultivator in the upper 3 realms, she wouldn't feel tired even if she didn't sleep for a month. But cultivators were still people, and nothing could replace the joy and happiness brought by sleeping. Of course, that was in the past. At that time, Li Mu and she were both single. Now, Li Mu had his wife in his arms every night. Unlike the Empress, who had nothing to do during the long nights, he couldn't sleep beside Lu Hanyan and talk to another woman all night, even if that woman was Lu Hanyan's idol. While he was cooking the noodles, several imperial chefs were watching. Finally, one of them couldn't help but ask, "Lord Li, is there some secret to your cooking? Why can't we use the same ingredients and the same steps to make your dish taste the same?" Regarding this point, Li Mu also did not know. With the same ingredients and steps, the food made by these imperial chefs would definitely be better than his. Perhaps the Empress was used to eating the food and liked his taste. After cooking the noodles, Li Mu calculated the time and arrived at Changel Palace just as the morning court session was about to end. Soon a figure walked out from the back of the hall. Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu and said, "Is it because I spoil you too much that you are becoming more and more unruly? You even dare to sneak out of the morning court. And what's that smell?" Her throat moved and her tone instantly softened as she asked, "Did you cook noodles?" Li Mu said, "I guess that your Majesty probably didn't eat breakfast today, so I went to the imperial kitchen to cook a bowl of noodles." Zhou Yi slowly sat down, thought for a moment and said, "You are the deputy commander of the bamboo guards and also responsible for internal affairs. If there is an emergency in the morning court session, you can leave first. I won't blame you. Okay, give me the chopsticks. Watching the Empress eat the noodles in small bites, Li Mu asked, Your Majesty, how is the situation in the court? Zhou Yi slowly finished a mouthful of noodles and then said, You don't know what the result of the trouble you caused will be. The court officials are all in danger and the court is in chaos. The trouble was caused by you, so you are responsible for pacifying it. Li Mu said, These more than 20 guilty officials deserve to be punished. Although it will cause chaos for a short period of time, as long as it's properly arranged, it won't affect the court too much. Your Majesty, you can quickly promote some experienced officials without any background to replace their original positions in the departments of those guilty officials. This way the impact can be minimized and the normal operation of the Yamen can be maintained. At the same time, Your Majesty can also publicize the crimes of these officials, and use this to win over the people. After Lord Li Yi overturned the case, the people of the 36 counties will greatly increase. After punishing these corrupt officials, Your Majesty's reputation will reach the peak, and you will not be inferior to the previous wise emperors of Great Zhou. It will only be a matter of time before you surpass Emperor Wen. Zhou Qiong didn't seem to be interested in Li Mu's pancake at all. Her mind was completely focused on the bowl of noodles in front of her. She was puzzled. The same noodles and the same side dishes. Why was it that the imperial chef's dish didn't taste as good as Li Mu's? She waved her hand and said, Just do as you said. Go and arrange it. Walking out of Chang'e Palace, Li Mu's heart was slightly heavy. He was a little worried. If the Empress favored him so much and let him make all the decisions, the court officials might be jealous and label him as a favored official who caused chaos. They might band together and get rid of him. No, he had to go back and fix the law bell as soon as possible. If the worst happened, the safety of his family would be guaranteed. When the time came, as long as the law bell covered the Li residence, there would be time to slowly shake people off. Li Mu returned to the secretariat. Lu Yi was about to leave the assistant minister's office, but when she looked up and saw him, she subconsciously retracted her foot. At the same time, in the Zongjing temple not far from the secretariat, Zhang Chun looked at Prince Shou and said, Prince, without your seal it won't be easy for me to catch people. Prince Shou shook his head and said, If I give you my seal and let you catch our people, wouldn't I be in a difficult position? Zhang Chun said, According to the law, Gao Hong should be arrested. Prince Shou shook his head and said, Whoever wants to arrest him can do it. In any case, I'm not arresting him. Zhang Chun gritted his teeth and said, Then you are bending the law for personal gain. The next time I go to the imperial court, I will report you in the Golden Palace. As an official of the Zongjing Temple, you are bending the law for personal gain and shielding your accomplices. Your crime is not light. Prince Shou said angrily, Are you threatening me? Zhang Chun said indifferently, This is persuasion. Prince Shou suddenly sighed and said, You are threatening me with impeachment. If I arrest Gao Hong, they can't blame me. Show me the official document and my seal. Not long after, Zhang Chun brought people out of the Zongjing Temple and came to the southern courtyard, in front of the Gao residence. The morning court had already ended, and Gao Hong had already received news that Zhang Chun was not targeting him. Last night, more than 20 officials in the imperial court were arrested by the Zongjing Temple. Without exception, these 20 people were all officials of the old party. Gao Hong found it hard to believe that the Zongjing Temple had something on all of them. Even the Empress's internal guards did not have this ability. There was no doubt that there was a traitor among them. As for who the traitor was, it couldn't be any more obvious. Gao Hong gritted his teeth and said, Zhou Zhong, you should be hacked into pieces. As the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Zhou Zhong had gained their trust over the years. The Ministry of Justice had also become a shelter for the old party officials. No matter what crimes they committed, they could be cleared of any crimes through the Ministry of Justice. Zhou Zhong had helped the old party officials time and time again, and his status in the old party had also risen. At the same time, Zhou Zhong also had many things on them. Facts had proven that the more they valued someone, the deeper they were hurt. In just a month, Zhou Zhong had betrayed them twice. Previously, when he turned himself in and overturned Li Yi's case, he had already caused the old party to lose an arm. This time, although the officials he targeted were not high-ranking, the scope was huge. The old party would probably suffer another blow. However, this was not necessarily a bad thing. After this, the higher-ups would probably not tolerate Li Mu anymore. Even if it went against the emperor's will, they would resolutely get rid of him. Before that, he just needed to wait for news. Gao Hong did not receive any news, but Zhang Chun did. Looking at the official seal of the Imperial Clan Temple, Gao Hong said in disbelief, You stole His Highness's seal. Bullshit. Zhang Chun glared at him and said, "Do I need to steal it? I just need to tell him that you, Gao Hong, are guilty." If he didn't seal it, he would be bending the law for favoritism and covering up for his accomplice. I will have the imperial court impeach him, and he will confess everything. Gao Hong's lungs were about to explode. He gritted his teeth and said, "Coward." Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "If you want to scold him, go to the imperial clan temple and scold him in front of him. Lord Gao, do you want to leave by yourself or do we have to escort you?" Gao Hong snorted and said, "I'll leave by myself." He looked coldly at Zhang Chun and said, "Just you wait. Li Mu won't be able to jump around for long. When the time comes, the first one to die will be you." Zhang Chun glanced at him and said, "You might not be able to wait until that day." After having two people send Gao Hong to the imperial clan temple, Zhang Chun waved his hand and said to the others, "Go to the next house." A moment later, at the Commandery Prince Mansion of Nanyang, the people of the imperial clan temple knocked on the door for a long time, but no one answered. A low-ranking official helplessly retreated and said, "Lord, there's no one." Zhang Chun said indifferently, "Put on the explosive talisman." The two low-ranking officials stuck a few pieces of fulu on the door of the Commandery Prince Mansion of Nanyang. Zhang Chun used his magic power to control the fulu from a distance, and a powerful wave of spiritual energy erupted from the pieces of paper. However, as soon as the wave of spiritual energy was produced, a wave of water appeared on the door of the Commandery Prince Mansion of Nanyang. Wherever the wave of water passed, the waves of spiritual energy produced by the fulu were easily wiped out. A low-ranking official said, "The protective formation." He walked to Zhang Chun and said, "Lord, the protective formation here is too strong. We can't break it." Zhang Chun asked, "How did the Imperial Clan Temple solve this kind of problem in the past?" The low-ranking official said, "We would send an official document to the Ministry of Personnel and ask them to send a high priest from the High Priest Department." Zhang Chun thought for a while and said, "Let's go back to the Imperial Clan Temple first. I'll write an official document for you to send to the Ministry of Personnel." The low-ranking official looked at him and reminded, "Lord, you're the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel." Zhang Chun slapped his head and said, "How could I forget about this? Come, follow me to the Ministry of Personnel." Soon, there was no movement outside the Commandery Prince Mansion of Nanyang. Outside the door, the Commandery Prince of Nanyang waved his sleeves and snorted, "You're courting death." Without this incident, perhaps the higher-ups would continue to tolerate Li Mu. After this incident, getting rid of Li Mu was a top priority. At the same time, in a deep house in the southern court, there was a sound of gnashing teeth. Li Mu can't be kept alive anymore. This person's threat is even greater than Li Yi's back then. We must get rid of Li Mu, but His Majesty. With His Majesty's protection, it's impossible to get rid of him through the imperial court. If we want to get rid of Li Mu, we must restrain His Majesty and use special means. I'll go to the 100 Rivers Academy and meet the Dean. I'll go to the Myriad Scrolls Academy. Chapter 381. The four major academies had always held a special position in the Great Zhou. Although they did not directly participate in the politics of the imperial court, the academy presidents could restrict the emperor in the name of righteousness. Back when the former emperor was still on the throne, it was because of his arbitrary actions that the Great Zhou was plagued with internal and external troubles. The atmosphere was foul, and the faith of the people fell to the lowest point in the past century. At that time, the four major academies worked together. Four Seventh Realm powerhouses suppressed the imperial court in an unparalleled manner and completely took away the former emperor's authority. Now, the empress's special favor for Li Mu had repeatedly caused unrest in the imperial court. The four major academies had enough reasons to restrict the empress and stabilize the imperial court. If Li Mu had obediently been her favored official, it would have been fine. The old party would not take the risk of offending the empress and attack him just because she doted on him. However, his existence had already greatly damaged their vitality and strength. If this continued, even if the old party did not perish at the hands of the Zhou clan, they would perish at the hands of Li Mu. Li Mu must be eliminated. For this, they did not hesitate to force the emperor to abdicate. 100 Rivers Academy. A middle-aged man in luxurious clothes looked at Vice Academy President Qin and said, "I want to see the Academy President." Vice Academy President Qin asked, "The Academy President is currently in seclusion. What is the matter, Your Highness King Ping?" King Ping said solemnly, "This is a matter of great importance. The Academy President must come out of seclusion." Vice Academy President Chen said, "What exactly is the matter? Can you tell me first?" King Ping said in a deep voice, "The favored official Li Mu has bewitched the emperor and caused chaos in the imperial court. His Majesty has been bewitched by him and indulged him in every possible way, allowing him to wreak havoc in the imperial court. If this continues, the consequences will be unimaginable. I would like to ask the Academy presidents to persuade His Majesty to punish the demonic official Li Mu and return peace to the imperial court." Vice Academy President Chen glanced at him and shook his head. However, what the Academy sees is not so. Li Mu is called Qing Tian by the people of Fairy's capital and is extremely loved by the people. Outside, he single-handedly dealt a heavy blow to the 10 demonic sections. Internally, he overturned the case of the favored official who was wrongly killed more than 10 years ago and punished the lawless officials in the imperial court. Because of what he has done, the people's faith in the great Zhou has reached its peak in 50 years, far surpassing the time of the emperor. It is inevitable that His Majesty's favor. Their relationship with the imperial court was a cooperative relationship, not a subordinate one. The consecrated department existed in the previous dynasty and had always been under the control of the old faction. Ever since someone tried to assassinate Zhou Zhong in the consecrated department, Li Mu decided to find an opportunity to reorganize the department. However, he had been busy with other things these days and delayed this matter. Now, he was almost done with the matters at hand and could start to clean up the consecrated department. Before that, he had to help Zhang Chun solve the current problem. There were not many powerhouses in the ancestral temple. They could not be compared to the consecrated department and could not break the formation of the Duke of Nanyang's residence. Li Mu walked out of the residence and said, "Let's go. I'll go with you to take a look." The Duke of Nanyang's residence. The Duke of Nanyang observed the situation outside the door through a mirror. Several officials of the ancestral temple stood there, but Zhang Chun had disappeared. This time, Li Mu suddenly went crazy and let Zhang Chun capture so many officials of the old faction. This really surprised the Duke of Nanyang. After the surprise, he was delighted. The reason why the higher-ups tolerated Li Mu was that although Li Mu had damaged the interests of the old faction, it was not to the extent that they would completely fall out with the Empress and get rid of Li Mu at all costs. Now it was time. Because Li Mu's actions had shaken the foundation of the old faction in the imperial court. The entire old faction did not hesitate to ask the Academy for help and restrain the Empress in order to get rid of Li Mu, a thorn in their flesh. In the end, Li Mu was killed by his arrogance. What the Duke of Nanyang had to do was wait. He was waiting for the higher-ups to make a move. When Li Mu died, Zhang Chun and the others would be like chickens and pottery dogs, unable to withstand a single blow. While the Duke of Nanyang was waiting, he saw the figures of Zhang Chun and Li Mu appear in the mirror. When he saw Li Mu, a trace of impatience appeared on his face. He gritted his teeth and said, "Why haven't you made a move yet?" Then he saw Li Mu and Zhang Chun outside, trying all kinds of methods to break the array of the Duke of Nanyang's residence. The Duke of Nanyang sneered. This array was set up by the array masters of the Spirit Array sect. Even a 6th realm expert would have to spend some effort to break it. Li Mu and Zhang Chun were overestimating themselves. Outside the Duke of Nanyang's residence, Li Mu also discovered the extraordinariness of this array. This array could absorb attacks from the outside world and even turn the attacks or the spirit qi in the Fulu into one's own. It was not an ordinary defensive array. It might have been set up by an array master. Although Li Mu had the memories of the Thousand Illusions Venerable Master, he knew that most of those arrays were evil arrays. He did not have a deep understanding of the orthodox arrays. This almost eliminated the possibility of him using ingenuity to break this array. Since he could not use ingenuity, he could only use brute force. Li Mu whistled and the Dao bell flew out of his ear. In the blink of an eye, it grew to the height of a human. Li Mu pointed at the array outside the Duke of Nanyang's residence and said, "Crash into it." Buzz. The Dao bell responded with a buzz. Then it flew high into the air and swooped down, crashing heavily into the defensive array. A burst of light flowed on the array. It resisted stubbornly for a few breaths before the light on it quickly dimmed. Zhang Chun strode forward and slammed the door a few times. He shouted, "Xiao Yun, Duke of Nanyang, the Imperial Clan Temple is handling a case. Hurry up and open the door. Don't hide inside. I know you're at home. Hurry up and open the door." Chapter 382. Zhang Chun pounded on the door like he was announcing a funeral, but no one responded. He channeled his mana into his palms and slammed them down. The two doors collapsed inwards and Xiao Yun, the Duke of Nanyang, appeared in front of him with a gloomy face. Zhang Chun stared at the Duke of Nanyang unhappily and asked, "The Imperial Ancestral Temple has summoned you to close your residence. Are you resisting arrest?" The Duke of Nanyang, the former Minister of Personnel, had fallen to the point where his residence was broken down and humiliated. The Duke of Nanyang could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He wanted nothing more than to kill Li Mu and Zhang Chun. Thinking that the two of them would not last long, he forcefully used his mana to suppress his anger. He looked at Zhang Chun and said coldly, "Why would the Imperial Ancestral Temple come to my residence for no reason? I thought it was a bold bandit who attacked my residence." Zhang Chun said indifferently, "Whether it is for no reason or not, you will know once you follow me to the Imperial Ancestral Temple." The Duke of Nanyang said, "Do you have the official document from the Imperial Ancestral Temple?" Zhang Chun took out the official document with the seal of the Imperial Ancestral Temple and waved it in front of him. He asked, "Is this enough?" The Duke of Nanyang said calmly, "If that is the case, let's go." Even as a duke, he could not openly resist the Imperial Ancestral Temple, because it was equivalent to resisting the Imperial Court. However, this did not mean that he would submit to Zhang Chun and Li Mu. King Ping and the others had already gone to the academy to discuss with the dean. Eliminating Li Mu was already the top priority of the Shao clan. Perhaps at this moment, Bai Chuan and the two deans of the Myriad Scroll Academy had already taken action to restrain the Empress. The experts that King Ping and the others had arranged to clean up the Empress and kill Li Mu were already on their way here, Bai Chuan Academy. In the northeast corner of the academy, there was a bamboo forest that was green all year round. The students of Bai Chuan Academy would not easily approach this place. Everyone knew that this was the place where the dean cultivated. The dean of the academy was one of the few experts in the Great Zhou. He was deeply respected and loved by the students, and no one would disturb his cultivation place. In the depths of the bamboo forest, in front of a bamboo house, a hearty laughter could be heard. Beside the stone table in front of the bamboo hut, the man in white put down a word and said with a smile, "Zhao Qingsong, I haven't seen you in 2 years. Your chess skills are getting worse." The middle-aged man opposite him waved his hand, and the black and white chess pieces on the chessboard quickly flew up and returned to their respective baskets. He looked at the man in white and said, "What is there to show off? I was just careless and distracted. Otherwise you would have lost 15 minutes ago." The man in white asked, "What can distract you?" The middle-aged man said, "I don't know if this change in the imperial court is good or bad." The man in white thought for a moment and said, "You mean that young man named Li Mu?" The middle-aged man said, "Who else could it be?" The man in white nodded and said, "Indeed. At such a young age he has such a natural disposition. He has gathered the faith of the people in Shindu, can communicate with the heavens and earth, and can achieve the Tao with his words. He is also extremely talented in the Fulu Tao, and made the Fulu school bet its future on him. He can be said to be a hero of his generation. What kind of people are the Shao clan that you support? Why do they have to go against him instead of keeping the Zhou clan in check?" The middle-aged man looked at him and said, "The Zhou clan that you support is not much better than the Shao clan." The man in white crossed his arms and said calmly, "I just can't stand Xiao Jing's actions. If Emperor Qing knew that the crown prince he chose was even more muddle-headed than him, and almost caused the great Zhou to be doomed eternally, he might as well smear that essence on the wall." The middle-aged man coughed softly and said, "Zheng Xingxue, you are the head of a school after all. You should at least show some respect to the late emperor and Emperor Qing." The man in white waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about those disappointing things. Li Mu is favored not only because he is handsome. His method of stabilizing the hearts of the people is really useful. In less than a year, the faith of the people in the various counties has surpassed the peak of the reign of Emperor Qing and the late emperor. If this can continue in the next 10 years, the glory of the reign of Emperor Wen may be reproduced." The middle-aged man seemed to think of something and murmured, "Could it be that he is also one of the descendants of the extinct 100 schools? There seem to be many among the 100 schools who cultivate with the faith of the people. He has always been trying to reform the law. Could it be the school of legalism? Establishing a heart for heaven and earth, establishing a life for the people, inheriting the lost knowledge of the past saints, establishing peace for all ages." The man in white whispered a few words and said, "It sounds more like the Confucian school. He has the ambition of ruling the world and is full of righteousness. It is very likely that he is a descendant of the Confucian school." The middle-aged man put down a chess piece and rubbed his chin. He said, "The Confucian school has always been active in the court and respected etiquette. However, his actions are bold and radical, seeking change. It is not like the Confucian school but more like the school of legalism. The man in white put down another chess piece and said, "Whether it is the Confucian school or the school of legalism, those who can rule the country are righteous. Let him be, the Zongjing Temple." The prison of the Zongjing Temple, which had always been cold and cheerless, was especially lively today. More than 20 court officials were locked together, all frowning. Most of them had been brought from their homes by the people of the Zongjing Temple last night. Some of the officials had their doors blown up by Zhang Chun while they were eating dinner. Some of them had been pulled out of their beds while they were being intimate with their concubines. At first, everyone was panic-stricken, but after arriving at the Zongjing Temple and seeing so many familiar colleagues, they slowly calmed down. When they saw the former Assistant Minister of Personnel Gao Hong and the Duke of Nanyang being arrested, they were even more reassured. Of the two of them, one was a relative of the imperial family and the other was a member of the imperial clan. The higher-ups would definitely not let them stay in the Zongjing Temple. When the time came, they would be able to save them along the way. After calming down, they began to curse the main culprit. "This damn Zhou Zhong. I've really misjudged him all these years. He doesn't have many days left and he still wants to drag us down with him." Gao Hong did not curse like the others. He knew very well that Zhou Zhong had been sitting in the position of the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice all these years and had a lot of information on them. He no longer had the golden ticket of exemption from death and was no longer the Assistant Minister of Personnel. Once those crimes were confirmed, it was enough for him to die several times. In the cell next door, the Duke of Nanyang was meditating with his eyes closed. At a certain moment, he opened his eyes and glanced at Gao Hong. He said indifferently, "Why are you panicking?" Gao Hong strode over and asked, "Duke, are you sure that the higher-ups will make a move on Li Mu?" The Duke of Nanyang said, "Li Mu has already forced them into this situation. Do you think they will continue to tolerate it?" Gao Hong said uneasily, "But it's been so long. Why hasn't there been any movement at all?" The Duke of Nanyang said indifferently, "What's the hurry? Perhaps they are already on their way." Gao Hong was still worried. He walked out of the cell and said to a jailer, "Go and invite His Highness Prince Shou here." Hearing this, the jailer quickly walked out of the prison. Although the prisoners in the cell were all criminals, they still had a higher status than the jailers. As a lowly jailer, he did not dare to disobey these people. After a while, Prince Shou walked in from the outside. He looked at the two of them and said, "What's wrong with you?" Prince Shou patted his shoulder and said, "Don't worry, it's fine." Gao Hong let out a long sigh of relief. Then, excitement appeared on his face as he asked, "When will Li Mu die?" Prince Shou let out a sigh of relief and said, "When I save you." Gao Hong finally relaxed and sat down slowly. He leaned against the wall and said, "I can't wait any longer." Prince Shou was silent for a moment. Suddenly he looked at the two of them and said, "Are you hungry? What do you want to eat? I'll get someone to send it in." Chapter 383. The officials who were locked up in the Zongjing Temple lived a life of luxury at home. Naturally, they weren't used to the food of the Zongjing Temple. As the head of the Zongjing Temple, Prince Shou took this into consideration and sent them food from the restaurant outside the palace. In the prison, the officials were eating heartily. "This pork shoulder is from the Wafting Fragrance Restaurant." "It's definitely from the Wafting Fragrance Restaurant. The smell of the wine can't be wrong. The food of the Zongjing Temple is really hard to swallow. The Wafting Fragrance Restaurant is the best. Thank you, Your Highness Prince Shou." Other than having their freedom restricted, the 20 officials didn't suffer much in the Zongjing Temple. Prince Shou arranged a single cell for each of them and changed the bedsheets. In order to protect their privacy, he even had people separate the cells with curtains. 3 meals a day: breakfast, lunch and dinner. 2 hours in advance, the prison guards would send the menus from the various restaurants in the divine capital. Each of them could order 4 dishes, 1 soup and a pot of wine. If they were hungry in the middle of the night, they could even order supper. For this, Prince Shou specially invited the chefs of the Wafting Fragrance Restaurant to the Zongjing Temple to be on standby. Even if these officials had more needs in the middle of the night, the chefs would have to crawl out of bed to satisfy them. In terms of food, the food these officials usually ate at home wasn't as good as the food in the Zongjing Temple. Not only that, Prince Shou even considered their physical needs and used his sedan to secretly bring the girls from the brothels outside the palace into the Zongjing Temple to comfort these officials at night. This made the officials in the prison change their impression of Prince Shou. Other than his stupidity and cowardice, Prince Shou still had his shining points. Despite the risk of being impeached by the censor, he still took care of these criminal officials meticulously. This wasn't something that anyone could do. It was really good to have one of their own in the Zongjing Temple. In the courtyard of the Zongjing Temple, Zhang Chun watched as the prison guard sent the food made by the wafting fragrance restaurant's chefs into the prison. He looked at Prince Shou and said slowly, "Your Highness, isn't this a little too much?" "Too much?" King Shou glanced at him and said, "How is this going overboard? When you took special care of Li Yi's daughter, did I say anything overboard? Why are you like this?" Zhang Chun was stunned. "I just covered her cell with a curtain and changed her bed." King Shou said, "I also covered up their cells and changed their beds." Zhang Chun looked at the busy figures in the kitchen of the Zongjing Temple and said, "But you brought the chef of the restaurant into the palace. Isn't that too much?" King Shou said, "Is this too much? This is not too much at all. Let me tell you what is too much. Li Mu used His Majesty's imperial kitchen to cook for other women. This is what is too much." Zhang Chun was stunned and said, "But you can't let them drink. The imperial ancestral temple strictly forbids prisoners from drinking." After that, he waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about the wine you gave to those guilty officials. You even found women for them. What do you think the Zongjing Temple is? A restaurant or a brothel?" King Shou glanced at him and said, "Ordinary prisoners have to eat a full meal before they are executed. Are you in charge of the Zongjing Temple or am I?" Zhang Chun said angrily, "You?" Then he seemed to realize something and looked at King Shou in shock. King Shou sighed and shook his head. Zhang Chun silently shut his mouth. After thinking for a while, he said, "Even if you want to find women from the brothel, Your Highness' taste is too unique. You don't let them enjoy but let them suffer. I know of a brothel in Luoyang. The women there are very beautiful." King Shou said indignantly, "What's wrong with my taste? They are fat and chubby. Aren't they good?" In the prison, two officials had just finished their sweet and sour fish. As they picked their teeth with the fish bones, they complained, "Everything about His Highness King Shou is good, but I really can't agree with him when it comes to women. I can't even bear to touch the women he finds." King Shou walked in and said, "If you're not satisfied, I'll give you a beautiful one tonight." The official smiled and said, "Thank you, Your Highness." King Shou walked to the innermost cell and asked Commandery Prince Nanyang, "Are you used to it?" Commandery Prince Nanyang said, "Not really, but thank you for taking care of me." At first, Commandery Prince Nanyang looked down on King Shou. Although King Shou was one of the 7 one-word princes and his status was much higher than his, everyone in Luoyang knew about King Shou's cowardice and incompetence. Now, although his evaluation of King Shou's cowardice and incompetence did not change, he did not hate him as much. King Shou squatted at the door of the cell and said, "Nanyang County is such a good place. Why did you come to Luoyang in the first place?" Commandery Prince Nanyang smiled and said, "Nanyang is good in every way except for one thing. It's not Luoyang." King Shou murmured, "Luoyang, what's so good about Luoyang?" Commandery Prince Nanyang said, "Power, wealth, women, cultivation resources. Luoyang has everything you want. It's thousands of times better than Nanyang County." King Shou sighed and said, "Although Luoyang is good, it's also dirty." Commandery Prince Nanyang did not hear what King Shou said clearly and asked, "Brother, when will you let us out?" King Shou said, "You know what you've done. If I let you go just like that, I won't be able to answer to the people in the imperial court. Instead, the new party will have something to use against you. Therefore we still have to put on a show." Commandery Prince Nanyang asked, "How do we put on a show?" King Shou said slowly, "You'll still be sentenced to death. Then you'll be sent outside to be executed. Of course this is all an act. The executioner's knife won't really cut you down. The dean will use his great power to create an illusion to make the people think that you're really dead. After that, you'll have to appear in Luoyang with a new identity." Commandery Prince Nanyang frowned and said, "So troublesome?" King Shou said helplessly, "Do you think what you've done is a small matter? According to the crimes that Zhou Zhong has confessed, each and every one of you will be beheaded. This is the only way to save your lives. From today onwards, Commandery Prince Nanyang is dead. You'll have a new identity. At that time, we'll find a way to let you enter the imperial court again. After that, you'll get back everything you've lost." Commandery Prince Nanyang had a thoughtful expression as he carefully considered King Shou's words. Indeed, since Li Yi's case was overturned, Commandery Prince Xiao Yun was no different from a dead man in the Great Zhou. His official position was revoked and he would never be employed by the imperial court again. Instead of using the useless identity of Commandery Prince Nanyang, he might as well change his appearance and start a new life. If King Shou really let him go so easily, Commandery Prince Nanyang would be suspicious. Li Mu and the Zhou clan were watching. If he let them go, King Shou wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. However, his plan was so meticulous that it wasn't possible for him to be deceived. It was most likely a decision made by the higher-ups. At this moment, King Shou continued, "I need all of you to act out this scene. Don't mess it up. Otherwise, all your previous efforts will be wasted and no one will be able to save you." Commander Prince Nanyang no longer had any doubts. He nodded and said, "I understand." King Shou patted him on the shoulder and said, "Remember, even if a knife is placed on your neck, you must remain calm. This is because the executioners this time are all our people. Alright, remember to tell the others. Otherwise, if they mess it up, everyone will be implicated and Li Mu won't be able to get rid of them." Commander Prince Nanyang said, "Don't worry. If anyone dares to mess it up, I'll take their life." In the court of the Zongjing Temple, Zhang Chun looked at the few guilty officials kneeling before him. He picked up a document and read it aloud. Minister Counselor Ai Tong of the Ministry of Revenue. During his reign, he coveted a huge amount of tax from the national treasury. According to the law of the Great Zhou, he is sentenced to death by beheading. Minister Wu Sheng of Guanglu Temple. According to the law of the Great Zhou, he is sentenced to death by beheading. Wei Chong, Wang Ning and Zhuo Xian. As officials of the Great Zhou, they participated in the trafficking of women and children and acted as a shield for evil forces. They are sentenced to death by beheading. Minister Qin Guang. They are sentenced to death by beheading. When Zhang Chun announced the sentence, there was no fear on the faces of the officials in the court. Some of them even looked at each other and laughed. It wasn't that they weren't afraid of death. It was just that King Shou had already made it clear to them that this was just an act. When the time came, not only would they not die, but they would also usher in a more glorious life with a new identity. The death penalty documents of these officials had already been reviewed multiple times. After Zhang Chun announced the sentence in the court, more than 20 people were escorted to the execution ground. King Shou stood outside the Zongjing Temple and nodded at all the guilty officials who walked out of the temple. After receiving the hint from King Shou, everyone felt more at ease. They rushed to the execution ground without any fear, looking quite resolute. On the execution ground. Screens surrounded the execution ground. The people below the execution ground couldn't see the specific situation on the execution ground. This time, those who were to be executed were all officials of the imperial court. There were even relatives of the emperor. The scene of their execution couldn't be seen by the people. Li Mu held Li Qing's hand and stood in the crowd. The main culprits and accomplices who framed her father back then were almost all here. Li Mu promised her that all the culprits of the case back then would receive the punishment they deserved. Behind the screens, more than 20 people knelt there. There was still no fear on their faces. Some of them even looked back at the executioner with a smile. Even though the executioner was used to big scenes, he still felt goosebumps from the strange gazes of these people who were about to die. Zhang Chun sat at the executioner's seat. He looked up at the sky, grabbed a bunch of sticks and threw them out. He said, "The time is up. Start the execution." The executioner's knife was raised high and quickly brought down. Looking at the heads rolling next to him, one of the officials sighed in his heart. A seventh realm cultivator was indeed a seventh realm cultivator. This kind of realistic illusion almost fooled him, let alone the people. There were also a few people whose expressions changed when they noticed the blood of the people next to them splattering on them. However, the executioner behind them didn't give them time to think. With a slash of the knife, the heads were separated from the bodies and their souls scattered. Before and after the execution ground was completely silent. In the past, before the execution, the prisoners would cry and howl. This was probably the quietest execution that the people of the fairies' capital had ever seen. King Shou stood outside the execution ground and sighed deeply. He muttered, "In your next life, be a good person." Chapter 384. The execution was very strange. Even the people outside the execution ground could tell that something was wrong. They had seen executions in the past. It was normal for the prisoners to cry and scream before they died. There were also many who yelled and cursed. However, this time there were no cries and no cursing. The execution platform surrounded by screens was silent. More than 20 people were calmly going to their deaths. It was so quiet that it was eerie. Soon, the cheers of the people drowned out the silence. Good execution. They are all criminals who wronged Lord Li back then. These people deserve to die. Lord Li can rest in peace now. At the front of the crowd, Li Qing held Li Mu's hand tightly and said, "Let's go." The two of them turned around. The people took the initiative to open a path for them. They walked slowly. The people behind them watched them leave. They clasped their fists and said, "I wish Lord Li and Miss Li a long and happy life together. Grow old together. May you have a child." More than 20 guilty officials were beheaded, and the people all clapped their hands in joy. These people were not only accomplices in framing Lord Li, but they themselves were also guilty of many crimes. Their death was a good thing for the country and the people. After the execution, some of the commoners even spat on the execution platform as they left, their faces filled with joy. King Shou sighed and said to a servant beside him, "Don't remove the screens yet. Inform their families to come and collect the bodies." The servant nodded and said, "Yes." King Shou put his hands behind his back and shook his head as he walked away. He said softly, "It's good that they're dead. There's no more trouble after they die." Zhang Chun walked behind him and said, "These people have committed countless crimes. It's too easy for them to die like this." Although these criminals were dead, they still thought that it was a trap. After today they would reappear in the divine capital with a new identity. Although they died in the end, at least they didn't feel fear or pain before they died. King Shou said casually, "In life there are some things that shouldn't be taken too seriously. It's fine if it's not too bad." The news that more than 20 officials from the old party, including Commandery Prince Nanyang and the elder brother of the concubine dowager, had been beheaded at the street corner quickly swept through Luoyang and shocked countless people. Are they really dead? No one saved them? The Shao clan hasn't done anything. Are they just going to be abandoned like that? What are they afraid of, and what are they afraid of? You still don't understand. They're obviously afraid of Li Mu. At the Zhou family's banquet, Zhou Chuan's face was pale. Qin Jian was dead, Gao Hong was dead, and the Duke of Nanyang Xiaoyan was dead. Of the 7 main culprits back then, only he, the Duke of Zhongyong, and the Duke of Peace and Peace were left. Li Mu didn't even spare the accomplices, so how could he spare the main culprits? In particular, the death of the Duke of Nanyang had made him even more terrified. Even the Shao royal family could not escape Li Mu's punishment, let alone him. Zhou Qin lowered his head to eat, but his forehead was full of cold sweat. He knew what his father was worried about. The Duke of Nanyang and those people were dead. Perhaps his father would be his next target. More than half a year ago, Li Mu was still a small official in a remote county. Unexpectedly, in just half a year, he had grown into an existence that even the old party did not dare to provoke. The Shao royal family was not as fearful of the Zhou family as they were of Li Mu. Just before he came to Luoyang, Zhou Qin had tried to send an assassin to finish him off, but it had ended in failure. If Li Mu knew that he was the one who sent that assassin, wouldn't he be reduced to the same fate as those people this morning? In the Zhou family, while Zhou Chuan and his son were in shock, Li Mu was also hesitating in the Li residence. Until today, most of the people involved in the case back then had received the punishment they deserved. No accomplices had escaped, and there were still 4 main culprits in Luoyang. These 4 people were the Marquis of Zhongyong, the Earl of Ping, and the Marquis of Yongding, and Zhou Chuan of the Zhou family. The first 3 bigwigs of Luoyang were involved in Zhou Zhong's scheme. They had no enmity with Li Yi. Zhou Zhong knew that he could not change the overall situation, so he deliberately lured them into the trap in order to get the 3 death exemption tokens in their hands. Before Zhou Zhong lured them in, Li Yi's fate was already sealed. These 3 people were just Zhou Zhong's pawns. Although they had bad records, there was no need to kill them. As for Zhou Chuan, although Li Mu wanted him to pay the price, there were 2 problems in front of him. First, the booklet that Zhou Zhong gave him contained evidence of the crimes of the old party officials. There was nothing about Zhou Chuan, so Li Mu could not overthrow him through the law. Second, Zhou Chuan was the Empress's uncle. Li Mu had already killed one of her younger brothers. He did not know how the Empress would feel if he killed another of her uncles. Even though she had left the Zhou family, the blood that flowed in her body was the same as the blood of the Zhou family. The Empress cared about him so much, so Li Mu could not ignore her feelings at all. He pondered for a long time and walked into the courtyard. He said to Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, "I'm going to the palace. You don't have to wait for me to eat today." After informing them, Li Mu left the Li residence and went to the palace. He first went to the imperial kitchen and made a few dishes that the Empress liked. Then he took the food box and went to Changle Palace. In Changle Palace, Zhou Yi looked at the unusually sumptuous meal on the table. Finally he looked at Li Mu and said, "What's the matter? Speak." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Nothing." Zhou Yi picked up his chopsticks and said, "I'll only give you one chance." Li Mu said, "Among the people who killed Lord Li Yi, the former Minister of Works, Zhou Chuan, was also an important mastermind. Zhou Yi was silent for a long time. Then he said lightly, if you have evidence of his crimes, you can punish him according to the law. I will not protect him just because he is my uncle. If one day the one who breaks the law is you, I will not protect you. Li Mu cupped his hands and said, Thank you, Your Majesty. He walked out of Chang'e Palace and sighed in relief. Zhou Chuan was different from the others. No matter what, Li Mu could not go around the Empress and make a move on him. So he needed to ask the Empress's opinion first. After getting the Empress's approval, there was only one problem left to solve. That was how to collect evidence of Zhou Chuan's crimes. The new party had only been established for 3 years. Moreover, the officials of the two parties were very different. The old party consisted mostly of influential officials, while the new party consisted mostly of new officials. In comparison, the influential officials had more misdeeds. Collecting evidence of the old party officials' crimes was easier than collecting evidence of the new party's crimes. Moreover, compared to the old party, the new party had stronger restrictions on the officials. This was also one of the reasons why Zhou Zhong had not been able to collect evidence of Zhou Chuan's crimes for so many years. Li Mu did not think that Zhou Zhong would be able to do something that Zhou Zhong had not been able to do for so many years. He walked out of the palace gates and stood outside for 15 minutes. Then he walked toward the northern courtyard. This time he did not go home. Instead, he stopped in front of another tall gate. Li Mu walked up and knocked on the door knocker. Soon the gate opened a crack. A servant poked his head out and asked, May I ask who your excellency is and why you have come to Zhou Mansion? Li Mu looked at Zhou Mansion's gatekeeper and said indifferently, Please go in and inform them that Censor Li Mu of the Secretariat has come to visit. A moment later, Zhou Chuan frowned and anxiously paced around the hall. He muttered, Li Mu, what is he doing here? I won't see him. Let him go back. Zhou Xiong stretched out his hand and said, No, if word gets out, outsiders will think that our Zhou family is afraid of Li Mu. Let him in. Zhou Chuan said, Second brother, but it's fine. Let's see what he wants first. Zhou Xiong waved his hand and said, His target might be you. Third brother, you should leave for now. After Zhou Chuan left, Zhou Ting said, I'll leave as well. His only son had died at the hands of Li Mu. He could not face Li Mu calmly. A moment later, under the guidance of a servant, Li Mu passed through 2 doors, walked through several corridors and arrived at a hall. Zhou Xiong was the only one in the hall. Li Mu walked into the hall. Zhou Xiong said indifferently, Lord Li, please take a seat. There's no need for that. Li Mu shook his head and said, I'm here today to tell you one thing. Zhou Xiong picked up his teacup and asked, What is it? Li Mu said, Zhou Chuan of the Zhou family was one of the main culprits who framed my father-in-law. Zhou Xiong said in a deep voice, That case is over. Li Mu said, That's what Duke Nanyang and Gao Hong thought too. Duke Nanyang and Gao Hong had just been executed. This was a blatant threat. Zhou Xiong slammed his teacup on the table and said loudly, Li Mu, what are you trying to say? Li Mu said indifferently, Let Zhou Chuan ask to be exiled and this matter will end here. Zhou Xiong was stunned for a moment before he became furious. He stood up and gritted his teeth, You're dreaming. Li Mu shook his head and said, If it weren't for His Majesty, I would do it myself. At that time, it won't be as simple as being exiled. Don't force me. Zhou Xiong wanted to throw his teacup at Li Mu's face. He came to the Zhou family and asked the Zhou family to ask to be exiled. Who was the one forcing who? Zhou Xiong said angrily, What right do you have to say that? Li Mu looked at him and said, When I was in the northern county, I was assassinated. Don't think that I don't know that the mastermind behind the assassination was Zhou Chuan's son, Zhou Qin. Crush. Zhou Qin, who was eavesdropping in the back hall, was shocked when he heard Li Mu's words. He couldn't help but take a few steps back and knocked over a chair. He picked up the chair with a pale face and his body trembled slightly. In the front hall, Zhou Xiong said flatly, You're slandering me. Li Mu smiled and said, Whether it's slander or not, you'll know when you get to the Imperial Clan Temple. I still have a lot of evidence of your Zhou family's crimes. At that time it won't just be Zhou Chen's case. Zhou Chuan, Zhou Ting, and the other officials of your new party won't be able to escape. The fate of those officials on the execution ground today will be your fate. Zhou Xiong's face turned red. He pointed at him and said angrily, You. Li Mu looked at Zhou Xiong and said calmly, Qin Jin's grave is already covered in grass. Gao Hong and Prince Nanyang's bodies have just turned cold. I only asked Zhou Chuan to be exiled because of His Majesty. I have no interest in the fight between the old and new parties. However, if I don't punish Zhou Chuan and avenge my father-in-law, I won't be able to answer to my wife. Zhou Chuan's request to be exiled is my limit. I'll give you 3 days to think about it. Chapter 385. After saying those words, Li Mu turned and left the Zhou family. After he left, a few figures walked out from the back hall. Zhou Xiong looked coldly at Zhou Chen and asked, "Is what Li Mu said true?" Zhou Chen nodded and said fearfully, "But back then when I hired the assassin, I did not reveal any of my identity." Zhou Xiong sat in his chair and said weakly, "How much leverage does he have on the Zhou family?" Most of the conflicts in the imperial court could not be seen in the open. These conflicts in the dark were filled with blood and filth, and could not be shown in front of others. With the Shao clan's existence, the Zhou family could not avoid such filthy matters. Once they were exposed and seriously investigated, there was no doubt that the fate of the old party officials would be the fate of some of the new party members. Zhou Chuan said, "I'm guessing that Li Mu is lying to us. Even the old party does not have any evidence. How would Li Mu know?" Zhou Xiong looked at him and asked, "What if?" He looked at Zhou Chuan and said, "Even if he does not have more leverage, just the crime of assassination is enough to send your son to his death." Zhou Qin trembled and hugged Zhou Chuan's thigh. He said fearfully, "Father, I don't want to die. I'm your son. You have to save me, Pa." Zhou Chuan slapped him away with a gloomy face and did not say a word. Li Mu's request for Zhou Qin and the other members of the new party to be spared was that Zhou Chuan himself had to request to be banished to the army. The place of banishment was either the demon nation or the ghost realm. Any sinner who went to such a place would have a slim chance of surviving. Some would even die 10 times out of 10. This unfilial son wanted him dead. At that moment, Zhou Chuan regretted giving birth to this son for the first time. At that moment, a figure slowly walked in from outside. Zhou Xiong stood up and said, "Big brother?" Zhou Jing said, "I know." Zhou Xiong thought for a moment and asked, "Big brother, can you divine if Li Mu is bluffing? Does he really have leverage on us?" Zhou Jing shook his head and said, "He has a magic treasure that can shield him from the heavenly secrets. I can't calculate anything related to him. Even if I didn't have that item, I might not be able to calculate these things." Zhou Xiong sat back down and asked worriedly, "What should we do now?" If Li Mu had come to the Zhou family to spout nonsense without any basis, there was a 90% chance that he was bluffing. However, he had directly pointed out the secret things that Zhou Qin had done, which made Zhou Xiong feel uncertain. If what Li Mu said was true, then they would have to give up on Zhou Chuan and be banished to the army. If they don't do as Li Mu said, Zhou Qin will die. Not only that, there is a certain possibility that the other officials of the new party will also be implicated. If Li Mu really has something on them, within the scope of the law, Li Mu could do whatever he wanted. This was something that everyone in Luoyang was aware of. How arrogant was the Shao royal family. They were even capable of doing things like forcing the emperor to abdicate the throne. However, in the end they still had to watch the heads of over 20 officials from the old faction fall to the ground. Even the Duke of Nanyang could not be saved. Once Li Mu made public the evidence in his hands, the new party would probably follow in the footsteps of the old party. If Zhou Chuan did not leave, Zhou Qin would definitely die. Perhaps even more people would die. If Zhou Chuan asked to be banished, only 3 of the 4 brothers of the Zhou family would be left. This was a dilemma that only the head of the family, Zhou Jing, had the right to make. In the hall, everyone's gaze was on Zhou Jing. Zhou Chuan could not help but say, "Even if Li Mu really has something on us, can we trust what he says? What if he goes back on his words?" Zhou Jing looked at him and said, "No matter what decision you make, the Zhou family will agree." Zhou Chuan's voice gradually became softer as a bitter smile appeared on his face. If his eldest brother was not threatened by Li Mu, he would have clearly told him that the Zhou family would not be threatened and would not agree to Li Mu's request. Other than that, any decision he made would actually lead to another choice. Sacrificing him in exchange for the stability of the Zhou family and the new party. It turned out that he had been abandoned like the commandery prince of Nanyang. Zhou Chuan took a deep breath and said, "Let's do as Li Mu says. For the Zhou family, for the new party, and for our great cause." Zhou Jing was silent for a moment before he said, "The family will prepare some things for you so that you can protect yourself. When the time is right, you can return to Luoyang." Zhou Chuan cupped his fists and said in a deep voice, "Thank you, eldest brother." The third of the 4 brothers of the Zhou family, the former Minister of Works, Zhou Chuan, felt guilty for framing Li Yi. Although he had been pardoned by the death exemption medallion, he still asked to be sent to prison and left Luoyang. This became another eye-catching event after the execution of the Commandery Prince of Nanyang and the others. Back when they framed Li Yi, they were all sentenced to death. Later they were all pardoned by the death exemption medallion. The common people thought that this would be the end. They did not expect that it was only the beginning. After the Commandery Prince of Nanyang, Xiao Yun, and old concubine Gao's elder brother, Gao Hong, were pardoned by the death exemption medallion, they were sent to the execution ground for other crimes. In the end they could not escape death. Although Zhou Chuan did not die, the crime of being sent to prison was not much different from delaying the execution of the death penalty. It was just that he would die a little later. At this point, all the main culprits and accomplices in Li Yi's case had paid the price with their lives. The other three fish that escaped the net, the Marquis of Zhongyong, the Earl of Ping En, and the Marquis of Yongding, disappeared from Luoyang overnight after hearing and witnessing these things. Someone saw them leave Luoyang with their family the night before the execution of the Commandery Prince of Nanyang. Li residence. After Li Mu heard these things, he heaved a long sigh of relief. He pulled Li Qing into his arms and whispered in her ear, "It's all over." Li Qing was silent. Not long after, a wet mark appeared on Li Mu's chest. After 14 years, the injustice of the Li residence was finally redressed. Those people who had inflicted suffering on them back then had finally received their overdue judgment 14 years later. Li Qing could only completely let go of certain things that she had been carrying in her heart at this moment. Li Mu hugged her. After a while, when he lowered his head, he realized that Li Qing had fallen asleep in his arms. He carefully carried her back to her room and placed her on the bed. He kissed her forehead gently and left the room. Zhou Chuan had volunteered to be banished. Li Mu had no intention of continuing to fight the Zhou family to the death. Firstly, he did not have anything on the Zhou family. He could trick them once, but he might not be able to trick them a second time. Secondly, 2 of the 4 brothers of the Zhou family had already died at the hands of Li Mu. Zhou Chu had even died at his hands. If he continued to be aggressive, he might be driven into a corner. Most importantly, he had to consider the Empress. After all, that was the family that had raised her. Even if this family had betrayed her and made her watch helplessly as the Zhou family was destroyed at the hands of Li Mu, it was still a form of torture for her. He had used less than a year to go from a nameless minor official to a person that both the new and old parties feared. In less than a year, too many changes had happened in Luoyang. As Li Mu walked on the streets, he no longer saw numb faces. The people's backs were straight, their eyes were bright, and they smiled from the bottom of their hearts. All of this showed that the Luoyang of today was no longer the Luoyang of the past. An old woman with a walking stick was walking on the street. She accidentally fell. A young man and a young woman passed by, quickly helped her up and helped her to the side of the road to rest. The old woman rested for a while, then leaned on her walking stick and slowly walked on the street. When she reached the corner of the street, she saw a beggar in ragged clothes. She thought for a moment, then took out a few copper coins from her sleeve and threw them into the beggar's bowl. The beggar kowtowed in gratitude. He took 2 copper coins and bought a bun from a bun shop by the street. He saw the shop assistant from the shop next door struggling to carry a box onto the carriage. He held the bun in his mouth and went forward to help carry the box onto the carriage. The shop assistant took a deep breath. Just as he was about to thank the beggar, he realized that there was no one behind the box. At this moment, a man in green walked over and asked, "Brother, may I ask where Restaurant Rui is?" The shop assistant smiled and said, "I happen to have something to do near Restaurant Rui. Follow me." The man thanked him and followed the shop assistant to Restaurant Rui. He happened to see a young man and a young woman's kite hanging on a tree. The 2 of them stood under the tree and waited. The man leaped up and easily plucked the kite. He smiled and handed it to the young man and the young woman. He said, "Go over there and fly it in an empty place." Li Mu was greeted by the people along the way. He could clearly feel the changes in Luoyang half a year ago. Li Mu was not the only one who could feel the changes. The people of Luoyang could feel it too. In the past there was no good or evil in Luoyang. There was no right or wrong. It was chaotic and dark. Until half a year ago, a ray of light shone through the darkness. From then on, good and evil were separated in Luoyang. The officials and nobles who broke the law were punished the same as the common people. Be it the hedonistic sons of rich parents, the students of the academy, the important officials in the court, the nobles of Luoyang, or even the descendants of the royal family, they could no longer trample on the law and oppress the common people. This ray of light allowed the common people to walk out from the darkness and into the sunlight. Looking at the figure walking slowly on the street, countless people had reverence in their eyes. That was the light in all of their hearts. Chapter 386. Walking on the streets of Chengdu, Li Mu found that he seemed to be more and more fond of the human world. Especially after witnessing the changes in the people in the past half a year, the achievements and joy he got from it were far from what he got from cultivation. In this state of mind, his heart was empty. Even without the clear heart technique, he could still maintain absolute peace in his heart. Somehow, he even had a kind of enlightenment. Establishing a heart for the heavens and earth, establishing a life for the people. As long as he could practice these two words with himself, one day he could rely on the hundreds of millions of people in the Great Zhou to advance to the upper realm. Now, he didn't have to do anything deliberately and could continue to absorb psychic power from the people. He was like a walking temple. He walked slowly on the street. What he saw and what he heard was the ecology of Chengdu. Only a duck-like voice was mixed in it, which seemed a little out of place. Fortune-telling, 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 infertility treatment, ensuring the birth of a fat baby. You're not allowed to be free, you're not allowed to be free. This voice was a little familiar. Li Mu looked in the direction of the voice and saw a sloppy Taoist priest squatting at a corner of the street. In front of him was a Bagua diagram, and beside him was a flag with the words, Divine Strategy written on it. The Taoist priest's spiritual sense was very sharp. The moment Li Mu looked over, the Taoist priest raised his head and looked at him. When he saw Li Mu, the Taoist priest was stunned for a moment. Then he jumped up from the ground and said in amazement, "Why is it you again?" Li Mu walked over, smiled at him and said, "Senior, we meet again." The Taoist priest scratched his head and said, "Why do I always run into you wherever I go?" That's not right." As he spoke, his tone suddenly changed. He grabbed Li Mu's wrist and said in shock, You have a good fortune." Li Mu said, "In the past few months, I encountered some opportunities." The old man let go of his hand and muttered, "Bullshit opportunity, why can't I encounter such an opportunity?" Thinking back to more than a year ago, when he first met the young man in front of him, he was just a mortal who had lost his 7 souls and didn't have long to live. When he saw him for the second time, he was already in the omnipotent realm. Only half a year had passed, and when he saw him again, he was already in the creation realm. This made the scruffy Taoist priest doubt his life. At this rate, in another year or so, wouldn't he be inferior to him? He returned to his original position and waved his hand at Li Mu. Go. Let this old man be alone." Li Mu glanced at him and then turned to leave. When he met an old friend, he only went up to greet him out of politeness. To Li Mu a year ago, peak 6th realm cultivators were unreachable. But now, he was in close contact with 7th realm cultivators every day. In his eyes, 6th realm cultivators were just SOSO. It wasn't until Li Mu's figure disappeared that the scruffy Taoist priest raised his head and looked in the direction he left. His heart was bitter and indescribable. He muttered, "Thief? God, this is not fair, not fair." Li Mu quickly forgot about the scruffy Taoist priest. Although he had avenged Li Qing, there were still some leftover problems. As the Great Zhou FBI, some of the priests in the Department of Worship enjoyed the cultivation resources provided by the Imperial Court, but they didn't do anything for the Imperial Court and didn't listen to the orders of the Ministry of Personnel. They even became the private soldiers of the old party, disobeying imperial orders and doing whatever they wanted. Li Mu had thought of cleaning up the Department of Worship a long time ago. The Department of Worship was nominally under the command of the Ministry of Personnel, but it wasn't an office under the Ministry of Personnel. Before the Empress ascended the throne, the Department of Worship was directly responsible to the Empress. After the Empress ascended the throne, because she couldn't subdue the Department of Worship controlled by the old party, she established the internal guards. The bamboo guards of the plum, orchid, bamboo and chrysanthemum guards were used to replace the Department of Worship. Of course, whether it was strength or resources, the internal guards were far inferior to the Department of Worship. The Department of Worship was supported by the Great Zhou's national treasury. Every year, large amounts of spiritual jade, fulu, talismans, and other cultivation resources were allocated from the national treasury. The internal guards were subsidized by the Empress herself. The highest cultivation of the internal guards was only 5th realm. In the Department of Worship, there were 2 great priests who were both 6th realm cultivators. There were also dozens of 5th realm priests. In Changel Palace, when he was eating with the Empress, Li Mu told her about cleaning up the Department of Worship, but the Empress was a little absent-minded. Zhou Yi didn't answer Li Mu's question. Instead, she asked, "Tell me what's so good about being the Empress? Why can they disregard other people's lives and even their own for this position?" Zhou Chuan had already been sent away from the Immortal's capital today. Li Mu wasn't surprised that the Empress would feel this way. To the Empress, there was indeed nothing good about being the Empress. She wasn't keen on power, nor was she greedy for beauty. She didn't have anyone in her harem and she didn't want to review memorials. To her this position was a prison. But to others, controlling the life and death of hundreds of millions of people and becoming the ruler of the most powerful country in Zhou province was already a fatal temptation. Moreover, after becoming the empress, she could legitimately replenish her harem. If Li Mu was the empress, he could legitimately make Lu Hanyan empress and Li Qing noble consort. Wanwan and Xiao Bai would be fair consort and virtuous consort. No one would have to be jealous of anyone. It was only natural for the empress to take in concubines. Just thinking about it made one feel that it was wonderful. There would no longer be a fire in the harem or an Azura field. Zhou Yi glanced at Li Mu and said, "I'm asking you a question. What are you laughing at?" Li Mu no longer fantasized. He withdrew his smile and said, "Your Majesty, not everyone is like your Majesty who doesn't like power. To them, becoming the emperor above hundreds of millions of people is a fatal attraction." Zhou Yi asked, "You too?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "This isn't my dream." Zhou Yi continued to ask, "Then what is your dream?" Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "This subject's dream is to take my wives to travel all over the 10 continents and 3 islands, see all kinds of sceneries, and finally find a quiet and secluded place. When I'm not cultivating, I'll raise flowers and vegetables and live the life of an ordinary person." Zhou Yi glanced at him and calmly asked, "You want to leave the imperial court?" Li Mu heard the fluctuation in her tone. To prevent her from thinking that he wanted to run away, he added, "Of course not now." Zhou Yi asked, "Then when?" Li Mu said, "After I've helped your Majesty clear away all obstacles and solve all problems." Zhou Yi said indifferently, "I feel that the Yao Kingdom, the Ghost Realm, and the Demon Sect are the biggest obstacles and troubles in my heart. I won't keep you for long. Once the Demon Sect is destroyed, the Ghost Realm is subdued, and the Yao Kingdom is pacified, I will let you go." Li Mu was dumbfounded. The Yao Kingdom, the Ghost Realm, and the Demon Sect. Which of these 3 powers hadn't existed for as long as the Great Zhou? Even if the Great Zhou perished, they might not necessarily perish. To put it bluntly, she wanted him to work for her for the rest of his life. Even when the Jade Emperor made things difficult for Sun Wukong, he didn't go so far. It was better to wait for the chickens to finish their rice, the dogs to finish their noodles, and the fire to burn out the logs. This way, Li Mu would at least have something to look forward to. At this moment, he had already decided to stick to his original plan. After helping her condense the next strand of Emperor Qi, he would take Lu Hanyan and the others and run away. There was a wider world outside and he didn't want to waste his life on the Empress. Zhou Yi glanced at him and asked, "What, you're not willing?" Li Mu squeezed out a smile and said, "I'm willing to go through water and tread on fire for your Majesty. Not to mention destroying the Demon Sect, subduing the Ghost Realm, and pacifying the Yao Kingdom. When I'm strong enough, I can even go to the Eastern Sea and catch a dragon to be your Majesty's mount." Li Mu had long since figured out the Empress's personality. Ordinary women also liked to hear nice things, but the Empress wasn't an ordinary woman. She liked to flatter and praise even more. Regardless of whether she could do it or not, she had to get through this hurdle first. Zhou Yi asked, "Is what you said true?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Everything I said came from the bottom of my heart." Zhou Yi said indifferently, "Then swear to the heavenly Tao." Li Mu stared blankly at the Empress. He didn't expect that she wouldn't play by the rules. If he had said this to Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, they would definitely have covered Li Mu's mouth before he swore to the heavenly Tao. Then either coquettishly or angrily they would say, "Who told you to swear? I don't want you to swear," and so on and forget about this matter. But the Empress, it was fine if she didn't stop him, but she actually took the initiative to make him swear? Was an oath to the heavenly Tao something that could be casually sworn? Li Mu felt that the trust between humans was gone. "What, you're not willing?" Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu and asked, "Could it be that everything you said just now was false?" Li Mu wanted nothing more than to slap his own mouth. But it was obviously too late. Looking at the Empress' serious eyes, Li Mu slowly raised his right hand, bent his thumb and pointed to the sky. He gritted his teeth and said, "I, Li Mu, swear to the heavenly Tao that only after the Demon Sect is destroyed, the Ghost Realm is subdued, and the Demon Country is pacified, can I leave your Majesty. If I violate it, I will not have a good ending," Zhou Yi said. "Also, I really want to have a dragon as a mount." Li Mu's lips moved and said, "Your Majesty, how about we forget about this? The dragon race has a fishy smell and it's slippery. It's not suitable to be a mount." Zhou Yi glared at him. "Hurry up." Chapter 387. Walking out of Changel Palace, Li Mu had to admit that he had been careless this time. He had been forced by the Empress to swear an oath to the heavens that he would only leave her after helping her destroy the demon sect, subdue the ghost realm and pacify the Yao kingdom. Fortunately, Li Mu was quick-witted and changed a phrase when he swore. He said that he would not leave her until he finished these things, and not Shindu or Great Zhou. If he could abduct the Empress, then it would not be considered leaving her. Whether or not the Great Zhou could destroy the demon sect, subdue the ghost realm, and pacify the Yao kingdom was a matter for the Great Zhou court. In any case, Li Mu had fulfilled his oath to the Empress. Didn't she like to plant flowers? When the time came, he would open a garden for her next door to where he, Lu Hanyin, and Li Qing lived in seclusion. As long as she did not feel bored, she could plant flowers for the rest of her life. Li Mu looked back and twitched the corner of his mouth. If she wanted to trick him, she would have to cultivate for a few more years. After swearing the oath, he once again brought up the matter of purging the office of consecration. What made Li Mu feel helpless was that, at some point in time, the Empress had handed over all the things that should have been done by her to him. She did not even hand it over to Li Mu. Instead, it was Li Mu who raised the problem and solved it himself. Now she wanted Li Mu to be her slave for the rest of his life. If she had not given him so much and treated him so well, Li Mu might have gone back to inherit the Fulu school long ago. What really made Li Mu feel that he owed her was that the Empress had always stood by his side when facing the Zhou family and himself. She had also given him the greatest trust and the greatest freedom to reverse the verdict and take revenge for Li Qing's father. If he ran away like this, it would be too heartless. For a woman to treat him like this, even if Li Mu could not repay her with his body, he could not be so heartless. Consecrated office. Lord May of the Inner Guards had just arrived. He left behind an imperial edict and then floated away. The contents of the imperial edict made countless consecrators angry and dissatisfied. From today onwards, the consecration department would be under the management of the Bamboo Guards. Although they did not need to be merged into the Bamboo Guards, the Bamboo Guards Vice Commander Li Mu would be in charge of the consecration department. The Department of Offerings had always been a special existence in the imperial court. They were not from the academy, nor were they officials of the imperial court. Their relationship with the Great Zhou court was more like cooperation than subordination. The imperial court provided the consecrators with cultivation resources, while the consecrators worked for the imperial court. Both sides took what they needed. The Department of Consecration had always been an independent department, never under the jurisdiction of an official of the court. Even the Ministry of Official Personnel Affairs could only request for a consecrator and not order them to do so. This imperial edict shook the position of the consecrated division. For cultivators, a country was already a vague concept to them. What cultivators pursued their entire lives was supreme strength and the ethereal heavenly path. Most cultivators despised becoming a lackey of the imperial court, or rather, a lackey. However, the path of cultivation was not something that could be achieved by one person alone. Cultivation required resources, and cultivation resources were not easy to obtain for most cultivators without any background. In order to obtain cultivation resources like spiritual jades more easily, some cultivators with some strength would put down their pride and choose to become a consecrator of the imperial court. But this did not mean that they were willing to be under the jurisdiction of the imperial court. After becoming a consecrator, these people were still more unruly than the officials of the imperial court. They would submit to the strong but would not submit to official rank. What is the Empress thinking? She actually let a brat control us? Although his talent is not bad, his cultivation has only just reached the 5th realm. What right does he have to command us? He killed more than 20 people from the old faction and forced Li Mu to ask for exile. Has Li Mu's hand finally reached the Department of Offerings? I don't know if you can tolerate it, but I can't. We must express our stance in protest. Everyone, don't come to the Department of Offerings tomorrow. Doesn't he want to be the master of the Department of Offerings? Just let him be the master of the Department of Offerings. Most of the consecrators in the Department of Offerings were opposed to this matter. If the Empress let a 6th realm cultivator take charge of the Department of Offerings, it would be fine. But Li Mu was only at the 5th realm and had just reached the 5th realm. Any random consecrator here was stronger than him. To make them listen to the orders of a weakling was something that was very difficult to accept. Of course, among them, there was also a large portion who had long been bribed by the benefits of the old faction and harbored enmity towards Li Mu. Under this enmity, there were very quickly people who began to incite the other consecrators to take Li Mu down a notch. A group of people noisily left the Department of Offerings. Two elders with similar appearances stood in the courtyard with their hands behind their backs. The elder on the left said, "What do you think?" The elder on the right thought for a moment and said, "Killing him a little is good for his spirit. We have to let him know that the Department of Offerings is not a place where he can behave atrociously." The Empress temporarily placed the Department of Offerings under the Bamboo Guards. As the deputy commander of the Bamboo Guards, Li Mu naturally became the direct superior of the Department of Offerings. A few days ago, he had done a detailed search for information on the Department of Offerings. Currently, there were two Sixth Realm cultivators in the Department of Offerings. Both of them had just reached the Sixth Realm several years ago, and they were a pair of twin brothers. For the Imperial Court, Fifth Realm consecrators were easy to recruit, but Sixth Realm high consecrators were very difficult to recruit. When one's cultivation reached this level, they could already be considered one of the few powerful cultivators in the world. Whether it was out of dignity or the pursuit of a higher realm, they would not be willing to be the Imperial Court's lackeys. This also led to the Imperial Court having to pay a huge price every time they recruited a Sixth Realm cultivator. Not only did the Imperial Court have to provide them with large amounts of spiritual jades every year, but they also had to satisfy their various requests. After Li Mu saw the benefits of the two high consecrators, even he wanted to become a high consecrator himself. Li Mu could do what they could do and Li Mu could do what they could not. He could guarantee that it would be worth more than the cost. If the Imperial Court gave him the resources given to these two people, Li Mu could guarantee that he would be able to create even greater value for the Imperial Court than them. Most importantly, these two people did not make much of a contribution every year. Li Mu even killed several dozen elders of the demon sect. The contributions of these two high consecrators to the Imperial Court were greater than the contributions of the entire Department of Offerings. However, other than the Empress's love, he did not receive anything else. This made Li Mu feel very unbalanced. He walked into the Department of Offerings and found it abnormally quiet. There were about 100 or so consecrators in the Imperial Court. Not everyone was at the Department of Offerings every day, but no matter the time, there should be at least 10 people on duty here. However, Li Mu went through all the duty rooms and did not see a single person. He found an old man cleaning in the backyard. After asking, he found out that there were usually at least 20 consecrators in the Department of Offerings, but today there was not a single one. It was obvious that they were targeting him. The entire Department of Offerings was more united than Li Mu had imagined. There was no one in the Department of Offerings, so there was no point for Li Mu to stay here. He said to the old man cleaning, "Tell them that in 3 days, all the consecrators in the Divine Capital must report to the Department of Offerings. Those who do not make it in 3 days will be expelled from the Department of Offerings." Before leaving the Department of Offerings, Li Mu took a list of consecrators with him. On the list, it was clearly written which consecrators were out on missions and which ones did not have missions to stay in the Divine Capital. It was also very simple to inform them. The consecrators were treated very well. There was an entire square in the Divine Capital dedicated to consecrators. Among them, only Realm 4 consecrators could be allocated a courtyard with 2 entrances. Realm 5 consecrators lived in residences with at least 3 entrances and 3 entrances. The 2 great consecrators' residences both had 5 entrances and were fully staffed with servant girls and servants. When he learned of this news, Li Mu even cried out on behalf of old Zhang for a while. In truth, when he had first arrived in the Divine Capital, he would not have had to work so hard if he wanted to live in a larger residence. He only needed to resign his official position and join the Department of Offerings, and he would immediately be given a courtyard with 2 entrances or even 3 entrances. The Imperial Court treated these outsiders much better than the officials. Li Mu's request that all the consecrators in the Department of Offerings must report to the Department of Offerings within 3 days was quickly made known to all the consecrators. What does this mean? If we're expelled from the Department of Offerings within 3 days, can he expel everyone if none of us go? I'd like to see what he'll do when he's the only one left in the Department of Offerings. That's not good. Li Mu is not to be trifled with. Look at all the things he's done in the past. Which one of them wasn't serious? What if he really expels all of us? Haha, would a Department of Offerings with only him still be called a Department of Offerings? When the time comes, the one to be expelled will only be Li Mu. He'll have to invite us back in the same way he expelled us. Since that's the case, let's not go. After leaving the Yamen, Li Mu passed by the Department of Offerings on his way home and swept his gaze over it. Tomorrow was the 3-day deadline. He wasn't sure what the outcome would be tomorrow. But he was clear that a new official would make 3 sweeping fires. The first fire had to burn brighter. If he couldn't establish his authority, he wouldn't be able to mingle in the Department of Offerings in the future. The current problem was that the Department of Offerings had as many experts as there were clouds. That place was not the imperial court, and the offerings were not officials of either party. Any sort of open or secret schemes were useless. In that place, absolute strength was the only thing that mattered. Unfortunately, Li Mu's own strength was not great, and he was also a commander without any reliable helpers. Just by himself, how could he contend against a group of experts of the same level? Fortune-telling, treating infertility, guaranteeing the birth of a fat child. As he walked down the street, a familiar voice once more sounded by his ear. Li Mu looked in a certain direction and suddenly thought of a plan. At the corner of the street, the slovenly Taoist priest was currently soliciting customers. In front of his divination stall, a shadow suddenly appeared. He raised his head and glanced at Li Mu, then waved his hand as if he was swatting away a fly. Quickly leave, quickly leave. This old man doesn't want to see you. This time, Li Mu did not leave. Looking at the Taoist priest, he said, Senior's cultivation is so high. To be a fortune teller is a waste of talent. I don't know if Senior wants to become offerings in the imperial court. Offerings? The Taoist priest jumped up from the ground, glaring angrily at Li Mu. Gritting his teeth, he said, What kind of person is this old man? This old man doesn't even care about the 6 great sects. What is the Great Zhou court? You actually want this old man to be a dog of the imperial court? If this wasn't the divine capital, this old man would definitely turn you into a dog first. Li Mu continued, with Senior's cultivation, if you join the Department of Offerings, you can become a great offering and live in a 5-sectioned residence. The imperial court will also provide you with maids and servants. The Taoist priest looked at Li Mu and said, Before this old man changes his mind, you'd best leave quickly. Li Mu shook his head, saying, Senior probably doesn't want the heavenly fortune talisman either. Just as he turned around, someone grabbed his wrist. The Taoist priest grabbed Li Mu's hand and said seriously, Whether it's the heavenly fortune talisman or not isn't important. The main thing is that this old man wants that big residence. You're still young, so you don't understand. After drifting for a lifetime, when you get older, what you seek is a stable place, a place that can shelter you from the wind and rain. Alright, you mentioned the heavenly fortune talisman just now. What? Is it a heavenly fortune talisman if you join the Department of Offerings? Piss. Recommending the Book of the Old Days by the Bear Wolf Dog. The world is about to be in chaos. Demons are emerging in an endless stream. Chu Qiguang is guarding his territory. Looking at the demons working peacefully and the old employees who have just turned into zombies, he shouted, How dare you call the sun and moon to change the sky? Chapter 388. From the sloppy Taoist priest's reaction, Li Mu knew that he had made the right bet. All 6th-level cultivators would eventually face a problem: their lifespan. Without reaching the upper 3 realms, their lifespan would not be able to break through the limits of mortals. 260 years, or 120 years, was their life and death moment. If they were mortals, then it would be fine. Although 260 years was a long enough lifespan, mortals could not escape from old age, sickness, and death. Most people could not even live past 160 years, so naturally they would not encounter a situation where their lifespan ran out. But cultivators were different. As long as a 6th-level cultivator did not seek death like the Thousand Illusions Venerable Master or the Nether Saint, they would not die so easily. The only thing that could kill them was time. A heavenly secret talisman could buy them 10 years of lifespan. In these 10 years, as long as they broke through to the 7th level, they would immediately gain another 60 years of lifespan. Thus, there was no need to be envious of these 6th-level cultivators, especially those at the peak of the 6th level. Although they were incomparably prominent in front of others, they might not have many years left in their lifespan. Although their cultivation was not as high as theirs from now on, they could live longer than them. Li Mu looked at the sloppy Taoist priest and said, The imperial court has always been generous to the offerings. As long as Senior joins the offerings department, I guarantee that you will receive a heavenly secret talisman within a year. Although the materials for the heavenly secret talisman were precious, if the imperial court wanted to gather them, they could also gather a few sets. After the excitement just now, the old man had already calmed down. He glanced at Li Mu and said, Kid, don't try to trick me. The heavenly secret talisman is a saint-level fulu. Even those old fellows in the fulu school could not draw it. Who in the Great Zhou court can draw a saint-level talisman? Seeing was believing. Li Mu stretched out his hand and swiped at the air in front of him. An illusory image of a Fulu covered in mysterious runes appeared before the Taoist priest's eyes. He could easily reproduce the Fulu that he had once drawn. Taoist priest looked at Fulu on the screen and his eyes lit up. Saint level, it's really a saint level? Then his face was filled with smiles again as he said, to be honest, although this old man has spent most of his life traveling outside, this old man was born in the Great Zhou dynasty and can be considered a citizen of the Great Zhou dynasty. It is only right for me to do something for the Great Zhou dynasty. This old man will enter the Department of Consecration. Li Mu cupped his hands and said, Senior is truly righteous. Tomorrow morning you can directly report to the Veneration Department. After bidding farewell to the Taoist priest, Li Mu finally felt at ease. In the end, the consecrated office was a place where strength spoke. Without a super powerhouse holding down the fort, Li Mu did not have the confidence to speak. Speaking of which, exchanging a divine secret talisman for a powerhouse at the peak of the sixth realm was a very good deal. Unfortunately, the materials needed for the saint-level Fulu were very precious, and this talisman could not be mass-produced. Otherwise, as long as the Empress announced to the world that she would give a divine secret talisman to any sixth realm powerhouse who joined the consecrated office, the Department of Consecrated Office of the Great Zhou would be the most powerful force in the 10 continents and 3 islands. What 6 schools and 4 sects? Even the demonic path would not be able to compete with them. The divine secret talisman was not only useful for 6th realm powerhouses, but also for 7th realm powerhouses. Although the divine secret talisman did not increase the lifespan of powerhouses above the transcendent realm by that much, every year of lifespan increased the chances of advancing. Every time one advanced a level in the upper 3 realms, their lifespan would increase by 60 years. If they made the right bet, their lifespan would be extended by 60 years. Who would not be tempted? As long as there were enough materials, he could let the Empress visit him every few days. With the help of her talisman, Li Mu was confident that he could turn the consecrated office into a retirement home for the super powerhouses of the continent. Of course, even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. This plan at present could only be imagined by Li Mu. Early the next morning, Li Mu arrived at the consecrated office a quarter of an hour later than the usual time. Inside the consecrated office it was quiet. Apart from the old man sweeping the floor, there was no one else in the entire consecrated office. Li Mu moved a chair and sat in the courtyard of the consecrated office. The old man sweeping the floor obeyed Li Mu's instructions. He took an incense burner, inserted an incense stick, lit it, and placed it in the courtyard of the consecrated office. Li Mu looked at the incense stick and said, "Tell them, before this incense stick burns out, if they do not report to the consecrated office, they will be expelled from the consecrated office, and all the rewards bestowed by the imperial court will be withdrawn. From now on, they will no longer enjoy the treatment of a consecrated." The old man walked out of the consecrated office and walked briskly towards a nearby market and square. There were hundreds of markets in the Immortal's capital, each with its own function. The N Square was a residential market, located in the core area of the Immortal's capital. Although it was a residential market, the people who lived in the market were not commoners, officials, or nobles. They were consecrated members recruited by the imperial court. The consecrated members were the same as the officials of the imperial court. They ate the salary of the imperial court, and their treatment was even better than the officials. Every person had a house bestowed by the imperial court, and all the maids and servants in the house were available. In a certain house in the N Square, 10 or so consecrated members were gathered together. Expelling them from the consecrated office in less than the time of an incense stick. Who is he trying to scare? Expelling everyone from the consecrated office? How will he explain this to the imperial court? This morning not a single person went. I want to see how he will deal with this. After discussing for a while, they decided to continue staying here. In some other houses in the square, there was also hesitation in the eyes of some people. Should we go or not? Li Mu is not someone to be trifled with. The Empress also favors him so much. How many people have fallen into his hands? If he really expels us, where will our future cultivation resources come from? Why don't we just forget about it? The Shao family has not given us any benefits, we have no need to oppose Li Mu. Li Mu sat in the consecrated office. Ever since the incense stick had burned halfway, consecrated members had begun to walk in from outside. After clasping their hands to Li Mu, they returned to their respective duty rooms. There was also a portion of people who stood outside the consecrated office, chatting and laughing with the people beside them. They were all consecrated members of the consecrated office, but they did not walk in. Their gazes would occasionally glance at the incense stick, as if they were waiting for something. Only when the last stick of incense had burned out did they walk into the consecrated office. If they were frightened by Li Mu on his first day at the consecrated office and obediently returned to the consecrated office in less than the time of an incense stick, then they could forget about having a good life in the future. The reason they had waited until the incense stick had burned out before walking into the consecrated office was to give Li Mu a show of strength. They had to let Li Mu know that the consecrated office was not the same as the imperial court. However, when the incense stick had burned out and the first person outside the door wanted to walk into the consecrated office, a figure blocked their way. That fifth realm consecrated looked at Li Mu, raised his eyebrows and asked, "Lord Li, what are you doing?" Li Mu said indifferently, "This is the consecrated office." That consecrated said, "Could it be that we consecrated members cannot enter the consecrated office?" Li Mu said, "In the past yes, but not now. Before the incense stick has burned out, everyone who did not report to the consecrated office has already been expelled from the consecrated office. I will give you all 1 day to move out of the and square, and henceforth do not act in the name of consecrated members of the great show." That consecrated did not expect that Li Mu would actually dare to do this. His face darkened as he said, "Lord Li, this is your first day at the consecrated office, are you going to be so ruthless?" As he spoke, a fierce aura emanated from his body. The consecrated behind him also had an invisible aura rising from his body. Under the pressure of this aura, a few strands of hair by Li Mu's ears were blown up, and his clothes also fluttered loudly. A piece of the green brick under his feet was crushed by his foot. The next moment, Li Mu took a step forward. Boom! An even more powerful aura erupted from his body. The dozen or so consecrated at the entrance of the consecrated office retreated several steps under this aura. The fifth realm consecrated could still barely hold on, but several fourth realm cultivators directly fainted under the impact of that aura. Li Mu looked at them and said indifferently, "From now on, you are no longer consecrated members of the imperial court. The consecrated office is an important place of the imperial court. Those who trespass into the consecrated office without permission will be expelled, and those who trespass repeatedly will be killed without mercy." Several fifth realm consecrated members struggled to resist Li Mu's aura pressure, their hearts extremely shocked. They did not expect Li Mu to be able to release such an aura when he had just advanced. In that instant, they even felt as if they were facing a sixth realm cultivator. Li Mu's strength was far stronger than they had imagined. They originally wanted to show him their strength, but now they were the ones who could not step down. Just as these people did not know how to deal with it, a gentle force swept over them. The aura emanating from Li Mu collided with this gentle force and cancelled each other out. Two elders with similar appearances slowly walked to the entrance of the consecrated office. "The head consecrated is here." "Greetings, head consecrated." Seeing the two old men, the crowd seemed to have found their backbone and bowed to greet them. The elder on the left glanced at them and said, "What are you all standing here for? Hurry up and go in." The head consecrated spoke, and these people heaved a sigh of relief. The leader was about to enter, but just as he took a step into the consecrated office, he was suddenly hit in the chest by a golden light, and his entire body was sent flying. After sending one person flying, the Tao bell shrunk to the size of a palm and floated on Li Mu's shoulder. Seeing this, the few consecrated who were about to enter immediately stopped in their tracks. They never would have thought that Li Mu would not even give face to the head consecrated. The elder who had spoken just now had a dark expression and asked, "Lord Li, what is the meaning of this?" "Nothing." Li Mu looked at him and said calmly, "I have said before that those who do not last 5 minutes will be expelled from the consecrated office. These people are standing outside the consecrated office and dragging their feet until the incense burns out. Clearly they do not want to be consecrated anymore. The consecrated office is an important place of the imperial court. Not just any random person can casually enter." The elder looked at him and asked slowly, "The two of us are also late. Does Lord Li want to expel the two of us from the consecrated office as well?" Sixth realm cultivators were not easy to recruit. Li Mu did not have this authority. Although Li Mu really wanted to expel them to save resources for the imperial court, if he really did expel them, the imperial court would probably also put pressure on the empress. Li Mu looked at him and said, "Seeing that you are the head consecrated, I can make an exception this time. There will not be a next time. There is no need to wait for a next time." The elder who had not spoken all this time snorted and said coldly, "If you want to expel them today, then the two of us will voluntarily resign." You can expel us as well while you are at it? Li Mu looked at this elder in shock. There was actually such a good thing? He was just worrying about how to expel them. With the sloppy Taoist priest who was at the peak of the sixth realm, there was no need for the two of them. Wasn't this just a waste of the imperial court's resources? Li Mu looked at the two of them in surprise and said, "Words are no guarantee. Why don't the two of you make an oath to the heavenly Tao?" Chapter 389. Li Mu wanted nothing more than for these two old fellows to leave the Department of Offerings. They lived in large mansions and were served by more than a dozen maids and servants. Every year, the imperial court would provide them with large amounts of spiritual jades, spiritual herbs, and other cultivation resources. Despite such good treatment, they couldn't even go to work on time. The results they could produce every year were even less. Thinking about Li Mu himself, with a meager salary, worried about the emperor's heart, purged the rebels, killed the demon path, and built the link between the imperial court and the Fulu school. Besides his own official duties, he also had to approve memorials for the empress and give her special treatment. Thinking of his own efforts, the head offerings efforts, the treatment of the head offerings, and his own treatment, Li Mu felt even more unbalanced. The two head offerings had not expected that Li Mu would be so unyielding. After expelling the two head offerings and dozens of other offerings, what was left of the Department of Offerings? Did he not think that if he really did this, how would he explain it to the imperial court? As for making them swear an oath to the heavenly Tao, this was naturally impossible. Any cultivator with a normal mind would not joke about the heavenly Tao. The two coldly snorted at the same time, clasped their hands behind their backs and left. Li Mu was, after all, acting on the empress's orders. With their status, there was no need to say too much to Li Mu. When the Department of Offerings fell into chaos because of him, he would not be able to explain himself to the imperial court, and would naturally leave with his tail between his legs. Seeing that the two head reverends had left, those reverends who didn't report to the reverends department within the time set by Li Mu also didn't dare to step into the reverends department. They all left with gloomy faces. This was only a temporary departure. According to Li Mu's own rules, this time, more than half of the combat strength of the Department of Offerings would be expelled from the Department of Offerings. The Department of Offerings of the Great Zhou existed in name only. Once the imperial court investigated, he would not be able to bear the responsibility, and would still have to invite them back. And the offerings of the Department of Offerings were secretly rejoicing that they had changed their minds at the last moment. Li Mu didn't even give face to the great consecrator, much less them. Once they lost their status as consecrators, where would they find cultivation resources? Without a sect or family, leaving the consecrator department was the same as cutting off their cultivation path. After sending those people away, Li Mu sat back down on the chair in the courtyard of the Office of Offerings. The original intention of the consecration department was to recruit strong cultivators to serve the country. They did not want them to participate in the politics of the court. However, the consecrators were in the divine capital. These matters could not be avoided easily. The current consecrated office had already deviated from its original intentions and needed a complete change. Of course, the price of change was also huge. This time, Li Mu had expelled more than half of the consecrators of the consecration department. Although this was more beneficial for future management, the drawbacks were also obvious. The overall strength of the consecration department had severely shrunk. Although they had the unkempt Taoist priest, no matter how powerful he was only one person. He could not solve the problem of the 36 counties of Great Zhou. Right now, the Foreign Service Division urgently needed fresh blood. However, they could not expand their recruitment at will. Otherwise, the previous internal guard was a lesson to be learned. If someone with bad intentions sneaked in and gave them a fatal blow at the critical moment, all their previous efforts would be in vain. Li Mu thought for a while and stretched out his hand. A white light flashed and a black palm-sized wooden block appeared in his hand. The four sides of the wooden block were engraved with mysterious runes. After Li Mu injected his spiritual power, these runes began to flicker and emit a faint light. After the light on the wooden block stabilized, Li Mu put the wooden block to his ear and said, "Hey, is this senior brother sect master? I'm Li Mu. Last time we talked about the cooperation between the ancestral court and the imperial court. You promised to send some elders over. What? 10? 10 is too little, at least 30. 30 isn't much at all. What's the point of them staying in the mountains? Why don't we pull them out to temper their minds? It's good for their future cultivation." Li Mu put down the wooden box and saw the unkempt Taoist priest standing in the courtyard of the consecration department. He looked at Li Mu with a puzzled gaze and asked, Xian Jizi is your senior brother? Li Mu nodded. The Taoist priest thought for a while and asked again, then who is your master? Li Mu said, my master is Talisman Daozi. The Taoist priest revealed a look of understanding and said, so it's him? Li Mu asked, Senior, do you know my master? The Taoist priest shook his head and said, I'm not familiar with him. Talisman Daozi has some talent in the Fulu, but his cultivation talent is not high. His lifespan should be in these 2 years. Your master. Li Mu said, with the Talisman of Heavenly Secrets, it should be able to buy master 10 more years. The Taoist priest was stunned and then said, so the Talisman of Heavenly Secrets was given to Talisman Daozi, who drew the Fulu. As far as I know, no one in the Fulu school has this ability. Li Mu smiled and said, Senior, you don't have to worry about this. After a year, Senior's Talisman of Heavenly Secrets will be handed over. The unkempt Taoist priest didn't ask any more questions and said, what do you need me to do? Li Mu said, Senior, you only need to preside over the offerings department. The other matters will be taken care of by the offerings department below. The head reverend's greatest use in the reverend department was to intimidate others. If there weren't any sixth realm cultivators holding down the fort, the words reverend department would inevitably lose some of its grandeur. When the head offerings were truly needed, it would be when an earth-shattering event happened in a certain county. On the first day Li Mu took charge of the offerings department, he drove away more than half of the offerings and angered 2 head offerings. Soon, the news spread throughout the divine capital and caused a heated discussion among the officials. This is too ridiculous. In less than an incense stick's time, he will be expelled from the offerings department. He wants to turn the offerings department into his own. Even the 2 head offerings were angered away. Without the head offerings, the offerings department is nothing but an empty name. Let's see how Li Mu will deal with this. He will destroy the offerings department. Many officials in the court thought that Li Mu's actions were a bit excessive. In the Ministry of War, several officials discussed this matter and had different opinions. Strict adherence to orders and prohibitions. Compared to the court, he is more suited to be in the military. If he doesn't use this method, it will be difficult to get rid of the offerings department. He doesn't have to be so harsh on the 2 head offerings. After all, the offerings department still depends on them. Don Square. The offerings that Li Mu drove out of the offerings department were all waiting at home. The offerings department was already understaffed. Without more than half of the offerings department was simply unable to deal with the emergencies that occurred in the 36 counties of the Great Zhou. Although there were many officials in the court with decent cultivation, they each had their own duties and official duties. It was impossible for them to leave their posts to deal with these matters. When the time came, it would be Li Mu begging them to return. A day later, someone knocked on the doors of these offerings. It wasn't Li Mu who knocked, but an official from the Ministry of Works. The offerings' benefits were very good. Apart from receiving a generous monthly salary, they could also live in large mansions arranged by the court and have maids and servants to serve them. Of course, the premise of all this was that they were still offerings of the court. When they were no longer offerings, all their benefits would be taken away. Is that Li Mu serious? What do we do now? Is there no one in such a large court who can control him? Why isn't the head offerings saying anything? The orders of the Ministry of Works could not be disobeyed. No matter how unwilling these people were, they could only move out of their mansions. Yesterday they were still noble offerings of the Great Zhou. They lived in mansions bestowed by the court and had maids and servants to serve them. Overnight, they were driven out of their homes and became homeless wanderers. But they did not leave the divine capital. Everyone firmly believed that there would be a time for them to return. This confidence was shattered when they saw the 30 manifestation realm experts enter the offerings department. Countless former offerings stared at the doors of the offerings department in shock. Where did he find so many experts in such a short time? Is this his new consecrator? So he planned all of this. When they saw these experts, their hearts were filled with regret. They had been so fearless because without them, the offerings department would not be able to function in a short time. Who would have thought that Li Mu would only use 3 days to find people to replace them? They had only wanted to give Li Mu a show of strength, but not only had they failed to scare Li Mu, they had also lost their status as offerings. They had chosen to join the offerings department because there were no sects or clans to provide them with cultivation resources. Once they left the court, their path of cultivation would become abnormally difficult. While these former consecrated elders were feeling regretful, Li Mu, who was in the consecrated office, had a satisfied expression on his face. Xian Jizi had taken his words seriously. In just 3 days, the 30 elders of the Fulu school arrived at the divine capital from Mount Baiyun. Greetings, martial uncle. The 30 people stood in 3 neat rows and bowed to Li Mu. Li Mu reached out and gestured. We're all family, so there's no need to be so polite. The old man in the lead walked over to Li Mu and cupped his fists. Before we left, the sect master instructed us to listen to Martial Uncle Ling Jizi's orders when we arrive at the divine capital. Please instruct us, Martial Uncle. Li Mu felt gratified when he saw the obedient faces of these people. His own disciples were still the most obedient and sensible. What were those offerings who had looked up at the sky when they spoke? He waved his hand and told everyone, there's no hurry. Let me arrange your accommodations first. Soon, Li Mu led everyone to the Da and square. After he left, the doors of the offerings department closed. A few former offerings who had been pacing back and forth at the doors shook their heads in disappointment. They could only turn around and leave. After these powerhouses arrived, the doors of the offerings department were completely shut. Before long, 2 old men walked over to the doors of the offerings department. They were the 2 high offerings. They glanced at the tightly shut doors of the offerings department and slowly floated up. A moment later, the 2 of them landed heavily on the ground. The slovenly Taoist priest placed his hands on their shoulders and said indifferently, behave yourselves. This is not a place for you to wander around as you please. Chapter 390. After being forced down from the sky, the 2 great reverends did not turn their heads, nor did they dare to turn their heads. Although the person behind them only revealed a little bit of his aura, just this little bit of aura was enough to make them feel fearful. This was definitely a 6th realm cultivator, and a peak 6th realm cultivator at that. He was different from people like them who had just entered the 6th realm a few years ago. This kind of person already had 1 foot in the 7th realm. Although the other foot might never be able to cross over, it was still not someone the 2 of them could contend against. A peak 6th realm cultivator had the ability to kill a normal 6th realm cultivator. One of the old men said with a slightly pale face, Senior, the 2 of us are reverends of the Great Zhou. This is the Department of Reverence. The sloppy Taoist priest patted their shoulders and said, You 2 are reverends of the Great Zhou. Who isn't? Don't use the imperial court to pressure me. That brat said we can't enter, so we can't enter. Don't cause trouble here. If something goes wrong with this old man's Qingji talisman and my lifespan ends, I'll drag you 2 down with me. With that, his body floated up and flew back into the Department of Reverence. The twin old men looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The old man on the right muttered, He really is a peak cultivator whose lifespan is about to end. It's best not to provoke him. How did that Li Mu recruit such a powerful cultivator? The old man on the left knocked his head and said angrily, Is that the point? The point is the Qingji talisman. The Qingji talisman is a Qingji talisman that can increase one's lifespan by 10 years. Although the 2 brothers still had 20 years of lifespan, 20 years was not enough for them to break through to the 7th realm. There was an insurmountable gap between the middle realm and the upper realm. Not to mention 20 years, even if they were given another 40 years they might not have a chance. But even if they couldn't break through, who wouldn't want to live for 10 more years? In these 10 years, if they encountered a great opportunity and were lucky enough to break through, their lifespan would increase by 60 years. Which cultivator could resist the temptation of 60 more years of lifespan? Unfortunately, the heavenly secret talisman was a saint-ranked Fulu. Up until now, no one had been able to draw it. The ancestral court of Fulu school. Perhaps there were still people who had the ability to draw a saint-level Fulu, but the materials used to draw a Fulu of this level were too precious, and the success rate was too low. Even a school as profound as Fulu school could not afford the risk of failure. Could it be that the price the imperial court paid for that Taoist priest to join the Department of Offerings was a heavenly secrets talisman? Although they had no use for it at the moment, they would need it sooner or later. If they could obtain one, they would be able to live for at least 10 more years. Even if they couldn't break through in the next 10 years, just being alive was already good enough. After Li Mu had settled down a group of senior apprentice nephews, when he returned to the Office of Offerings, he saw 2 high priests pacing back and forth outside the Office of Offerings. It seemed that although the slovenly Taoist priest was strange and always did things that did not suit his status, he still did his job diligently. Li Mu walked over, looked at the 2 and said, Didn't the 2 of you want to leave the Office of Offerings? Why are you still here? Is there something else you want to take? The 2 awkwardly smiled. An old man said, Lord Li is joking. The 2 of us eat the salary of the imperial court, and share the burdens of the imperial court. How could we leave the office of offerings? Li Mu said, those disobedient priests have already been expelled by me. I still remember the words the two of you said that day. The old man who had just spoken said, those people are the imperial court's priests, but did not listen to the imperial court's orders. They should have been expelled. Lord Li has done the right thing. Li Mu asked, so, the two of you have no objections to this official's actions? The two nodded at the same time saying, no. Li Mu looked at the two, lightly sighed and said, in truth, the two of you have profound cultivation. This official also wants to keep the two of you, but the treasury has been tight in recent years. There are not many spiritual jades, spiritual medicines, spiritual treasures and the like left. We really cannot afford to support the two of you, the old man said. Lord Li is joking. Hasn't the office of offerings recruited a new high priest? That senior's salary must be even higher, right? Li Mu shook his head saying, you have misunderstood. That senior will enter the office of offerings and does not need a salary. The old man was taken aback, then said, but I heard that the imperial court will give him a heavenly secret talisman. Li Mu said, he only wants a heavenly secret talisman, not spiritual jades or spiritual medicines. If the two of you also only want a heavenly secret talisman, you can also stay in the office of offerings. Otherwise, the two of you should find another place. I believe that with the two of your strength, no matter which sect you join, you will be honored guests. The office of offerings is small, and cannot afford to support two great deities. At the 6th level of cultivation, the effect of spiritual jades on cultivation was very small, unless they could absorb an entire spiritual jade mine. Compared to spiritual jades, the heavenly secret talisman was an item that could truly increase one's lifespan. Without this item, 20 years later would be the day of their death. No matter which sect they joined, they would not be able to obtain a heavenly secret talisman, and the cultivation resources they could obtain would not be much more than in the office of offerings. The two exchanged glances, their gazes meeting, and quickly came to a decision. The slightly thinner old man smiled and said, actually, spiritual jades, spiritual medicines, and the heavenly secret talisman are not important. What is important is that the two of us have been in the office of offerings for many years, and have long developed feelings for each other. We are prepared to stay in the office of offerings until the day of our death. That's right, when will that heavenly secret talisman be given out? Li Mu said, 5 years later. The old man frowned and asked, so long that senior will also only receive it in 5 years? Li Mu smiled and said, that senior's cultivation has already reached the peak of the 6th level. He will receive the heavenly secret talisman in a year's time. The two of them knew that Li Mu had only said half of what he had said. Only a peak of the 6th level cultivation could receive the heavenly secret talisman in a year's time. Their cultivation was far inferior to his, and they would also need to work for the imperial court for a longer period of time. The thin old man thought for a while, then said, can we take a look at the heavenly secret talisman first? Li Mu stretched out his hand and lightly swiped at the air, and the image of the heavenly secret talisman appeared in front of the two. Li Mu looked at them and said, the imperial court does not have a finished product for this talisman. We will first need to gather the materials, and this will also take some time. The two old men fell into deep thought for a long time, and then the thin old man said, allow us to consider it. Li Mu nonchalantly said, the two of you can do as you please. The two old men left the office of offerings and returned to their residences to continue their discussion. The success rate of a saint-level Fulu talisman is extremely low. One may be able to draw one but not a second one. But that Taoist priest also doesn't seem like someone who's so easily fooled. He doesn't have much lifespan left, so we can only choose to believe him. We still have to wait and see. We can stay for a year. If that person really does obtain the heavenly secret talisman, it won't be too late to continue staying in the office of offerings. In the imperial palace, Li Mu had already walked to the entrance of Changel Palace. There was no need to doubt the strength of those two high reverends. Although they were not as strong as the slovenly Taoist priest, they were still solid 6th realm cultivators. In Mount Baiyun they would also be peak leaders. If the imperial court spent a large amount of resources to raise such people as mascots, Li Mu naturally wouldn't agree to it. But if they could work for the imperial court for free, then the more the better. In the end they were still two 6th realm cultivators. Li Mu did not intend to let them go so easily. But these old monsters who had lived for a century were not so easily fooled. If he did not show some true ability he might not be able to intimidate them. Thus he planned to draw a saint-level Fulu talisman right now. Before coming to the imperial palace, Li Mu specially made a trip home to tell Lu Hanyin and Li Qing that he might not return home for 3 or 4 days, and that they did not need to worry. Even for the current Li Mu, drawing a saint-level Fulu talisman was a very taxing task. Before officially drawing the talisman, he had to adjust himself to his best condition to ensure that the talisman could be successfully drawn on the first try. Just now, Li Mu used the spirit snail to inform the Empress. She agreed almost without thinking. Li Mu walked to Changel Palace and said, "In these 3 to 4 days, I may have to stay in the palace and adjust myself to my best condition." Zhou Yi said, "Just stay in the back hall of Changel Palace. If you need anything, I will ask the apricot guards to prepare it." Li Mu said again, "My own magic power is not enough to draw a saint-level Fulu talisman. When the time comes, I will have to trouble your majesty." Zhou Yi nodded and said, "I understand. When the time comes I will help you." Perhaps because they had been together for a long time, Li Mu still had some distance between him and Shen Jizi. But with the Empress there was none at all. With her by his side, Li Mu had no worries at all. Talisman drawing was a very ritualistic affair. Even more so when it came to high-level Fulu talismans. When the first seats of Mount Baiyun were drawing the saint-level Fulu talisman, they would burn incense and bathe half a month in advance in order to ensure the success rate. Then they would lock themselves in a quiet room and adjust their magic power and mind to their best condition before starting to draw the talisman. This was the Empress's bedroom. Burning incense and bathing were unnecessary. What Li Mu needed to do was to draw the Tianji talisman's runes over and over again until they formed muscle memory. This was the only way to ensure that he could fully control his magic power while drawing the talisman. The last time he drew the Tianji talisman was a few months ago. Now that he was going to do it again, everything had to be prepared again. In these 3 days the only thing Li Mu had to do was practice. As for the materials used to draw the talisman, the Empress had already asked Mr. Mei to prepare them. Changel Palace back hall. On the table, the materials used to draw the talisman were placed neatly. Li Mu stood behind the table, took a deep breath, closed his eyes and said, "Your Majesty, I am ready." Zhou Yi sat cross-legged on the bed. A white light shot out from her body and entered Li Mu's body. Li Mu opened his eyes again. His gaze was deep, as if it contained the sun, moon and stars. He picked up the talisman brush, wrapped it in talisman liquid and slowly put it down. Shin, do. 3 days passed without any disturbances. A few days ago, Li Mu took charge of the Department of Worship and expelled more than half of the worship. It seemed that he had a bad relationship with the two great worship. Many people were waiting for his next move, but he disappeared without warning for 3 days. In these 3 days, he did not go to the Department of Ministers, nor did he go to the Department of Worship. Even the people of Shen, Du did not see him on the streets. Other than that, there was another strange thing. Yesterday's morning court session was stopped for no reason. Since the Empress stabilized her power, the morning court session was held every 3 days. It was very regular and there were almost no exceptions. Occasionally it was stopped for some big sacrificial ceremonies. It had to be said that the Empress was much more diligent than the previous emperor in the morning court session. Among all the previous emperors, perhaps only Emperor Wen, who held morning court every day, was more diligent than the Empress. The Empress and Li Mu disappeared at the same time, which made people's imagination run wild. Especially 3 days ago, someone saw Li Mu walk into Changel Palace with their own eyes. Changel Palace was the Empress's bedroom. She usually gathered the ministers in Shangyang Palace. Among the foreign ministers, only Li Mu could freely enter and leave her bedroom. Li Mu had not come out for 3 whole days after entering Changel Palace. Although the people did not dare to talk about it, they had thought a lot in their hearts. Some people even suspected that the Empress had no intention of passing the throne to the Shao clan or the Zhou clan, but wanted to have a son of her own. Li Mu looked like a favored minister, but he was actually a favored concubine, or the Empress had already chosen him as the Empress. As for Li Mu's wife, it was just a cover. Otherwise, how could they stay in Changel Palace for 3 days without coming out? And Li Mu's family did not have the slightest intention of looking for him. The Empress, who had always been diligent, had even stopped the morning court session for Li Mu. This was not a favored minister messing up the government, but a favored concubine messing up the government. Just as some of the officials were thinking this, they suddenly felt an inexplicable palpitation. Then they realized that the sky had darkened without them noticing. An official was transcribing a dossier when the books on the table suddenly rustled in the wind. Just as he was about to close the window, he caught a glimpse of the sky outside the window. He could not help but stand up with a shocked expression and said in a panic, What is this? In the divine capital, all the officials in the palace walked out and looked at the sky. They saw that the originally cloudless sky was suddenly filled with dark clouds. The dark clouds covered the sky and covered the entire divine capital. It was as if the entire world had darkened. The dark clouds were extremely low. Everyone felt as if a huge rock was pressing on their chests, and they could not breathe at all. What's going on? Why is there suddenly such a phenomenon in the divine capital? I can't breathe. It's so uncomfortable. The citizens of the divine capital were also shocked by the sudden phenomenon. This doomsday-like scene made everyone uneasy. Dark clouds were still gathering in the sky. Soon they were as thick as ink. Lightning snakes danced in the dark clouds from time to time, adding a bit of fear to the scene. In the divine capital, the 4 academies. 4 figures floated up at the same time. This is heavenly tribulation. Someone has ascended to the 7th realm? No, the heavenly tribulation of the 7th realm is stronger than this. In the White Deer Academy, a middle-aged man pinched his fingers and murmured, "It's either someone ascending to the 7th realm or a precious treasure has appeared. I wonder what it is that caused this phenomenon?" In the consecration department, the sloppy Taoist priest was dozing off. His eyes suddenly opened and he instantly appeared in the courtyard. He looked at the phenomenon in the sky and was stunned for a moment. Then shock appeared on his face and he blurted out, "Motherf asterisk Ker heavenly tribulation." Someone drew a saint-level Motherf asterisk Ker. Oh my, there's really someone in the Great Zhou court who can draw something like this. In the Dawn Square, the 2 high consecrators had long been alarmed by the phenomenon. They stood in the courtyard and looked up in shock. When the dark clouds gathered to a limit, they released tens of thousands of lightning bolts and struck in the direction of the palace. Everyone's gaze also looked at the palace. Inside the palace, the officials who were observing the weather saw the dense lightning bolts above their heads heading straight for them. All of them felt their scalps go numb and their guts go numb. Some of the weaker ones directly collapsed to the ground under the heavenly might and even fainted. In the rear hall of the Changel Palace, Li Mu's face was incomparably pale. Sweat dripped from his forehead, but he couldn't care less. The writing of the heavenly secret talisman had reached the most critical moment. The writing of the saint-level Motherf asterisk Ker this time was different from the time at White Cloud Mountain. Last time, Li Mu was in the special flask space. After he drew the Motherf asterisk Ker, the heavenly tribulation phenomenon appeared. This time, the heavenly tribulation appeared much faster than Li Mu had expected. Before the Motherf asterisk Ker was drawn, the tribulation clouds had already formed and condensed into the first wave of attacks. Thunder rumbled in his ears, but he couldn't afford to be distracted. If he was the slightest bit careless, 3 days of hard work and those precious talisman liquid would be wasted. Outside the Changel Palace, when the bolts of tribulation lightning were about to strike, the 4 walls of the divine capital suddenly flashed with a golden light. In the next moment, a golden light shield appeared above the divine capital and completely enveloped the divine capital. When the lightning bolts landed on the light shield, it was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no sound and no splash. Only then did some officials remember that the divine capital, as the capital of the Great Zhou, was protected by a powerful array formation. Even if there were thousands of soldiers and horses or even 7th realm cultivators, they wouldn't be able to break through it. After realizing this, they gradually felt relieved. However, they still couldn't help but look in the direction of the Changel Palace. The target of the tribulation lightning was obviously Changel Palace. What were Her Majesty and Li Mu doing inside? Why did they summon the heavenly tribulation? In the sky, the lightning bolts in the tribulation clouds had already begun to accumulate for the second time. In the Changel Palace, Li Mu finished the last stroke in an ethereal state. The Motherf asterisk Ker on the table flashed with spiritual light and slowly floated up. The heavenly secret talisman was completed. A beam of white light shot out of Li Mu's body and entered the Empress's body. Li Mu's body and mind were already exhausted to the limit. Without the support of the Empress' primordial spirit, he felt the world spin and immediately fell to the ground. However, he didn't fall to the ground. Instead, he fell into a body with a faint fragrance. Zhou Yi carried Li Mu to the bed and put him down. She said, "Rest first. Leave the rest to me." Li Mu was already exhausted to the extreme. He didn't have time to think about the soft Princess Carrie just now. He closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu. He took off his shoes and placed them neatly by the bed. The blanket at the end of the bed also stretched out on its own and covered Li Mu's body. After doing all this, Zhou Yi's body disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, everyone in the divine capital saw an illusory figure rise rapidly from the palace and appear in the sky. As the illusory figure rose, it kept growing bigger and bigger. Soon it was hundreds of feet tall. The illusory figure was wearing an imperial robe and an imperial crown. It floated above the palace. Because it was too tall, no one could see its face clearly. In the dark clouds, the second wave of tribulation lightning had already condensed and pressed down on the illusory figure. The illusory figure just pointed a finger, and the lightning immediately collapsed. At the same time, the frightening dark clouds in the sky also collapsed. After pointing a finger, the sky in the divine capital was clear and bright again. Countless people in the divine capital were deeply shocked by this scene. After they recovered from their shock, they immediately knelt on the ground and cheered loudly. "It's Her Majesty the Empress. Long live Her Majesty the Empress." The scene just now had left an indelible memory in their hearts. Countless officials in the imperial court also couldn't recover from the shock for a long time. Although the Empress had always given them the impression that she was majestic and unapproachable, she rarely displayed her strength in front of the officials. As a result, they had almost forgotten that she was an ultimate powerhouse of the seventh realm. The heavenly tribulation that could destroy the entire divine capital was directly shattered by her pointing a finger. How powerful was this? At this moment, no matter if it was the officials of the new party or the old party, they could only submit to that indomitable figure in front of their hearts. After dispersing the tribulation clouds, the illusory figure quickly shrank and finally disappeared from the sky above the palace. Chengel Palace. Li Mu didn't know how long he had slept. When he woke up again, he saw the Empress standing in front of the window. Zhou looked at him and said indifferently, "Open your mouth." Li Mu opened his mouth, and a ray of light flashed from her hand. A round thing appeared in Li Mu's mouth. It melted in an instant, and a pure medicinal power rushed to his limbs and bones. More than half of the magic power in his body was instantly recovered. Li Mu sat up on the bed and asked, "Your Majesty, how long have I slept?" Zhou said, "About a day and a night." Including the time he had been unconscious, it was a little longer than he expected. Li Mu got off the bed and said, "I'll go home first." Zhou said, "Your mind is seriously overdrawn. Rest for a while more." Li Mu shook his head and said, "No, I'll go home and rest. If I don't go back, my wife will be worried." Zhou waved her hand and said, "Go, go." As soon as she finished speaking, Li Mu felt his vision blur. The next moment he appeared in his own courtyard. Benefactor. Young master. Xiao Bai and Wan Wan were swinging in the courtyard out of boredom. When they saw Li Mu, they immediately rushed over. Wan Wan hugged Li Mu's arm and said, "If you didn't come back, Miss would have gone to the palace to find you." Li Mu smiled embarrassedly at Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, who had just walked out of the room, and said, "I've made you worry." Li Qing was clearly relieved. Lu Hanyan walked up to him. Seeing his pale face, she whispered, "You're just a minor official, not the Prime Minister. Why do you have to work so hard?" Li Mu took her hand and said, "If it weren't for His Majesty, we wouldn't have everything we have today. We also wouldn't have been able to reverse the verdict and get revenge for Lord Li. Naturally, I have to repay His Majesty to the best of my ability. But you don't have to work so hard." Lu Hanyan looked at him reproachfully and said, "His Majesty doesn't know how to care about you. It's so difficult to reach the saint-level Fulu. What if you hurt your cultivation foundation?" Li Mu smiled and said, "His Majesty is very good to me. Don't worry, I'm fine. I'll recover after a few days of rest." In Chengel Palace, Zhou looked angry. She gritted her teeth and said, "Only you know how to care about him. So what if you're married?" Chapter 391. Not long after Li Mu returned home, the Empress asked Mr. May to send over some elixirs to strengthen one's foundation. Although he borrowed the Empress's power when he drew talismans, the mental exhaustion was his own. The saint-level Fulu was something that far exceeded the limits of Li Mu's current ability. After every talisman he drew, he had to rest for a long time before he could draw the second one. When he reached level 6 and his cultivation increased greatly, drawing saint-level talismans would no longer have such serious aftereffects. But that would be a long time in the future. Due to various opportunities, his cultivation had increased rapidly in the past 2 years. He had completed a path that others would take a lifetime to complete. For his cultivation after the fifth realm, unless he encountered a great opportunity, such as the Emperor's Qi in the Great Zhou Ancestral Temple, which he coincidentally absorbed, then there was a certain possibility that he could immediately become a seventh realm cultivator like the Empress. Otherwise, he would have to take one step at a time on the path of cultivation in the future and walk down the same path as the Empress. However, he didn't plan to draw too many talismans in the short term. This talisman was to prove to the sloppy old Taoist and the two high priests that he had the ability to do so. They had had enough of it. Li Mu rested for a night. The next morning he came to the Department of Offerings again. He walked in front of the sloppy Taoist priest and stretched out his hand. A fulu floated above his palm. The moment the fulu appeared, the space here seemed to distort. The talisman of divine secrets. The sloppy Taoist priest was shocked. Yesterday's vision was indeed caused by the birth of the saint-level fulu. He subconsciously reached out to take it, but the fulu disappeared in Li Mu's hand. Li Mu smiled and said, "As long as you stay in the Department of Offerings for a year, I will give you the talisman of divine secrets with both hands after a year." The sloppy Taoist priest glanced at him and didn't raise any objections. There was no doubt that he wouldn't be able to get the talisman after a year. Li Mu represented the Great Zhou court, so it was impossible for the Great Zhou court to lie to him about this matter. They would not, nor would they dare to. What Li Mu wanted was for the slovenly Taoist priest to remain in the Department of Worship for a year. As for whether he was sleeping here or doing something else, it didn't matter. His use to the Department of Offerings was like a nuclear bomb to a country in another world. Whether or not he needed it did not matter, but it was a necessity. Moreover, compared to swindling people on the streets of the divine capital and enduring the sun and rain, he was allowed to live in a spacious mansion, have servants to serve him, have a respectable status, and after a year he was even given a treasure that countless cultivators coveted. If he didn't contribute to the Department of Offerings, how could he feel at ease? To high-level cultivators this was a great karma. If they were tainted by the karma but had no effect, it would have a great impact on their future path of cultivation. Hoarding for free did not exist for them. The more they hoard for free now, the more they would have to repay in the future. Li Mu walked into the courtyard and saw two figures standing there. He looked at the two old men and asked, "Have the two of you finished thinking?" The two great reverends nodded at the same time. The thin old man said, "We've finished thinking. After so many years, us two brothers have already treated the Department of Offerings as our home. How can we just leave like this?" Although staying in the Department of Offerings would be somewhat restricted, even if they joined a sect they would still have to contribute to the sect. There was no sect that didn't ask them to do anything for the sect, but would provide them with large amounts of cultivation resources. And if they worked for the Great Zhou court, they would be able to obtain the talisman of heavenly secrets, extending their lifespan by 10 years before the end of their lives. This was a benefit that they could not obtain from any sect. Just for this reason alone, they could not leave the Department of Offerings. Li Mu looked at the two and said awkwardly, "But the state treasury is tight. I'm afraid it can't provide you with as many cultivation resources as before." At the sixth realm, the resources that the Great Zhou court provided for them were not enough to accelerate their cultivation in the first place. If they ran out of resources, then so be it. Compared to that, the talisman of heavenly secrets was the most important. The thin old man said seriously, "Although the two of us were not born in the Great Zhou, in our hearts, we've already treated the Great Zhou as our second home. We hope to do something for the Great Zhou. We don't need any spiritual jade or spiritual herbs." Li Mu smiled and said, "The Department of Offerings welcomes the two great reverends back." Of course, Li Mu would not refuse a sixth realm expert who had delivered themselves to his door for free. The more experts there were in the Department of Offerings, the better. The more powerful the Department of Offerings would be, and he would be one step closer to his dream of subduing the demon nation, pacifying the ghost realm, and destroying the demon sect. After fulfilling his promise to the Empress, he would be able to take his wives and entangle them to the ends of the earth. At present, Lu Hanyin had already become the head wife of the Li clan. He and Li Qing were still at the stage of holding hands and hugging each other. This was because compared to Li Qing, Lu Hanyin was more open and proactive. For the sake of dual cultivation, she climbed over Li Mu's window and climbed into his bed in the middle of the night. Before the two of them confirmed their relationship, Lu Hanyin was already capable of doing such things. If Li Qing was half as proactive as she was, she might be the head wife of the Li clan now. However, this was due to the difference in their personalities. Could not be forced. Getting along with Li Qing had to be done step by step. If Lu Hanyin hadn't disturbed them yesterday, they might have already progressed from hugging each other to kissing and hugging each other. Li Mu suspected that Lu Hanyin was deliberately causing trouble, but he had no evidence. He had originally planned to continue what he hadn't finished yesterday with Li Qing tonight. However, when he returned home, he saw Hyun Jinko in the courtyard. After asking Hyun Jinko, Li Mu found out that he was here on the orders of the sect master to bring Li Qing and Lu Hanyin back to Mount Baiyun. Although the sect master had only taken Li Qing as his disciple as a temporary measure, this matter was already known to everyone. In everyone's hearts, Li Qing was the disciple of the Fulu School's sect master. As one of the 6 Taoist sects, the Fulu School's sect master naturally couldn't be careless about accepting a disciple. This time, Hyun Jinko was bringing Li Qing back to the mountain for the purpose of holding the disciple acceptance ceremony. At that time, apart from the sect masters and elders of the various sects of the Fulu School, the other 5 Taoist sects, such as the Danding sect, the Spirit Array sect, the Xuanzong sect, the South sect and the North sect, would also send important figures to participate in the ceremony. Lu Hanyin would also participate in this ceremony. When Yu Zhenzi had taken her as his disciple, although he had extorted the Fulu School once, he hadn't held the disciple acceptance ceremony. This was because this kind of ceremony was only held by grand elders or first seats whose cultivation had reached the 7th realm. Yu Zhenzi's cultivation had originally been at the peak of the 6th realm. After returning to the mountain this time and receiving Mount Baiyun's inheritance, he had already successfully advanced to the 7th realm. Her and Xianjizi's disciple acceptance ceremony would be held together. Hyun Jinko looked at Li Mu and asked, "Junior brother, do you want to return to the mountain with us? During this ceremony, senior brother sect master should introduce some experts from the other 5 sects to you." Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, "When will the ceremony be held?" Hyun Jinko said, "The ceremony needs to be prepared and the other 5 sects including the South sect, the North sect, the Xuanzong sect and the others will all need time. The soonest will be 3 months later." Li Mu asked, "Then why don't we pick them up 3 months later?" Hyun Jinko said, "Senior brother sect master's intention is to take advantage of these 3 months to raise martial niece Li Qing's cultivation to the 5th realm as soon as possible. Senior sister has just advanced. According to the rules, she has to visit the other 5 sects one by one. She plans to bring martial niece Lu to see the world. Lu Hanyin and Li Qing were both going to leave. In that case, Li Mu would have to stay in an empty room for at least the next 3 months. They both had important matters to attend to. Li Mu could not force them to stay by his side. Although Lu Hanyin and Li Qing had different personalities, they had the same desire to be strong. Li Mu and Lu Hanyin's cultivation were both at the 5th realm. Although Li Qing did not show it, Li Mu knew that she also had an urgent desire to improve her strength. As for Lu Hanyin, she would not be satisfied. In the future, her life would be to play the zither and cook. She also had her own cultivation. Li Mu looked at them and said, "Then you two go. I will return in a few days. The court has been busy recently. I can't leave." The matter of the Department of Worship was not over. Li Mu planned to abolish the old system of worship and introduce a new set of rules. This was not something that could be done in 2 or 3 days. He needed to discuss it with the Empress before he could finalize it. Lu Hanyin called Wanwan and Xiaobai into her room. No one knew what they said. Li Qing glanced at Li Mu and said, "I have something to say to you." Li Mu followed her into the room and asked, "What?" "Oh." Li Qing turned around, stood on her tiptoes and kissed Li Mu on the lips. Their lips touched. Li Mu was stunned for a moment, then hugged her waist tightly. There were not many words. Their lips pressed together for a long time and did not separate. It was as if they both wanted to melt into each other's bodies. It was not until Lu Hanyin snorted outside that Li Qing let go of Li Mu somewhat awkwardly and ran out with a red face. Lu Hanyin extended a hand to Li Qing and said unhappily, "Look at you. You don't look like the Constable Li of the past. Let's go." Li Qing held her hand and turned around to look at Li Mu. Only then did she leave with her. This was not the first time that Li Mu had parted with Li Qing and Lu Hanyin. However, the 2 times they parted, his emotions were completely different. After parting with Li Qing in Yangqiu County, they had gone their separate ways. He did not know if they would meet again. The parting in Luoyang was only temporary. Li Mu knew very well that they would meet again very soon. The last time he parted with Lu Hanyin, it was because they were both weak and helpless. The incident where Li Mu faced off against Chu Jiang of Gojoseon alone had left a huge shadow in Lu Hanyin's heart. It made her want to urgently improve her strength. Now, the situation was completely different from that time. Whether it was Li Mu or her, if they were to face off against Chu Jiang of Gojoseon again, the latter would definitely be the one in a difficult situation. These days, each of them had been working hard for their own futures. They had also completed their growth and transformation. After Lu Hanyin and Li Qing left, Li Mu looked at Wan Wan and Xiao Bai and asked, "What did she say to you just now?" Xiao Bai immediately said, "Sister Lu said that when she and Sister Qing are not around, we should look after our benefactor and not let our benefactor provoke other little vixens in Luoyang." Wan Wan covered Xiao Bai's mouth and said, "Miss said that we can't tell young master." Li Mu spanked her butt and said unhappily, "Do you only have eyes for your miss?" Wan Wan covered her butt and said with grievance, "Young master already has Xiao Bai. Don't provoke other vixens." She blinked her big clear eyes. There was a pleading look in her eyes. Li Mu met her gaze and almost lost his mind. He covered Wan Wan's eyes and pressed down on her but a few more times. He said angrily, "How many times have I told you not to use your eye technique on me?" Chapter 392. With Lu Hanyin by her side, Wan Wan's progress was also very fast. Although her cultivation level was still at the third realm, her ocular techniques were becoming more and more powerful. Even Li Mu couldn't control himself after looking at her pair of big watery eyes for a long time. Lu Hanyin left, but Wan Wan was left behind to act as Li Mu's spy. Fortunately, Li Mu had Xiao Bai. In this family she was the only one who was wholeheartedly loyal to him. Okay. Li Mu put Wan Wan down and asked, "They're gone. There are only 3 of us. What are we eating tonight?" Wan Wan became energized at the mention of food. She rubbed her butt as she hugged Li Mu's arm and said, "Let's eat barbecued meat." "No, let's eat hot pot again." "No, barbecued meat again." "How about hot pot again?" Wan Wan was very conflicted about whether to eat hot pot or barbecued meat. In the end, Li Mu decided to eat hot pot and barbecued meat at the same time. After eating and drinking to their fill, she and Xiao Bai cleaned up and washed the dishes. Li Mu went to the backyard and continued to repair the law bell. A complete law bell was very important to him. The sooner he repaired it, the sooner his family's safety would be completely guaranteed. However, he knew that those small spells that had never appeared in this world were almost used up. If the law bell couldn't be completely repaired before they were used up, he could only wait for it to slowly repair itself. However, if that was the case, he didn't know how long he would have to wait. A year or even several years was very likely. And this was under the condition that Li Mu had already repaired most of the cracks. If it weren't for Li Mu's intervention, it would probably take dozens or even hundreds of years just by relying on its self-repair ability. The next day, Li Mu went to the palace as usual. There wasn't much to do in the Imperial Secretariat recently. Li Mu handled his own business in the Imperial Secretariat in the morning. In the afternoon, he went to Changel Palace to help the Empress approve memorials and discuss the reform of the Department of Imperial Offerings with her. In Changel Palace, Li Mu sat at the side, carefully reading the important memorials. Zhou Yi leaned lazily on the dragon throne, reading a book called Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. Occasionally she would raise her head to look at Li Mu. Seeing that he was seriously correcting the memorials, she lowered her head again to read. By the time Zhou Yi came to her senses, she had already been in the yamen for a long time. She looked up at Li Mu again and asked, "It's been a quarter of an hour. Why haven't you gone back yet?" Li Mu flipped open a new memorial. Without raising his head, he said, "My wife has returned to Mount Baiyun. I'm not in a hurry to return today. I'll read a few more memorials." Zhou Yi unconsciously sat up straight and asked, "Which wife?" "Li Mu." Both of them went. "How long will you be gone?" 3 or 4 months. Zhou Yi put down the book in her hand and said, "Then you're not in a hurry to go back. Finish reading these memorials first." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that won't do. Xiao Bai and Wan Wan are still waiting for me to eat at home." Zhou Yi said, "I'll have the Mei Wei bring them to the palace. I haven't seen the little fox in a long time. I'll also order the Imperial kitchen to prepare some food. In a while you can all eat at my place." Li Mu was stunned for a moment. Then he could only nod and say, Then okay." It seemed that ever since Lu Hanyin came to Shindu, the Empress hadn't gone to the Li Manor. In any case, there was no one at home. It didn't make much of a difference if he went back sooner or later. It was better to work overtime in the palace and get a working meal. Soon Mr. Mei went to the Li Manor to pick up Wan Wan and Xiao Bai. It was Wan Wan's first time entering the palace. At first she was a little reserved. However, under the influence of Xiao Bai, she soon became relaxed. The chatter of the 2 girls brought some liveliness to the usually lifeless Changel Palace. Li Mu noticed that when the Empress looked at Wan Wan and Xiao Bai, who were chasing each other in Changel Palace, there was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth. Li Mu's impression of the Empress was that she rarely smiled. At most, she was expressionless. Perhaps she saw her own teenage years in Wanwan and Xiaobai. However, their teenage years should be different. Wanwan and Xiaobai were at the age of innocence. At the Empress age, she should have become the crown princess and officially started her unfortunate life. While Li Mu was reviewing the reports, the Empress took Wanwan and Xiaobai to the Imperial Garden to admire the flowers. Mr. Mei once said that the flowers in the Imperial Garden were all planted by the Empress herself. Planting and nurturing flowers was her greatest hobby. Who didn't like these beautiful things? If he really had the chance to kidnap the Empress in the future and live in seclusion with her, he would let her plant flowers all around the house. Every day when he opened the door, he would reap the joy of the whole day. After finishing the last report, Li Mu left Changle Palace and walked towards the Imperial Garden. Although he had been to Changle Palace more than 100 times, his fixed route was from the Secretariat to Changle Palace. He had never been to other places. Fortunately, Li Mu knew the direction of the Imperial Garden. After walking out of Changle Palace, he walked in a direction. After a few hundred steps, Li Mu suddenly sensed something and stopped in his tracks. He turned to look at a palace next to him. His heart was pounding. Suddenly he had a strong urge to step into this palace. It seemed that there was something in this palace that was attracting him. Li Mu looked up at the top of the palace and saw the words, Ancestral Temple. He subconsciously walked towards the palace, but before he could get close, a loud shout suddenly came from the palace. Get lost! At the same time, a strong aura swept out from the palace and pressed down on Li Mu. Li Mu took a few steps back. His hair fluttered behind him and his clothes fluttered. However, he also condensed an extremely strong force on his body. The two forces collided and formed a powerful impact. In the sky, several floating clouds suddenly scattered. At the same time Li Mu's telekinesis condensed into force, a dragon's roar came from the palace. Then a golden light suddenly flew out. It was a golden dragon. After flying out of the palace, it rushed towards Li Mu. The golden dragon was very fast. Li Mu had no time to dodge, nor did he try to. He did not feel any threat from the golden dragon. The golden dragon flew to Li Mu's side and instantly wrapped around his body. In the next moment, Li Mu's expression changed slightly. He felt that the telekinesis he had accumulated was quickly flowing into the golden dragon's body. Li Mu controlled his telekinesis so that it would not be taken away by the golden dragon. He grabbed the golden dragon's body with one hand, wanting to fling it away. However, his hand passed through the golden dragon's body. The dragon was actually an illusory object. It did not have a physical body at all. Seeing that the telekinesis he had painstakingly accumulated was about to be taken away by the dragon, Li Mu made up his mind and used the guiding technique to compete with it. The man and the dragon were evenly matched in the contest for the telekinesis. Neither could do anything to the other. At this moment, three figures walked out of the palace. The three of them were old men with white hair and beards. They wore crowns on their heads, which were different from the Empress's crown. They wore black dragon robes, and the golden dragon embroidered on their banners only had 4 claws. What shocked Li Mu was that the powerful aura emitted from the three of them was not weaker than the scruffy Taoist priests. There were actually 3 peak 6th realm experts in the palace. Seeing the golden dragon coiling around Li Mu's body, an old man's face darkened. He said coldly, "Those who disturb the Emperor's aura should be punished by death." He stretched out a withered finger and pointed at Li Mu from afar. A powerful force of heaven and earth quickly gathered. An illusory finger appeared in front of Li Mu's eyes. A terrifying aura was emitted from the finger. He was about to summon the Dao Bell to defend himself when a figure appeared in front of him. At this moment, the old man's right index finger had already pressed down. Crack. His outstretched finger was directly broken. He ignored his broken finger and looked at the figure in front of Li Mu in shock and anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "What are you doing?" The Empress looked at the three of them indifferently and said, "Go back." Then she waved her hand gently. A powerful force swept the 3 old men back. The Empress glanced at the golden dragon again. The golden dragon trembled and quickly scurried back into the palace. It was only now that Li Mu sensed the golden dragon's abnormality. He looked in the direction of the palace and muttered, "Your Majesty, this is..." The Empress said, "Emperor's aura." It was not the first time Li Mu had heard the name Emperor's aura. The Empress had been able to reach 7th realm because she had obtained it. However, he had only heard of Emperor's aura before. Today was the first time he had seen it. It was said that Emperor's aura was born from the telekinesis of the people of the 36 counties. Li Mu did not realize it earlier, but now he realized that the golden dragon itself was formed from telekinesis. However, the telekinesis was too vast and had already given birth to a spirit. The so-called Emperor's aura was the telekinesis spirit. If Li Mu absorbed a few more decades of telekinesis, his body should also give birth to a telekinesis spirit. This damn telekinesis spirit. It already had so much telekinesis, yet it still coveted this little bit from him. Wasn't it too greedy? However, it was the first time Li Mu had seen such a vast amount of telekinesis. If he had enough spiritual jades, he only needed to swallow this telekinesis spirit and probably reach 6th realm immediately. If this telekinesis spirit completely matured, it would not be impossible for him to reach 7th realm immediately. The Empress looked at Li Mu and asked, "Do you want to go in and take a look?" Li Mu paused and nodded slightly. He followed the Empress to the entrance of the palace. 3 old men stood in the palace. The leader said in a low voice, "This is the ancestral temple. Those who are not members of the royal family cannot enter." The Empress looked at them calmly. "I let him in. Do you have any objections?" The old man said, "We are the guardians of the ancestral temple. If you want to let an outsider in, you have to step over our dead bodies first." The Empress looked at Mr. Mei, who was waiting outside the palace, and said, "Mei Wei, arrange for someone to come and collect the body." After saying that, the other 2 old men pulled the old man away, one on the left and one on the right. "Royal brother, forget it. It's not a big deal. Didn't the Zhou family also come in back then? If he wants to see, let him see. It's not like he'll lose anything." Chapter 393. The 3 elders walked to the corner of the hall and sat down cross-legged on the futons. Li Mu followed the Empress into the hall. This hall was bigger than Li Mu had imagined. After walking in, the first thing that caught his eye was a high platform in the innermost part of the hall. On the high platform there were many memorial tablets. Li Mu glanced at them and saw that the names of the past emperors of the Great Zhou were written on the tablets. The one at the top was the founder of the Great Zhou, the founding emperor of the Great Zhou. The one at the bottom was the former emperor. The former crown prince had his power taken away by the Zhou family before he had officially inherited the throne, so he was not qualified to be listed. Below the high platform were 2 rows of small cauldrons. Li Mu counted. There were 36 cauldrons in total, the same number as the counties of the Great Zhou. Traces of golden light were drawn out of the small cauldrons and gathered in a large cauldron in the center of the hall. The golden dragon was swimming in the cauldron. Although it looked at the Empress with fear in its golden eyes, when it looked at Li Mu, its eyes were full of greed. Li Mu looked at the golden dragon, and some other thoughts arose in his mind. After reaching the 5th level, his cultivation had become very slow, so slow that he could barely feel any progress. If he could swallow this golden dragon, he could immediately reach the 6th level, which was worth at least 20 years of cultivation. Feeling Li Mu's gaze, the greed in the golden dragon's eyes immediately disappeared without a trace. With a whoosh, it dived into the cauldron and did not show its head again. Li Mu looked at the small cauldrons and asked the Empress, "Your Majesty, these cauldrons should correspond to the national temples of the 36 counties, right?" Zhou Yi nodded slightly. Li Mu looked at the small cauldrons and found that the golden light on them varied in intensity, brightness, and darkness. The strongest one was so dazzling that he could not look directly at it. The weakest one was only a thin ray, so dim that it seemed to be about to go out. The small cauldron that shone the brightest was connected to Zhong County, where Luoyang was located. In the past year, many changes had happened in Luoyang. The people of Zhong County were united like never before. The further the counties were from the fairies' capital, the dimmer the light from the small cauldron connected to them. Only a few counties were slightly brighter. This meant that there was still a long way to go before he could fully condense the Emperor Qi. The golden dragon quickly flew out of the cauldron and circled around the Empress's head a few times before flying back into the cauldron. Li Mu noticed that all the psychokinesis on the Empress's body had been sucked away by it. As a king who was deeply loved by the people, the Empress's psychic power was no less than Li Mu's. Li Mu was a little angry when he saw this. The psychokinesis on the Empress was something that both Li Mu and her had worked hard for a long time. It was not easy for them to condense it, but it was all for someone else. He felt injustice for the Empress. After visiting the ancestral temple, Li Mu didn't stay here for long and walked out with the Empress. Not long after the two walked out, in the corner of the ancestral temple, 3 elders who were sitting cross-legged on prayer mats with their eyes closed slowly opened their eyes. One of the elders snorted. "Is this still the crown princess? She has changed. She wouldn't be so disrespectful to us in the past." Another elder said, She was set up by the Zhou family to inherit the Emperor Qi and almost died. Sitting in this position, she was already full of resentment. How can her personality not change? The last elder said slowly, "That's not important. In the past 6 months, the speed of condensing the Emperor Qi has obviously increased. I'm afraid it will mature again in 20 years. We need to urge them to work hard and cultivate. If they can enter the 6th realm, then they will have full confidence to refine the Emperor Qi." Chang'e Palace. Li Mu, Wanwan, Xiaobai, and the Empress were eating hot pot together. After walking around the ancestral temple with the Empress, Li Mu gained a lot of knowledge. So this was how the Emperor Qi that was related to the inheritance of the Great Zhou came about. It was no wonder that when the people of the 36 counties sent the people's blood letter, both the old and new parties chose to give in. If the imperial court completely lost the people's hearts, the state temples in the various counties would not be able to absorb psychokinesis. Naturally, there would be no way to send it to the ancestral temple, which would delay the condensation of the Emperor Qi. The 3 elders in the ancestral temple were members of the Shao royal family. Their status was extremely high, and their seniority was even higher than that of the previous emperor. The 3 of them were all at the peak of the 6th realm. It seemed that the old party's strength was still far stronger than the new party's. What the Zhou family relied on was their blood relationship with the Empress. Li Mu thought of a question and asked, "Your Majesty, why don't you absorb the Emperor Qi yourself? Will it allow you to enter the 8th realm?" Zhou Yi blew on the tofu and said, "No." Li Mu thought and said, "But your Majesty is so young. You can be the emperor for another 100 years. There's no need to pass the throne," Zhou Yi said indifferently, "because I don't like it." Li Mu sighed. He only felt that it was unfair for her. She did not want to be the emperor, but she took on the responsibility of being the emperor. From the beginning to the end, when the Zhou family was planning, they never asked if what they gave was what she wanted. At this moment, Zhou Yi looked at him again and said, "Unless you're willing to approve the memorial for 100 years. Li Mu picked up a piece of tofu and put it into his mouth. He did not care that it was hot and said decisively, "Since your Majesty doesn't like it, it's fine if you don't want to be the emperor. When the time comes, you can pass the throne to whoever you want. If your Majesty is willing, you can be my neighbor. We can open up 2 plots of land in front of the courtyard." Xiaobai nodded and said, Okay. I also want to be Big Sister Zhou's neighbor." Zhou Yi patted her head and said, "Why don't you 2 not go back tonight? There are many empty rooms in Chang'e Palace. You can sleep here." Xiaobai looked at Li Mu. She had to ask for Li Mu's opinion no matter what. After seeing the scene in the ancestral shrine, Li Mu felt even more sorry for the Empress. He nodded and said, "Then you can sleep here." The Empress looked at Li Mu and said, "You don't have to go back either." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "Your Majesty, this is not very good, right?" Zhou Yi said, "In any case, you have to enter the palace tomorrow morning. Just stay here." It's not the first time. What she said was somewhat reasonable. Chang'e Palace was only 100 steps away from the Secretariat. It was much closer than home, so he could sleep for a while longer. But since ancient times, who would allow an official to sleep in the palace? The Empress didn't seem to think this was a big deal. She looked at Wanwan and said, "And this little girl, she can also stay in the palace." Wanwan looked hesitant and said, But Miss said that young master has to go home every night." "He can't stay out all night," Xiaobai said, "but we're also with benefactor. We're staying at Big Sister Zhou's house. We're not some vixen." Wanwan was still hesitant. The Empress continued, "For breakfast tomorrow morning, you can also eat in the palace. There are dozens of pastries in the imperial kitchen. You can try them all." Wanwan grabbed Xiaobai's hand and said, "I think you're right. Even if Miss knows, she won't blame us." Xiaobai and Wanwan both agreed. Li Mu's opinion was not important. It wasn't 2-1 but 3-1. In any case, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing weren't here. Xiaobai and Wanwan were with him. There was no one waiting for him at home. It didn't make any difference whether he went back or not. Tonight, Li Mu still slept in the back hall. When he closed his eyes and cultivated in his room, he could hear a girl's giggles coming from the front hall. Li Mu had spent more time in Chang'e Palace than he had at home, so he knew very well that this palace was cold and lonely most of the time. Even when he was here, he and the Empress were both busy with their own things. Li Mu was reviewing memorials. The Empress was either reading or relaxing. The palace was as quiet as ever. After Wanwan and Xiaobai arrived, it was no longer as lively as before. Li Mu didn't cultivate until very late. He prepared to rest. Not long ago he had drawn a saint-level Fulu. His exhausted state of mind had not completely recovered. He still needed a period of quiet rest. Not long after Li Mu lay down, he seemed to sense something and sat up from the bed. He got off the bed and walked to the door. When he opened the door, he saw Wan Wan and Xiao Bai wrapped in blankets, standing on either side of the door. Li Mu asked in confusion, "What are you two standing here for?" Wan Wan wrapped the blanket tightly around her and whispered, "We can't sleep." Xiao Bai continued, "Can we sleep with our benefactor?" One of them had a pitiful expression on her face, while the other looked at Li Mu with her big watery eyes. Li Mu opened the door and said helplessly, "Come in." The two figures immediately ran into Li Mu's room. They placed their blankets on the chair and crawled into Li Mu's bed. Fortunately, the bed in Changle Palace was very big. Even if 3 people slept on it, it wouldn't seem crowded. Li Mu had reason to suspect that this bed was originally built by the previous emperor for the convenience of sleeping with his concubines. This might also be the reason why Wan Wan and Xiao Bai couldn't sleep. In fact, when people slept, they only needed a small quiet room and a small bed. An overly spacious bedroom with an overly big bed wouldn't be able to sleep well. Perhaps this was the reason why the empress didn't sleep in the middle of the night and always met Li Mu in his dreams. How lonely would it be if he was the only one sleeping in such a big Changle palace? Li Mu couldn't bear it just thinking about it. The empress had already been like this for 4 years. Looking at Wan Wan and Xiao Bai lying on the bed with only their heads sticking out, Li Mu suddenly didn't know how to sleep. If he slept next to Wan Wan, Xiao Bai would definitely be disappointed. If he slept next to Xiao Bai, the one who would be disappointed would be Wan Wan. Sleeping between the two of them, surrounded by the soft bodies of young girls, he had never experienced such a situation. Even if he forced himself to sleep, he wouldn't be able to sleep. Li Mu covered them with the blankets and said, "You two sleep first. I'll go out for a while." He put on his clothes and prepared to go out to the courtyard to get some fresh air. When he walked out, he saw a figure sitting on the roof of the front hall. From Li Mu's angle, a full moon rose behind her. She sat there quietly like a fairy in the moon. She was beautiful but also seemed especially lonely. The night was long. He wasn't the only one who didn't have the heart to sleep. Li Mu thought for a moment and flew up. Standing on the roof of Changle Palace, Li Mu realized that Changle Palace seemed to be at the highest point of the Imperial Palace. Standing here and looking down, he could see the entire Imperial Palace. He walked to the Empress's side and said softly, "Your Majesty, are you still not sleeping?" Zhou looked ahead and said indifferently, "You're not sleeping either, are you?" Li Mu said, "I'll go to sleep now." "Sit down." Zhou spoke again in a tone that brooked no refusal. "Talk with me for a while." Li Mu sat down beside him and asked, "Is there something on your mind, Your Majesty?" If she wasn't sleeping in the middle of the night, there must be something on her mind. The more meticulous a person was, the easier it was for them to be troubled. Zhou looked at the moon in the sky and asked, "Who do you think I should pass the throne to? The Shao clan or the Zhou clan?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I don't dare to speak rashly." Zhou said, "Say it, there's no one here." As a subject, he shouldn't answer this question. However, after she said that, there was no ruler and subject on the roof of Changle Palace. There was only Zhou and Li Mu. There was something that Li Mu had been holding in his heart for a long time. As a friend, he had the need to tell her what was on his mind. "Then I'll say it, say it." Li Mu turned to look at the Empress and asked very confusedly, "To the Shao clan, Your Majesty is an outsider. To the Zhou clan, Your Majesty is also an outsider. Instead of passing the throne to an outsider, why don't we have one ourselves?" As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the Empress's stunned expression. Only then did Li Mu realize that there was a loophole in his words. When he said "we," it meant that they were on the same side, not that he and the Empress had a child. To prevent the Empress from misunderstanding, Li Mu quickly explained, "Your Majesty, please don't misunderstand. What I mean is, I'll give birth to mine, you give birth to yours." Chapter 394. Late at night, on the roof of the Changle Palace. Zhou looked calmly at Li Mu and asked, "Has it been a long time since I taught you cultivation?" Li Mu knew what she meant by cultivation, and immediately said, "You told me to be straightforward. If you blame me now, I won't say anything in the future." Zhou looked at him and finally looked away. "I am the Empress." Li Mu said, "The Empress also has the right to pursue love." Although she had already been married once, who said that the Empress couldn't marry again? In another world, that woman first married the father, then the son, and had countless men. Compared to her, the Empress was like a pure Xiaobai flower. So what if she had an empress? Li Mu said seriously, Your Majesty is a disgrace to the Shao family. How could they tolerate the throne being taken by a woman with a different surname? If the Shao family takes power in the future, Your Majesty will certainly not leave any good words in the history books. And for the descendants of the Zhou family, Your Majesty is only their elder sister. How could you be closer to Your Majesty's own children? In fact, Li Mu had a little selfish motive here. History was written by the victors. It could be foreseen that whether it was the Zhou family or the Shao family who passed the throne, the empress would probably not leave any good words in the history books revised by future generations. Then, as the only favored official of the empress's era, how would the history books evaluate Li Mu? Bewitching the emperor, treacherous officials in power, and favored officials causing chaos. Some unofficial history books might even smear the relationship between him and the empress. Li Mu didn't intend to give them such a chance. He looked at the empress and continued, Moreover, the Zhou family and the Shao family, for the sake of the throne, formed cliques and pursued selfish interests, regardless of the consequences. It wasn't easy for us to make up for the mistakes of the previous emperor. If Your Majesty passes the throne to them, won't the great Zhou repeat the same mistakes? Zhou Yi was silent for a while, then stood up and said, I'm going to sleep. Li Mu said, Good night, Your Majesty. After Zhou Yi left, Li Mu sat on the roof and watched the moon for a while before returning to his room. Wanwan and Xiaobai were still awake. They were giggling under the covers. Li Mu walked to the bed and asked, Why haven't you slept yet? Xiaobai said, We're waiting for our benefactor to return. After saying that, she and Wanwan moved outwards and inwards respectively, leaving space in the middle for Li Mu. Li Mu waved his hand and said, You guys sleep. I'll sleep on the floor. Xiaobai hugged Li Mu's arm and said, Then let's sleep on the floor too. Wanwan also got up from the bed and said, Young master will sleep on the ground and we will sleep on the bed. If young miss finds out, she will say that we don't know the rules. Li Mu didn't know how the empress slept that night, but he slept very soundly. Wanwan was on his left and Xiaobai was on his right. The bed was soft and fragrant, but when he woke up in the morning, his arms were a little numb. The empress had already asked the kitchen to prepare pastries. Wanwan was shocked by the variety of breakfast. She had never thought that someone could have such a rich breakfast. In the past, she would feel very happy if she could eat 2 buns and an egg in the morning. Before breakfast was finished, she asked Li Mu indirectly where they were going to sleep tonight. After breakfast, Li Mu didn't let them go back. After all, it was just the two of them at home. Chengel Palace was much bigger than the Li Mansion, so they didn't feel bored here. With Shangguan Li and Mr. Mei accompanying them, Li Mu felt that they were too happy to miss home. He went to the secretariat. When he passed by the Zongjing Temple, Zhang Chun came out and asked in surprise, Where did you go last night? Li Mu naturally couldn't tell him that he stayed in Chengel Palace last night, so he said, At home? Zhang Chun said, I went to your house last night but you weren't there. Li Mu said, I went back very late last night. It was almost midnight. Then he asked, Why are you looking for me? Zhang Chun shook his head and said, I wanted to have a drink with you but it's fine now. Zhang Chun also didn't tell Li Mu that he was chased out of the house by his wife last night. He originally wanted to find Li Mu to stay the night, but he didn't see Li Mu come back even when he waited at the entrance of the Li residence until midnight. Obviously he was lying. Li Mu said, If there's nothing else, I'm going back to the secretariat. Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, Let's go. Looking at Li Mu's back as he left, he thought about something in his heart. Yesterday he saw that Lu Hanyin and Li Qing left Chengdu, which was why he chose to stay in the Li Mansion. But on the night his wife left, Li Mu didn't come back. What did he do? Could it be that he met another woman in private? No. As far as he knew, Li Mu couldn't be such a person. At a certain moment, a light suddenly flashed in Zhang Chun's mind. The Zongjing Temple was located behind the secretariat. If Li Mu came from the palace gate, it was impossible for him to pass by here. Unless he came from another direction. Zhang Chun looked in the direction Li Mu came from. If he walked straight from here he would reach Chengel Palace. And Chengel Palace was His Majesty's bedroom. He showed a look of realization on his face and said in shock, So fast. Prince Shou walked over from the direction of the palace gate and said, Old Zhang, why are you here so early today? Come, play a few rounds with me. Zhang Chun followed behind Prince Shou and walked into the Zongjing Temple. He asked casually, Your Highness, wasn't Prince Nanyang beheaded? What happened to his mansion? Prince Shou said, It was temporarily conferred by the imperial court. In the future, It may be awarded to officials who have made great contributions to the imperial court. Why are you asking this? Zhang Chun smiled and said, Nothing, I'm just asking. After returning to the secretariat, Li Mu didn't delay. He seized the time to draft the new rules of the Department of Consecration. After finishing his own business in the morning, he still had to show the Empress the memorials in the afternoon. Now she didn't worry about the imperial court at all. She left the small matters to Li Mu, and they discussed the important matters together. If they agreed, they would listen to her. If they disagreed, they would listen to Li Mu. When Li Mu was dealing with the memorials, she was idling on the side. She even wanted Li Mu to write a few more books for her to read. It had to be said that she was already acting like a self-indulgent ruler. And Li Mu himself was about to become a favored official of a dictatorship. After the preliminary draft of the new rules of the Department of Consecration was finished, a familiar figure stepped into Li Mu's duty room. Mr. May looked a little tired. Li Mu poured a cup of tea for him and asked, What's wrong? Didn't sleep well last night? Mr. May sat in Li Mu's seat. He leaned against the chair and rubbed the space between his eyebrows. He said, Last night I dealt with the internal guards until very late. Li Mu stood across from him and said, If it's not too important, just leave it to your subordinates. Look at Her Majesty. She should be busier than you, but look at her. She's very idle every day. If she's not admiring flowers, she's reading books. How long has it been since she touched the memorials? Mr. May glanced at him and asked. Her Majesty has only let you read the memorials for a few days and you're already unwilling. Li Mu said, It's not that I don't want to. Anyway, if I do more, Her Majesty will do less. As long as she's happy, it's fine. She doesn't have to worry about the memorials and give her inner demons an opportunity to take advantage of her. I suspect that her inner demons came from reading the memorials every day. Mr. May didn't continue this topic. He asked, Did you say something again that made Her Majesty unhappy? Li Mu said frankly, I just said a few words of truth. Although the Empress's status was high in the entire imperial court, there were only 3 people who could be considered her own. Shengguan Li, Mr. May and Li Mu. The 2 of them listened to everything the Empress said. These truths that would make the Empress uncomfortable could only be said by Li Mu. Mr. May asked, What did you say? Li Mu honestly told him the conversation last night. Mr. May glanced at him and asked, Do you think that because Her Majesty favors you so much, you can say anything? Li Mu said, I'm also thinking for her sake. Mr. May thought for a moment and said, You're thinking too simply. Her Majesty is the former crown princess, and also the former empress. If she really did that, what would the world think? All the court officials and the 4 major academies would stop her. Li Mu originally wanted to tell Mr. May that as long as she had absolute power, she could do anything. It was unlikely that she would have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, because the mainstream view didn't approve of one woman having many husbands, and it would easily lead to criticism. However, it made sense to only have one empress. As long as the empress's power could suppress all resistance, the Great Zhou would have its first male empress. However, after thinking about it carefully, Li Mu felt a little uncomfortable. After all, who didn't want to be the sole empress's favorite? If he had an empress, the empress might not treat him as well as she did now. It wasn't a possibility, it was a certainty. When Lu Hanyin and Li Qing weren't around, he could stay in Chang'an Palace all day. When they came back, he could only stay in Chang'an Palace for 4 hours a day. It was the same principle. Li Mu had to admit that he was also a selfish person. He didn't want to share the empress's favor with others, even if that person was the empress. Therefore he didn't say anything more. Instead, he looked at Mr. May and said, Don't worry about Her Majesty. You should worry about yourself. If you don't find one now, it will be too late. Do you want me to introduce you to? Mr. May looked at Li Mu without any emotion. Li Mu felt his hair stand on end under her gaze. Then he realized something and immediately said, Don't you dare have any ideas about me. I have a family and you're almost old enough to be my mother. We're not suitable. In a panic, Li Mu said what was on his mind. Fortunately, Mr. May was magnanimous and didn't get angry. He left after drinking a cup of tea. Wanwan and Xiao Bai were both in Chang'an Palace. Li Mu's lunch was also there. In the afternoon, he stayed in Chang'an Palace to help the Empress deal with the memorials. He didn't return to the secretariat. He walked out of the secretariat and saw Mr. May standing not far ahead. She looked at Li Mu with an extremely unfriendly gaze, holding a stick in her hand. Chapter 395. You're saying I'm old. You're old enough to be your mother. Let me hear you call me mother? In Changle Palace, Li Mu was being chased up and down by Mr. Mei with a stick. He thought that after escaping to Changle Palace, Mr. Mei would restrain himself in front of the Empress. He didn't expect that the Empress would stand by and even eat melon seeds. Therefore, Changle Palace became even more lively. Mr. Mei was chasing Li Mu, Wan Wan was chasing behind, and Xiao Bai was chasing her. She couldn't catch up with Li Mu, and Xiao Bai and Wan Wan couldn't catch up with her either. Changle Palace was in chaos, and the Empress stood by and ate melon seeds. Later, Shangwanli also joined in. Of course, she was helping Mr. Mei. Mr. Mei's reaction arc was also very long. He didn't explode in the Secretariat, but now he was extremely angry. Although Li Mu could continue hiding, it was not a good idea to continue hiding like this. Hence, he deliberately went easy on Lord Mei and let him hit his butt twice so that Lord Mei would calm down and stop. Then this matter would be considered over. As a friend, Li Mu had already done his duty. In the afternoon, he showed some of his suggestions for the reform of the Department of Offerings to the Empress. The two of them exchanged some ideas and this matter was finalized. The Department of Offerings wasn't considered an official office of the Imperial Court, and related matters didn't need to travel 3 provinces. After confirming the details with the Empress, Li Mu walked out of Changle Palace and went to the Department of Offerings. When he passed by Zongjing Temple, he happened to see Zhang Chun walking out. Zhang Chun asked, "Lord Li, where are you going?" Li Mu said, "I'm going to the Department of Offerings." Zhang Chun smiled and said, "I'm also going out of the palace. Let's go together." The two of them walked out of the palace and casually chatted for a while. Zhang Chun suddenly said with emotion, "It's all thanks to you. Otherwise, I don't know when I would be able to live in a big house with 4 entrances. It's good to have a big house. It's big and comfortable to live in." Li Mu understood the meaning behind his words. Old Zhang's greatest wish was to own a 5-section house in the fairies' capital. This was also the common dream of many middle-aged men of his age. Owning a 5-section mansion in Chengdu was as difficult as owning a villa in Beijing's Third Ring Road when housing prices were soaring in the future. This was something that most officials in Chengdu would never be able to achieve in their lifetime. Currently, he had already fulfilled 4/5 of his wish. Li Mu could understand Zhang Chun's stubbornness. He thought for a moment and said, "You've changed your residence so many times in the past year. If you change it again so soon, it'll be easy for people to criticize you. Wait for another half a year. I'll apply to His Majesty to change your residence to one of the 5. In the past 6 months, old Zhang had suffered a lot because of Li Mu. Not only did those people treat him as his subordinate, but they also called old Zhang his dog. This made Li Mu feel a little guilty. These words must have been very painful for old Zhang to hear. It was his duty to fight for Zhang Chun to fulfill his dream. Wasn't it just a 5-section house? As long as he whispered something to the Empress, it wouldn't be a problem at all. Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "There's no need for that. I'm already very satisfied with the residence I'm living in now. By the way, what do you think the Imperial Court will do with the Duke of Nanyang's residence now that he's dead?" Li Mu looked at Zhang Chun in shock. The Duke of Nanyang's residence was 10 entrances. It was one of the largest private residences in the fairies' capital. There were some things that one was born with. If one didn't have them at birth, it was unlikely that they would have them for the rest of their lives. A 10-section residence was one of them. Those who were qualified to live in such residences were members of the royal family with real power. A 5-section residence was almost the limit of what an official could get. Any higher would depend on actual contributions. Expanding the territory, suppressing the demon nation, fixing the ghost region, and destroying the demon sect. If one could do any of these things, it wouldn't be excessive to be conferred the title of Duke, let alone a 10-section residence. However, none of these were things that old Zhang could do. Li Mu looked at him helplessly and sighed, "Old Zhang, it's fine as long as a residence is big enough to live in. That's enough. Why do you want such a big residence? It's too big even for a pig, let alone a family of 3. Zhang Chun also sighed and said, "Who would complain about having too many residences? I don't want you to help me fight for it now. It won't be too late to help me achieve it when you're successful in the future." Li Mu nodded and said, "I'll try my best." After all, he wasn't the Empress and the Duke of Nanyang's residence wasn't his. Even if Li Mu was successful in the future, it was unlikely that he would help him fight for it, unless he became the Emperor or Empress himself. Li Mu treated this as Zhang Chun's unrealistic fantasy. He threw it to the back of his mind and came to the consecration department. Although the current consecration department didn't have as many people as before, it was more cohesive. There wouldn't be a situation where the consecrators weren't under the jurisdiction of the imperial court like before. In terms of high-end combat strength, there was also an additional peak 6th realm expert. Including the 2 remaining high consecrators, the current strength of the Great Zhou's consecration department was enough to wipe out most of the branch sects of the 10 demon sects. Li Mu came this time to inform everyone about the changes to the consecration department. Among them, the biggest change was their salary. The Great Zhou court was much more generous to the foreign consecrators than its own officials. Not to mention that every consecrator was allocated a residence of at least 2 courtyards. Their salary was also 10 times or even dozens of times that of ordinary officials. The resources that the high consecrators received from the imperial court every year were astronomical figures. From today onwards, the salaries of all consecrators would be lowered. They would be divided into several grades according to their cultivation, and each grade would have a basic salary. In addition to the basic salary, they would receive a commission based on the number of missions they went out on and the degree of completion of the missions. How many resources they would receive in the end would depend on their own abilities. If they were more diligent, the resources they would receive every year would far exceed what they received before. This was to change the previous situation where many consecrators in the consecration department squandered resources. They lived in residences bestowed by the imperial court, and only came to the consecration department for a few days a year. They mingled in the various major entertainment venues of the divine capital. The annual salary from the imperial court, as well as the money they earned through their own abilities, could sustain their drunken and extravagant lives. Cultivation was dry and difficult. A portion of cultivators, because they could not bear this kind of loneliness, or because they did not have any hope of breaking through, would choose to indulge in pleasure. Li Mu could not control their pleasure, but he did not allow them to use the resources of the national treasury for pleasure. The things of the national treasury were the Empress's things. Although not all of the Empress's things belonged to Li Mu, sooner or later, some of them would belong to him. In this way, these consecrators were basically Li Mu's own resources. The salary reduction of the consecration department this time was only relative. In reality, their salary was still much higher than that of ordinary officials. The nature of the 2 jobs was different. The officials sat in the yamen, slacking and chatting, and a day would pass. Many times the consecrators risked their lives so they should receive more. Li Mu looked at the people of the consecration department and said, "The imperial court invests a great deal of resources here every year, and the consecration department does not support idle people. Which consecrator has an objection to what I said earlier?" The crowd was noisy for a moment, then finally quieted down. Not a single person stood out. Although the reform this time had indeed reduced the treatment of the consecrators, as long as they were diligent and did not cheat, they would receive more than before. This was equivalent to distributing the resources of those lazy people to those diligent people. The majority of people agreed with this point from the bottom of their hearts. In the past, when they saw those people because they had made friends with the old party, dawdled in the consecration department, and were able to receive the same amount of cultivation resources as them, or even more than them, they felt somewhat indignant. From now on, this kind of situation would no longer exist. Li Mu swept his gaze over the crowd and asked, "Does no one have any objections?" The consecrators thought to themselves, those who had objections to him had already been driven out of the consecration department. Of those who remained here, who would have any objections, who would dare to have any objections? After a long time, seeing that no one spoke, Li Mu nodded and said, "Since no one has any objections, then this matter is decided. In the future, if you have any questions, you can communicate with the 2 great consecrators at any time." In the consecration department, the sloppy Taoist priest was only a mascot, and did not care about the specific affairs of the consecration department. The ones in charge of the consecration department were still the 2 great consecrators from before. One of them was called Qin Xian, and the other was called Qin Mo. They were a pair of twin brothers and were not from the Great Zhou. They had been invited by the imperial court to become consecrators for many years when they traveled to the Great Zhou. Although these 2 were not as strong as the sloppy Taoist priest, they were still rare 6th realm experts. For the sake of those 2 heavenly secret talismans, Li Mu believed that they would change their usual style. After purging the old party's influence here and reforming the old system, the matter of the consecration department came to an end. What followed would gradually return to the right track, and Li Mu did not need to worry about it. After leaving the consecration department, he returned to Chang'an Palace. He had come to take Wanwan and Xiaobai back. For a foreign subject to bring 2 little girls to live in the Empress's chambers, It was ultimately improper. This time Xiaobai did not express anything, but Wanwan was somewhat reluctant to part with him. The imperial kitchen had gathered all the delicacies of the 36 counties of the Great Zhou, and she had not even tasted 1% or 1,000th of them. To her, leaving here was no different from losing the entire world. In the Chang'e Palace, Zhou Qiong sat on the dragon throne and looked down at Li Mu. He said, "Before your wife comes back, you can live in the palace." Li Mu hesitated. "Your Majesty, this isn't very good, is it?" "What's not good about it?" Zhou Yi said indifferently. "This place is not far from the Secretariat, and it saves you the time of going to and from the Yamen every day. I will let the Imperial Kitchen arrange 3 meals a day, and it will also save you the time of cooking. With this time saved, how many reports can you handle and how many things can you do?" Li Mu stared at her in a daze. Zhou Yi indeed did not have the surname Bai. She was completely the Zhou Bapi of the Great Zhou. Even Zhou Bapi would cry if she heard of her exploitation of Li Mu. At this moment, Zhou Yi continued, "Wanwan and Xiaobai should also stay here. When I have time, I can also guide them in their cultivation. A few months' time is enough for Xiaobai to advance to the 5-tailed realm, and Wanwan will also advance to the 4th realm very soon. At that time, her spirit eyes will be even more powerful." Looking at Wanwan and Xiaobai's expectant gazes, Li Mu could not bear to say no in the end. He did not dare to. Because although the Empress looked at him calmly, there was also an unquestionable threat in her calmness. Of course, the reason why Li Mu did not refuse was that he also saw the anticipation in the depths of the Empress's eyes. Although the Empress had everything, she had also lost everything. What she had was power and strength. What she had lost was family, friendship, and all the beautiful emotions in the world. No one would have such feelings for the Empress, except for the naive Xiaobai and Wanwan. Xiaobai was naive and innocent because she had not seen much of the world. And to Wanwan, if she was not given good food, the Empress would be the Empress. If she was allowed to eat as much as she wanted in the Imperial Kitchen, she would be the dearest big sister Zhou. The Empress was too lonely. She needed companionship more than anyone else. The existence of Wanwan and Xiaobai brought endless liveliness to this dead Chang'e Palace. This liveliness was exactly what the Empress needed. Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu and asked, "Do you have any objections to what I said?" Li Mu bowed and said, "This subject obeys." Chapter 396. Li Mu really didn't dare to have any objections to what the Empress had said. If he rejected her now, after tonight, he would have to beg the Empress to move into Chang'e Palace the next morning. She looked quite magnanimous, but in reality she was more petty than anyone else. If she was slightly dissatisfied, Li Mu would just have to wait to meet her in her dreams at night. Besides, she also promised to help Xiaobai and Wanwan evolve. This was also something Li Mu couldn't reject. With Wanwan and Xiaobai's current cultivation, there was already very little that Li Mu could help them with. However, following the Empress would undoubtedly bring them great benefits. He didn't dare to say that he could help them reach Realm 6, but it wouldn't be a problem to help them reach Realm 5 or Realm 4. Under Mr. May's lead, Wanwan and Xiaobai went to the Imperial Kitchen to clean out. After all, she was his silly girl. She was so unruly. Li Mu felt a little embarrassed. He explained, when she was young, Wanwan's hometown was in a famine. When her parents brought her to escape, they left her on the road to save food for her younger brother. She almost starved to death. Later, she was lucky enough to survive, but she ended up with the problem of not being able to eat enough. Wanwan's illness was psychological, not physical. In the past, Li Mu was worried that her body would have problems eating, but now he didn't have to worry. As long as she liked, she could eat as much as she wanted. Zhou Yi said somewhat angrily, "Should she be abandoned just because she's a girl?" Li Mu couldn't answer her. Many people in Great Zhou still had the goal of continuing the family line as their life goal. The idea of favoring boys over girls was the mainstream in the hearts of the people. Li Mu could say, "Not everyone likes sons. I prefer daughters. One of the most romantic things for a man is to have a cute daughter, buy her the most beautiful clothes, make her the most fun toys and spoil her like a little princess." Zhou Yi looked at him and asked, "You want your daughter to become a princess?" Li Mu was stunned for a moment before he explained, "It's just a metaphor. If his daughter was a princess, the Empress would have to give him the position of emperor." Zhou Yi thought about it and said, "Since you don't like sons so much, give your first son to me." Li Mu looked at her in a daze, his face full of confusion. "Why should I pass the throne to an outsider? The Xiao family is not united with me and I am no longer a member of the Zhou Yi. Your first son was sent to my side when he was born and he took my surname. I taught him to cultivate from a young age and you taught him how to govern the country. I believe that when he grows up he will definitely be a qualified emperor. Li Mu had thought that the empress had already exploited him enough. He had not thought that she could go even further. Not only did she have designs on him, but she also had plans for his unborn son's life. Li Mu flatly refused. That won't do. Even if I agree my wife won't. Zhou Yi said, that might not be the case. Li Mu shook his head and said, even if they agree I won't. Zhou Yi asked, I want to raise your son as the future emperor. Why won't you agree? Li Mu had no reason to agree. He was the future headmaster of the Fulu school. His son could be considered the second generation of an immortal. His status was not lower than that of the Great Zhou's crown prince. Moreover, in the history of the Great Zhou none of the emperors had lived long. He knew how tiring it was to review memorials. How could he let his own son suffer like this? He did not answer directly. Instead, he looked at the empress and said, if your majesty wants a son, why go through so much trouble? The empress's eyes narrowed slightly. She looked at him and asked, what did you say? Li Mu looked back at Shangguan Li who was standing at the door and said, Commander Shangguan is still young. She is also loyal to your majesty. She is not an outsider. If your majesty doesn't want to pass on the Shao and Zhou families, you can let Commander Shangguan bear a son. Shangguan Li, who was eating melons, glared at Li Mu fiercely. She clasped her hands and said, Your Majesty, I don't like men. No wonder Li Mu always looked at her with anger. She didn't like men so he couldn't force her. Li Mu said, and Mr. Mei? Mr. Mei walked in from outside and asked, What's wrong with me? Li Mu said, I'm praising you for being loyal to your majesty. I'm a little hungry. I'll go to the kitchen to find something to eat. You guys talk. After saying this he quickly walked out of the Changle Palace. Li Mu deeply experienced the Empress's laziness again. Her laziness in the past was just to let Li Mu help her approve the memorials. Now she was so lazy that she didn't even want to have a child herself. Unfortunately, Li Mu couldn't do this for her. Besides, he and Lu Hanyan didn't plan to have a child so early. The Empress's wishful thinking couldn't be realized so easily. In order to prevent the Empress from having any ideas about him, he couldn't let her have a child or help her have a child. In the following days, Li Mu didn't mention this matter again. Living in the imperial palace was far more boring than Li Mu imagined. In order not to be seen by the officials of the Shangya, he had to get up early every day and travel between the Changle Palace and the Secretariat. Occasionally he would go to the kitchen to cook a bowl of noodles and a cup of soup for the Empress. After a long time, Li Mu wasn't the only one who couldn't stand it. Even Wanwan and Xiao Bai weren't as lively as they were at the beginning. Although the imperial palace was good and to Wanwan it was heaven. However, if she stayed here every day heaven would become a prison. In the Changle Palace, Li Mu finished approving the memorials and saw the two girls leaning on the table listlessly with one hand supporting their cheeks. He thought for a moment and said, Why don't we go outside the palace to play tomorrow? Okay. Wanwan and Xiao Bai's eyes lit up, and they immediately got up from the table. These days they had been bored to death. It just so happened that there was no morning court tomorrow, and it was also a rest day. Li Mu turned to look at the Empress, who was lying lazily on the chair reading a book, and asked, Your Majesty, do you want to go together? Zhou Yi's attention had been on Li Mu since just now. Hearing this she said unhurriedly, You arrange it. It was just an ordinary trip and there was nothing to arrange. As long as they could leave this cage-like imperial palace, even if it was just to find a place to enjoy the scenery, they would be in a much better mood. They left the imperial palace together the next day. Outside the divine capital, Li Mu chose a mountain with a nice view. He used magic to clear an empty space and spread out a clean blanket. Then he placed some pastries and preserved fruits that he had prepared from the imperial kitchen on top of it. Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li set up a stove not far away, and they would barbecue meat later. After Wanwan and Xiao Bai left the imperial palace, they went wild, chasing rabbits and catching pheasants. Li Mu lay on the stall with his hands behind his head. Everywhere he looked there was only the blue sky. At this moment, the gloominess and depression in his heart were swept away. As expected, a place like the imperial palace couldn't be stayed for too long. Looking at the square sky all the time was not good for one's health. Zhou Yi sat on the blanket and looked at the barren hills around her. With a flick of her finger, a crystal light was flicked into the soil. As a result, green buds began to appear on the barren land around them. Soon grass began to grow and colorful wildflowers bloomed. The air soon emitted a refreshing fragrance. Zhou lay beside Li Mu and looked up at the sky with him. After a while she said softly, "It's almost the new year." If she didn't remind him, Li Mu wouldn't have realized that it was really the new year. Li Mu was forced to stay in Chang'e Palace by the Empress and did the work she was supposed to do day and night. Apart from Chang'e Palace and the Secretariat, she didn't go out and didn't take a step out. She had already lost track of time. He didn't expect that he couldn't spend the first New Year with Lu Hanyan and Li Qing. Cultivators didn't pay much attention to the New Year. The old men of Mount Baiyun spent most of their time in seclusion. They could be said to have truly transcended the secular world. However, Li Mu couldn't. He hoped that on New Year's Eve, his family could gather together and have a New Year's Eve dinner. The Empress reminded him. Li Mu took out the sound transmission magic treasure that Xian Jizi gave him. After activating it, he said, "Senior brother, help me find Qingqing." Zhou glanced at Li Mu and closed her eyes. Her chest heaved slightly. As Li Mu's voice fell, Lu Hanyan's voice came from the magic treasure. "Qingqing, Qingqing, do you only have Qingqing in your heart? She's in seclusion and doesn't have time to talk to you," Li Mu said awkwardly. "Didn't you follow senior sister to visit other sects? Why are you still at Mount Baiyun?" Lu Hanyan said, "We haven't left yet. Why are you looking for Qingqing?" Li Mu said without hesitation, "I miss you guys." Lu Hanyan said sourly, "You only have Qingqing in your heart." Li Mu took a while to coax her. Then he asked, "It's New Year's Eve soon. Are you guys going back to Shindu for New Year's?" Lu Hanyan said, "She's in seclusion. I'm going to Xuanzong with Master soon. I can't go back." Li Mu was a little disappointed. He said, "All right then." After putting away the sound transmission magic treasure, Li Mu looked at the Empress. Seeing her arms crossed, he asked in surprise, "Your Majesty, what's wrong?" Zhou said lightly, "Nothing, I just feel a little cold." Although the weather wasn't too warm, she wouldn't feel cold even if it was 100 degrees colder. Li Mu knew that she was probably choked by their public display of affection. He didn't dare to point it out. He said, "They're not coming back this year. Why don't we make do at Chang'e Palace for New Year's Eve?" Zhou glanced at him and said, "Why do you have to make do? If they can't come back, you can go to Mount Baiyun to find them." What she said made sense. Li Mu nodded and said, "Then I'll take a leave first. After the 15th, I'll return to Shindu." Zhou took a deep breath and asked, "You're not going to attend the court assembly on the first day of the new year, right? Can I not attend? What do you think?" Li Mu thought about it and decided not to. The court assembly only happened once a year. It wasn't good to miss it. Moreover, Li Qing would be in seclusion and Lu Hanyan wouldn't be in Beijing. If he went to Mount Baiyun, would he have to eat with those old men? He might as well stay in Chang'e Palace and make do with the Empress. Thinking of this, he shook his head and said, "Then I won't invite you." Zhou said, "You can invite me. I approve your leave," Li Mu said firmly. "I won't invite you." Zhou looked at him and said, "I gave you a chance but you didn't want it. Don't say that I'm harsh on you in the future." Li Mu went against his conscience and said with difficulty, "Your Majesty, you're not harsh on me at all." Li Mu sighed a few times in his heart. Then, he lay down obediently and enjoyed this rare leisure time while enjoying the mountain breeze. Halfway up the mountain near the peak, 3 figures walked slowly on the mountain path. Zhang Chun sighed and said, "Madam, listen to me. I went to the brothel last time to catch someone, not to do anything else. We've been married for so many years. Don't we trust each other at all?" Madame Zhang said, "I believe you. But where did you go the night I kicked you out?" Zhang Chun said, "I found an inn to sleep in." Madame Zhang asked, "Didn't you go to the Li residence?" "His wife isn't in Fairy's capital. There's no one at home. Why didn't you stay at his place?" Zhang Chun said, "He's not at home." Madame Zhang said in surprise, "His wife just left and he's not going home at night? That can't be. Li Mu isn't that kind of person." Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about that." Madame Zhang said unhappily, "What do you mean don't worry about that? If he's really that kind of person you should stay away from him. Don't be led astray by him." Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "Don't interrupt if you don't understand. Enjoy the scenery. It's not easy to get a day off. The scenery here is not bad." At this time the family of 3 had reached the peak. Zhang Yi looked up at the empty space in the distance and said, "There's someone there." Zhang Chun looked over and happened to meet the eyes of a woman. Madame Zhang was shocked and said, "Isn't that Li Mu? Who's the woman beside him?" They're alone in broad daylight. What are they doing in the wilderness? I didn't expect him to really be that kind of. Before Madame Zhang could finish her words, Zhang Chun covered her mouth. After that, he held Madame Zhang in one hand and his daughter in the other and flew down the mountain on a cloud. In the blink of an eye they disappeared without a trace. Li Mu looked in the direction the Empress was looking and asked, "Your Majesty, what's wrong?" The Empress retracted her gaze and said, "Nothing. A few deer ran past just now." Speaking of deer, Li Mu remembered that he brought half a deer leg from the imperial kitchen today. He put it in the space of the flask heaven and marinated it with honey. He stood up and said, "Your Majesty, rest for a while. I'll go prepare the barbecue." He walked to a place not far away and took out the deer leg and some barbecue that he had prepared. He put them on the grill and put charcoal under it. Barbecue with charcoal was much better than barbecue with magic power. At the same time, on the main peak of Mount Baiyun, Li Qing looked at Lu Hanyan beside her and said helplessly, "Why don't you tell him?" Lu Hanyan snorted and said, "Who knows what he's been doing after we left the divine capital? This time we'll sneak back and catch him by surprise. If he's obedient, it'll be a surprise. If he's not obedient, humph." She looked at Li Qing and said, "I know you care about him, but you can't tell him in advance. We have to stand on the same side. Otherwise, if there really is a fifth or sixth person in the future, it'll be too late for you to cry." Li Qing nodded and said, "I'll listen to you." Outside the divine capital, on the top of a barren mountain with beautiful scenery, Zhou Yi took a small piece of deer meat that Li Mu cut with a knife and said, "Left Assistant Minister Zhang Chun of the Ministry of Personnel. He's already a fourth-rank official. Go back and check if there are any empty fifth-rank residences in the imperial court. Give them to him." Li Mu had planned to find an opportunity to help old Zhang next year. Since the Empress mentioned it, he could arrange it for him now. He nodded and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." North Court. When Li Mu handed the title deed of a certain fifth-rank residence to Zhang Chun, he was not as happy as Li Mu imagined, but he still patted him on the shoulder and said, "Thank you, brother." Li Mu shook his head and said, "No need to thank me. This time the Empress rewarded you on her own initiative." Zhang Chun said, "It's all the same, all the same." Li Mu looked behind Zhang Chun and saw Madame Zhang giving him a strange look. Then she turned and walked into the room. Li Mu looked away and asked in confusion, "What's wrong with Madame Zhang? Did I offend her in any way?" Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "Ignore her. It's just a woman's opinion." He took the title deed, patted his chest and said, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. I'll say what I should say and I won't say anything that I shouldn't say." Li Mu looked at him in confusion and asked, "What are you talking about?" Zhang Chun looked at Li Mu and was stunned for a moment. Then he also looked confused and said, "Yes, what am I talking about? I don't know anything. I didn't see anything." Ha! Li Mu felt that old Zhang was strange today, but he couldn't tell what. He walked through the streets and there were still countless people greeting him warmly. "Lord Li, long time no see. Did you leave the divine capital a while ago?" "Yes, I haven't seen Lord Li for at least half a month." "Did Lord Li go out on business?" Li Mu smiled at the people and nodded, "Yes, I went out for more than half a month. Since the last picnic, Li Mu would take Wanwan and Xiaobai out of the palace every few days." Under his invitation, the Empress reluctantly agreed. After changing her appearance, she went shopping with them, ate at the roadside stalls, and bought some cheap jewelry that cost a few coins. When she agreed, she was more reluctant than anyone else, but when it came to shopping, she was more excited than anyone else. The things she bought alone were more than Wanwan and Xiaobai combined. Although most of them were useless, she still enjoyed it and never got tired of it. A few days before the new year, the divine capital was bustling and joyous. On New Year's Eve, Li Mu opened the door and a cold breeze hit him in the face. He looked up at the sky. The sky was gray and snowflakes were floating in the air. Although the divine capital wasn't in the south, it rarely snowed in the winter. The snowflakes fell on the ground and quickly melted. "It's snowing." Wanwan and Xiaobai ran out of the room barefooted. They stood in the courtyard and opened their arms to embrace the snowflakes. Li Mu slapped their butts and said, "Go back and put on your clothes and shoes before coming out." Wanwan and Xiaobai loved snow. They wanted to build a few snowmen to play with. Unfortunately, the snow in the divine capital wasn't heavy. It melted as soon as it touched the ground. Li Mu tried to use his magic. Although the snowflakes in front of the palace were heavier, it was still far from enough. The Empress walked out of the Changle Palace. She looked at Wanwan and Xiaobai, who were waving at the sky in anticipation. Her hands formed a few seals, and a white light flew out from her hand and went straight to the clouds. The snowflakes suddenly became heavier and fell down. Soon, a layer of snow accumulated on the ground. Outside the palace, the people of the divine capital also walked out of their houses. They looked at the snowflakes in the sky with satisfaction. It's been a long time since the divine capital snowed so heavily. Next year will be a good year. Ever since Her Majesty ascended the throne, the lives of the people have been getting better and better. In front of the Changel Palace, Xiaobai and Wanwan had already built a few snowmen. Although they were called snowmen, they were more like snow sculptures. The snowmen they built didn't have round heads and big bodies. Instead, they were as tall as a person and looked very lifelike. Xiaobai was carrying a little fox in her arms. Wanwan was carrying 2 buns on her head. The taller figure beside her was Li Mu. Beside Li Mu was the Empress, who was wearing an imperial robe and an imperial crown. The 4 snowmen stood in front of the palace like pieces of art. Not only did they have the same figure and appearance as the others, but even their auras were similar. Wanwan looked at her masterpiece with satisfaction. Then she scratched her head and said, "I think I forgot something." Soon she remembered. She slapped her head and said, "I forgot about Miss and Sister Qing." Soon Lu Hanyin and Li Qing's snow sculptures also appeared in the square. Wanwan nodded in satisfaction and said, "This is what a family should be." Li Mu thought to himself, if Lu Hanyin didn't come back soon, her sweet little jacket would be taken away by the Empress. He walked to Wanwan and Xiaobai and asked, "Tonight, are we going home or staying here?" Wanwan said without hesitation, "Miss and Sister Qing aren't at home. Let's celebrate the New Year here with Sister Zhou. There must be a lot of dishes for the New Year's Eve dinner in the palace." Zhou said, "There are more than 100 delicious dishes for the New Year's Eve dinner in the palace." Wanwan tugged at Li Mu's sleeve and whispered, "Young master." Li Mu rubbed her head and said, "Then let's stay here." On New Year's Eve, the Empress dismissed all the guards on duty. Even Mr. Mei and Shangguan Li were driven home by her. There were only 4 people left in Changel Palace. In addition to the New Year's Eve dinner prepared by the imperial kitchen, the 4 of them also made dumplings together. From the skin to the filling of the dumplings, they prepared everything bit by bit. In Changel Palace, the dishes were all served. The 4 of them stood in front of the table and raised their wine glasses at the same time. At the same time. North Court. Li Mansion. On New Year's Eve, Lu Hanyin and Li Qing, who had rushed back to Chengdu, stood in the courtyard with confusion on their faces. Lu Hanyin scanned the entire Li Mansion with her mind. She didn't find Li Mu, Wanwan, or Xiaobai. She frowned slightly and asked in confusion, "Where are they?" On New Year's Eve they wanted to give Li Mu a surprise. But they were the ones who were surprised. On New Year's Eve, when families reunited, where did Li Mu, Wanwan, and Xiaobai go? Lu Hanyin took out a sound-transmitting magic treasure. After activating it, she said in a bad mood, "Where are you?" In Changel Palace, Li Mu heard the voice from the sound-transmitting magic treasure in his hand and said in surprise, You're at home." Chapter 397. Zhou put down her wine cup and asked Li Mu calmly, "Is your wife back?" Li Mu nodded and said, "They're at home now." Zhou said calmly, "Then let's go back." As soon as she said this, the scenery before Li Mu, Xiaobai, and Wanwan changed. When they appeared again, they were already in the courtyard of the Li residence. Lu Hanyin looked at the 3 people who suddenly appeared and asked, "What's the matter with you guys?" Li Mu said awkwardly, We were in the palace just now." Lu Hanyin frowned and asked, "What were you doing in the palace on New Year's Eve?" Li Mu explained, "Didn't you say that you guys weren't coming back? Only Wanwan, Xiaobai, and I were left at home? Only Her Majesty was in the palace. We thought that we could have dinner together tonight and have each other's company." Lu Hanyin looked at Wanwan and Xiaobai and asked, "Is that so?" Xiaobai and Wanwan nodded repeatedly. Lu Hanyin walked to the stone table in the courtyard and reached out her finger to gently wipe it. Looking at the dust on her hand, she asked Li Mu, "You guys have been eating this meal for at least half a month, right?" Li Mu said, "Let me explain first. If the imperial court was a company and the empress was the boss, Li Mu would be the employee that the boss valued the most. As a boss who cared about her employees, she understood that Li Mu had to travel a long way to and from work, so she let him stay near the company in her own villa. Wasn't this normal? On New Year's Eve, his wife was at home. The boss was touched that he had worked overtime day and night, so it wasn't too much to treat him to a New Year's Eve dinner, right?" Lu Hanyin looked at Li Mu and asked, "So, for the past half a month, the 3 of you have been living in the palace?" Li Mu nodded. Lu Hanyin didn't make trouble for Li Mu, but Wanwan was called to her room. Li Mu didn't dare to follow her. He glanced at Li Qing and Li Qing gave him a helpless look. Obviously she was now on the same side as Lu Hanyin. Inside the room, Lu Hanyin tapped Wanwan's forehead and said, "What did I tell you before I left? I told you to keep an eye on him and make sure he doesn't come back at night. But you guys are good, you just don't come back with him?" Wanwan lowered her head and looked at her feet. She sobbed a few times and tears dripped down her face. This made Lu Hanyin at a loss. She said in a panic, "Why are you crying?" "I haven't said anything yet." Wanwan wiped her tears and said in a muffled voice, "There were so many dishes. I haven't eaten a single bite yet." Lu Hanyin didn't hear what she said clearly. Seeing that she was crying sadly, she could only hug her and comfort her. Okay, I don't blame you. Don't cry." Fortunately, Li Mu didn't sleep in the palace alone. He had Wanwan and Xiao Bai to accompany him. He didn't do anything to let her down. At most, there was a little more dust in the house. But to clean it up was just a small spell. Now Li Mu was facing a very serious problem. He made the decision to have New Year's Eve dinner at Chang'e Palace after learning that Lu Hanyin and Li Qing wouldn't come back tonight. So he didn't buy vegetables in advance. After all, if they were in the palace he wouldn't have to worry about these things at all. So what were they eating now? It was New Year's Eve. Every family was eating reunion dinner in the middle of the night. Even if they went out to buy vegetables it would be too late. It was a pity that they hadn't even touched a single bite of the sumptuous meal on the table in Chang'e Palace. Little White was slightly better off, but Wanwan was on the verge of tears. When the Empress had moved her home, her chopsticks were still in her hand. There was only one way to have a normal New Year's Eve. Chang'e Palace. Zhou Yi sat on the roof of Chang'e Palace. She didn't touch the New Year's Eve dinner that the imperial kitchen had prepared with great care. The snow had stopped, but after Li Mu and the others left Chang'e Palace, it started to fall again. Moreover, it seemed to be falling more and more heavily. Zhou Yi allowed the snow to fall on her body. She silently looked at the lights of Shindu on New Year's Eve. It was the busiest night in Shindu, but Chang'e Palace was as cold and cheerless as usual. This was the liveliness of the common people. It had nothing to do with her. At a certain moment she felt the spirit snail in the flask space vibrate. Zhou Yi stretched out her hand. The spirit snail floated in her palm. She looked at it for a while and put it away, ignoring it. A moment later she took it out again and asked, "Why are you looking for me again?" Wanwan's aggrieved voice came from the spirit snail. "Sister Zhou, there's so much food. Can you finish it all by yourself?" Although Lu Hanyin often complained that the Empress was too harsh on Li Mu, when she really saw the Empress she kept her head down. She didn't even dare to look at her. She didn't have the arrogance she had in front of Li Mu. In the hearts of the women of the Great Zhou, the Empress was like a god. It wasn't just the women of the Great Zhou. In the countries of Zhou province, no matter if they were human, ghost, or demon, as long as they were female, they all admired the Empress. She was less than 30 years old, but she was sitting in the most powerful empire in Zhou province. Her strength had also reached the upper three realms that cultivators dreamed of. She was the first person in history. This number one person included the man. People who weren't familiar with her were easily intimidated by her noble and powerful aura. Lu Hanyin was one of them. In Chang'e Palace she even spoke much less than usual. Fortunately, with Wanwan and Xiao Bai, especially Wanwan, the atmosphere of this special New Year's Eve dinner didn't seem so awkward. The people of the Great Zhou had the custom of enduring the new year. Tonight they generally didn't sleep. They had to tidy up when they got home, so Li Mu and the others simply stayed in Chang'e Palace. In order to make it easier to get through the long night, Li Mu used more than 100 pieces of spirit jade to carve a set of mahjong tiles. Of course, no one present was an ordinary person. For the sake of fairness, no one, including the Empress, was allowed to use magic to cheat. Except for the silly girl Wanwan, which one of the women in Chang'e Palace tonight wasn't intelligent and quickly learned how to play. Thus, Chang'e Palace was filled with the sound of playing mahjong for the entire night. Li Mu, Lu Hanyin, Li Qing, and the Empress sat at a square table. Xiao Bai moved a chair and sat behind Li Mu. Wanwan ran over to take a look and quickly ran back to the table to eat a few mouthfuls. The night passed quickly. On the morning of the first day of the new year, after eating dumplings, Lu Hanyin and Li Qing were about to return. This time their return to Shindu was a last-minute decision. Yuzenzi was still waiting for Lu Hanyin at Mount Baiyun. Li Qing also had to go back to continue her seclusion and strive to break through to the fifth realm as soon as possible. Li Mu asked the Dao Bell to escort them back. When they reached Mount Baiyun, it flew back by itself. On the morning of the first day of the new year, Li Mu and the Empress didn't idle around. Every year on the first day of the new year, there was a court assembly as usual. In addition to the officials of Shindu, the governors of the 36 counties also had to enter the palace on this day to report on their work. In addition, the Ministry of Rites also had to take the lead to hold the first ceremony of the new year. When all the procedures were completed, it was almost night. Next was a long holiday. From the first day of the first month to the 15th day of the new year, except for important government offices like the Ministry of Justice that needed officials to be on duty, most officials could enjoy half a month of holiday. Li Mu originally planned to take advantage of this holiday to return to Mount Baiyun. However, Li Qing was in seclusion, and Lu Hanyin was about to travel with Yuzenzi. After he returned to Mount Baiyun, there was a high possibility that he would be treated as a heartless talisman drawing machine by those old guys. After careful consideration, Li Mu dispelled this idea. Instead of being squeezed dry by those old guys, he would rather stay in Shindu and be squeezed dry by the Empress. However, the Empress hadn't squeezed him dry recently. The government offices weren't open, and there were no reports to read. Li Mu's daily life was nothing more than playing mahjong, cultivating and repairing the Dao Bell. The cracks on the Dao Bell were almost invisible to the naked eye, but if the bell grew larger, the cracks would still be very obvious. At present, Li Mu could use it as an offensive Dharma artifact, and it could also protect Li Mu. If he wanted to restore it to its original state and have the power to protect a mountain gate, he would have to wait for it to be completely repaired. However, Li Mu didn't have any new Dharma arts in his mind. Without Dharma arts that hadn't appeared in this world, he wouldn't be able to obtain the origin energy of heaven and earth. Li Mu didn't know of any other methods to obtain the origin energy of heaven and earth. He could only put this matter aside for the time being, and leave the Dao Bell by his side for the time being. Even if he didn't have any new Dharma arts, the Dao Bell would be able to repair itself within 10 years. Li Mu walked out of Changel Palace, patted the Dao Bell on his shoulder and said, "You can only stay by my side for a while longer." The Dao Bell buzzed in response. Li Mu suddenly looked ahead and saw a figure slowly walking toward Changel Palace. Judging from the figure, it seemed to be a woman. She was wearing a black cloak and a black bamboo hat, and her aura was obscure as she walked slowly to the entrance of Changel Palace. She looked at Li Mu, who was standing at the entrance of Changel Palace, and asked, "What's your name?" Li Mu sized her up and said, "Li Mu." The woman in black nodded slightly and then asked, "Little Li, is Her Majesty in Changel Palace?" Chapter 398. Changel Palace. Li Mu already knew the identity of the woman in black. She was the commander of the Chrysanthemum Guards, the Orchid, Bamboo and Chrysanthemum Guards. Li Mu had never seen her before. According to the title of Commander of the Internal Guards, Li Mu should call her Lady Chrysanthemum. The Chrysanthemum Guards were the Empress's external intelligence organization. They were responsible for monitoring the movements of the Ghost Realm, the Demon Nation, the Demon Sect and other powerful enemies of the Great Zhou. It was said that many of the Chrysanthemum Guards had infiltrated these forces and were important spies for the imperial court. Zhou looked at the woman in black and asked, "You suddenly returned to Shindu. Did the Demon Sect make a big move?" The woman in black glanced at Li Mu and said to Zhou, "Your Majesty, this is a matter of great importance. If it is not handled well, it will be a catastrophe for the Great Zhou and even the entire righteous path." Zhou understood her meaning and said, "He is one of us. If you can tell me something, you can also tell him." The woman in black didn't expect the Empress to trust a man so much, but she didn't dare to question the Empress. She looked away from Li Mu and said, "Your Majesty, the Demon Sect found the Demon Emperor White Emperor's cave." The Empress, who had always been indifferent, showed a serious expression when she heard this news. She asked, "Is the news true?" The woman in black nodded and said, "One of my spies risked exposing his identity to spread this news. The Demon Sect has been searching for the White Emperor's cave for hundreds of years. Recently, they made a major breakthrough and confirmed the approximate location of the White Emperor's cave." "What Demon Emperor White Emperor?" Li Mu was confused and couldn't help but ask, "Your Majesty, who is Demon Emperor White Emperor? What happened to his cave?" The woman in black looked at Li Mu and frowned. "Which commander do you work for? How can you be so unruly? Is this a place where you can interrupt?" Li Mu pursed his lips. If it wasn't for the Empress's serious expression, he wouldn't have interrupted even if she asked him to. He said to the Empress, "Your Majesty, Lady Chrysanthemum, and you have important matters to discuss. I will leave first." Joey said, "Come back. Li Mu, this is not the place for this subject to interrupt. This subject should leave first. Stop fooling around." Joey rubbed her eyebrows helplessly. She looked at the woman in black and said, "When you see him in the future, treat him like you see me. Don't say those words again." The woman in black stared blankly at Li Mu. The shock in her heart could not be any greater. Had His Majesty's trust in this person reached such a level? After regaining her senses, she lowered her head and said in a deep voice, "Yes." Zhou looked at Li Mu again and explained, "Demon Emperor Bai Di was a powerful demon 3,000 years ago. His cultivation had reached the 9th realm. Today, most of the major demon clans' orthodoxies were passed down from him. Thus, he was respectfully called Demon Emperor by the demon clans. Although the Demon Emperor passed down the demon orthodoxies, he had no direct disciples. His lifespan ended, and after he died, no one inherited his cave abode. Bai Di, Demon Emperor, powerful demon? Li Mu still could not imagine how powerful he was with such words. It was only when the Empress mentioned the 9th realm that Li Mu realized that this demon was actually so powerful. In Li Mu's eyes, the 7th realm was already very powerful. The Empress could teleport, plant flowers, and even chase him into his dreams to beat him up. These were only the abilities of the 7th realm. How powerful would the legendary 9th realm be? But when he thought about how even someone as powerful as the 9th realm only had a lifespan of 300 years, Li Mu felt that it was not that interesting anymore. Powerful cultivators who could reverse yin and yang and mediate destiny would be embarrassed to tell others that they were immortal cultivators if they did not live for thousands of years. They had painstakingly cultivated to the 9th realm, but they had only lived less than 200 years longer than normal people. Moreover, the 300 years of their lives had been spent in boring cultivation. What was the point of cultivating here and there? The Empress continued, "It is said that in the Demon Emperor Bai Di's cave abode, there are many magic treasures and spirit herbs." Li Mu said in surprise, "No matter how good the quality of those magic treasures and spirit herbs are, after 3,000 years, they will lose all their spiritual chi and become ordinary objects, right?" The Empress nodded and said, "The magic treasures will be damaged and the spirit herbs will lose their effectiveness. But even after 3,000 years the Tao page will not change at all." Li Mu was shocked and said, "There is a Tao page in the Demon Emperor Bai Di's cave abode?" The Empress said, "This was not a secret at the time. It was because he comprehended part of the Tao page that he was able to pass down the teachings of the demon race. Later people guessed that the Tao page he had recorded the cultivation methods of the demon race in the world. In the current cultivation world, if there was any treasure that was the most precious, it would undoubtedly be the Tao page. Obtaining a Tao page would allow one to establish a sect and pass down their teachings. The 6 sects of Taoism and the various sects of the demon path all inherited their teachings from the Tao page. Over the past 10,000 years, even though the factions had been improving and innovating on the basis of the Tao pages and had made great progress, they had to admit that the cultivation world had only developed for a short period of time. It was still a long way from reaching the peak of the previous era. The scene Li Mu saw from the Fulu School's Tao page had already proved this point. The cultivation of this era was temporarily behind the previous era. The Tao page was at least an item from the previous era. In other words, obtaining the Tao page would allow one to obtain an even more powerful inheritance. He finally understood why Lady Ju and the Empress were so nervous. If this Tao page was obtained by the righteous path, it would be fine. But if it was obtained by the demon path's demon sect, it would be disastrous. The demon path's demon sect was different from ordinary demons. Among the demons there were good and kind demons like Xiao Bai, Baiyin and Bai Tingxin. But there were also evil demons that fed on the essence and blood of humans. The demon path's demon sect was established by these fallen demons. If the demon path's demon sect obtained this Tao page and comprehended an even more powerful demon art from it, it would be a huge blow to the Great Zhou and the righteous path. The demon race originally had an innate advantage. If they obtained a more complete and higher level cultivation method, they might be able to create a force that was not weaker than the 6 sects of Taoism within a few years. The black-clothed woman said solemnly, "Your Majesty, we must prevent the demon sect from obtaining the Tao page. Otherwise it will lead to a disaster." Zhou nodded and said, "I understand. This Tao page must not fall into the hands of the demon path." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Your Majesty, why don't we let the 3 consecrators of the consecration department go? With their strength, It won't be a problem for them to sweep through the demon path's demon sect and obtain the Tao page. Zhou Yi shook his head and said, they won't be able to enter Demon Emperor White Emperor's cave abode. Li Mu was puzzled. Why? Zhou Yi explained, the reason why his cave abode has not been discovered for so many years is because this cave abode is a flask space that he created himself. An ownerless flask space is unstable. If cultivators above the 6th realm enter, the cave abode will immediately collapse. All living beings in the cave abode will be wiped out by the power of space. Li Mu was stunned. In other words, cultivators above the 6th realm could not enter White Emperor's cave abode at all? Without 6th realm cultivators, what was there to be afraid of? Li Mu looked at the Empress confidently and said, don't worry, Your Majesty. I will definitely bring that Tao page back. The woman in black looked at the Empress and said in shock, Your Majesty? The Empress nodded and said, let one of the high consecrators accompany you. If anything happens, he can take care of you. The woman in black was confused. 6th realm cultivators could not enter White Emperor's cave abode. In order to prevent the Tao page from falling into the hands of the demon path, shouldn't the imperial court send all the high consecrators below the 6th realm? Hearing Her Majesty's words, it seemed like she planned to let this person go alone. She had been undercover in the Yao nation for a year. After returning to the divine capital, she realized that her thoughts could not keep up with Her Majesty's. No, she had to ask Shangguanli what was going on. Not long after, at the entrance of Chang'e Palace, Shangguanli nodded and said, if he goes personally, you don't have to worry. The woman in black scratched her head and said in disbelief, who is he? Why do you and Her Majesty trust him so much? In Chang'e Palace, Li Mu was still thinking. For a moment, he wanted to go to White Emperor's cave abode alone and take back that Tao page. However, after thinking about it carefully, that was still a bit reckless. Although he was confident in his own strength, he had to be careful on the path of cultivation. He could not underestimate others. If he failed miserably, he would die without even a chance to regret it. Moreover, the Yao sect had planned this for hundreds of years. If they did not send out all their elites for this operation, he might not be able to handle it alone. His beautiful life had just begun. Thinking of Lu Hanyin, Li Qing, Wanwan, Xiaobai, the Empress, he decided to play it safe. This time he planned to bring all the high consecrators at the peak of the 5th realm with him. In addition, he also wanted to borrow some people from Fulu School to ensure that nothing went wrong. Li Mu took out a sound transmission talisman. After Lu Hanyin went to White Cloud Mountain, she would probably return this talisman to Shenjizi. He did not know what Shenjizi was busy with. Li Mu urged the talisman several times, but there was no response. White Cloud Mountain, main peak Taoist Palace. 6 tall white jade chairs floated in the void. Fulu School's headmaster, Shenjizi, sat in the main seat. The other 5 chairs were occupied by 4 men and 1 woman. They were all phantoms. The only middle-aged woman said, congratulations, fellow Taoist Shenjizi. You have gained a beloved disciple. I will prepare a generous gift for the disciple acceptance ceremony. A middle-aged man beside her said, I also want to congratulate fellow Taoist Yuzenzi for ascending to transcendence. Fulu School has gained another powerhouse. Shenjizi cupped his hands and said, thank you, fellow Taoists. Then, as if he sensed something, he said to the crowd, please wait for a moment. He stretched out his hand. A white light flashed in his palm and a wooden box appeared. Shenjizi inserted his magic power and asked briefly, Junior brother, what's the matter? In Chang'e Palace, Li Mu contacted Shenjizi several times, but there was no response. Just as he was about to give up, Shenjizi's voice finally came from the wooden box. Li Mu cleared his throat and said, there is a very important matter. This matter concerns the foundation of Fulu School. The Imperial Court has received accurate news that the Demon Path's monster sect has discovered Monster Emperor White Emperor's cave abode. There is a Tao page in the cave abode. I have to get it and not let the Demon Path get it. Senior brother, remember to send a few peak manifestation realm elders over. Remember not to tell anyone about this. Monster Emperor White Emperor. Leave behind the cave abode. The Tao page. In the Tao Palace, the phantoms of the other 5 headmasters were stunned. Shenjizi was extremely regretful. The matter of the Tao page was extremely important. He should have waited for these people's phantoms to dissipate before contacting Li Mu. In Chang'e Palace, Li Mu saw that Shenjizi did not speak and frowned. Senior brother, this is a great opportunity to realize your dream of revitalizing Fulu School. Can you punch the South sect, kick the North sect, lead Xuanzong? Make the Pill Cauldron and Spirit Array sects submit to you and become the head of the 6 Taoist sects? It all depends on this. Senior brother, say something. There was suddenly no sound from the voice transmission box. Li Mu turned it over and looked at it. He was puzzled. Strange, why is there no sound? Is there no signal here? In the Dao Palace of the main peak of Baiyin Mountain, Xian Jizi looked at the unfriendly gazes of the 5 people, and an awkward expression appeared on his face. Fellow Taoist Xian Jizi, you really are a good headmaster of Fulu School. Fellow Taoist, you have big dreams. Umph. The other 5 headmasters looked at Xian Jizi and mocked him. Xian Jizi looked at them and suddenly waved his sleeves. A spiritual energy storm swept out, and the 5 primordial spirit phantoms were instantly blown away. Then Xian Jizi stood up and said in a low voice, "All 5th realm elders of the various peaks, come to the Dao Palace of the main peak to see me." His voice soon echoed throughout the entire White Cloud Mountain. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.